to swallow. Open your eyes and look about you please before you become irate with one, Ashta. I only repeat what ones before me have presented to you and you heed not. I come from the Intergalactic Federation to assist. I do no magic nor hocus pocus. If there is to be magic, you ones will do it and you had better be started at it. In preface, I will comment on timely things to hold in your hearts as you move forward in this document. Firstly, that we from this cosmic dimension honor ones who dare to speak truth. Secondly, I will mention a few things which will tend to cause you to know the truth lies within this book. You are fed one continual string of lies, each one more deadly to you than the prior one. Let me just point out a few things from just yesterday's news on your so-called news projections. 1. You launched another peacekeeper missile which had to be destroyed. They told you the previous 15 or 18 had been successful. Lie. We monitor those missiles and if they bear nuclear warheads, why do you think they test hydrogen bombs in Nevada constantly? They are not allowed past 150 miles from your surface. Out of 6 launched from Vandenberg in 1987, for instance, 5 were stopped, at least 2 of them with our craft present, photographed and noted from your communication desk at the base. The one allowed forth was a tracking satellite to boost the scatter shield but a spy unit and not armed with nuclear explosive of damaging nature. Further, your success rate of space missiles is more like 19 failures out of 20 launches. We do not need intervene, your industry is so infested with rot and corruption, drug use, and greed that you have naught but faulty equipment. The marvel is that your failure rate is not really 20 out of 20. You have launched nothing which does not contain errors, some simply do not pull your craft to destruction. Some, we electronically correct so that your courageous human crews are not murdered. Drug wars? Your own controlling elements made drugs prevalent for reasons covered in Spacegate. It is now totally out of control. Worse, dear ones, is that there is an antidote which would neutralize the addictive traits to all of the most addictive substances. It will not be brought forth until the problem is far, far worse. Your whole economy hangs in the balance of drug money. The antidotes will come forth when your leaders can bring you under total control after you have lost all of your ability to defend yourself through taxes, money control, and weapon controls. Commander Hayton of Galactic Command, in Spacegate, The Veil Removed, speaks of government participation in the drug problems and President Bush's complicity and actual personal participation. Documentation of this material can be obtained via The Secret Government, by Milton William Cooper. Mr. Cooper also gives an excellent review of exactly what happened at President John Kennedy's assassination. Mr. Kennedy was moving against the controlling groups and your own Secret Service personnel killed him. One program Mr. Kennedy was pushing magnificently, was this very program to provide the citizenry of America a survival civil defense shelter system. I am most indebted to Mr. Cooper. Planned depression coming soon. You are headed for an immediate depression which is equally well planned, see spiral to economic disaster, operationally controlled by a select few. You have no basis for money and I would like to give you a today's subject of terror. A true scenario of just one small facet of your banking disaster. Your computer credit money is eating you alive. Of course it is only one head of the multi-headed beast. Vast sums of credit dollars whirl around the globe, over $1 trillion a day in America alone. These are handled over 2 transfer systems, Fedwire and CHIPS. Fedwire is a service of the Federal Reserve System, CHIPS is operated by the privately owned New York Clearinghouse Association. About 140 domestic and foreign depository institutions do business with CHIPS. According to the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, who keeps track of such things, these 2 outfits wire transfer more than $1 trillion of payments per business day. But that isn't the big problem. These banks and thrifts not only send this money around in unbelievable sums, the average transfer is a mere $4.5 million, but they habitually overdraw big sums as well. The average business day overdraft is $130 billion, according to your own Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis as of January 1989. Think what happens if the bank that borrowed the money for the day went broke and couldn't pay back the loan? The Fed is supposed to make up the funds. What if a computer breaks down? What if many banks get hit at one time? Some of these major transfers are from deliberately set up holding companies intended to go broke. What if? Dr. King is writing a nice accurate document explaining this very bizarre added risk for your money. But it is all in the well-planned blueprint. Human Americans. About 2 years ago your Bank of New York overdrew $25 billion and the Fed gave them an overnight credit for $25 billion with their computer and then collected $5 million of interest on that loan the very next day. Looks like lots of trouble in River City, to me, friends. Who is going to make up all this money? Taxpayers. And how? You seem to have a major problem handling the drug war. Just in California, the budget deficit for 1990 is $49 billion, and the governor said he will get the revenue from increased taxes and sales. It just doesn't work out in cosmic arithmetic. I continue to urge you to get Dr. King's material, How is in Spiral to Economic Disaster. You are going to have a massive depression and money system collapse. It is the only way they can get you all onto a credit card debit system whereby every facet of your life will be monitored and controlled. Further, you march like little soldiers to the firing squad. For credibility dash. To give credibility to the statements made by myself toward the end of this book, I want to note something. I tell you that I guarantee that your government will send double the amount of funding to the Soviet Union and communist allies than would cost you to build an entire civil defense system for your people who are destined to annihilation. On your news yesterday, September 14, 1989, Your government pledged monies and goods with debts forgiven, that is free, and low-interest loans and industrial goods and technology to the Soviet leader visiting your country. Mr. Bush already pledged $1.3 billion and now you are pouring more billions into Poland alone. You are being set up beyond return, citizens. Not only is it pre-set up, but in a week past Journal on News it stated the same thing. Now this is just for one nation, dear ones. While you have no survival shelter defense, no stored grain in your shelter silos -- you supplied all the grain to be utilized in Russia's massive underground system of survival shelters. Further, now you are going to send surplus grain by the zillions of tons to Poland to help the communists look like good guys, and you still have no means of surviving a nuclear attack, nor do you have any emergency supplies or food stored where you can get at them in an emergency natural upheaval, and you allow it to go on and on and on. God helps those who. If you are planning to just wait for God to do it for you, I have terrible news. It does not work in that manner. God demands hands and action. The enemy, Satan, has the abundance of helpers in every tiny detail of your existence. So far they are winning. What can you do? You get up onto your feet, face the problem, get out of your self-perceived helplessness and lethargy, move into action as a mass of citizens and save your assets. We will assist you, we will not do it for you. It is up to you what you choose to do about it. In friendship we stand by ready to serve as you petition. We will soon be quite visible to your masses. We come only in love and peace. We are here to bring our workers home in the event human Earth man does not respond and keep your planet from blowing itself away and damaging our cosmic order within the sector of the galactic system. So be it. I salute those of you who hear and see truth and dare to respond in positive action. It is past time you stop being helpless people of the lie. We come in the service of God. We come from no sanctimonious religious order or doctrine or club or cult affiliation. We come in the service of God and the creation, in brotherhood for man. The time is at hand to set things to right, for you are in the final stages of the forgiven prophecies of transitional changes for Earth herself. What happens to you as individual souls is extremely important to you but those are your choices to make, not ours. Ours is to give you information in truth that you can know how it is, then your decisions will be the guidelines. We will remain and assist any way we can. If you continue to be hostile and refuse to see truth, our workers will be removed and you shall play out your cycle without help. So be it, and Sela. I beseech you to read these documents which are being brought forth in computer circuit format from our realms unto yours. Your world is in chaos and crisis. I implore you to heed the messages and recognize the truth of it. We do not just give you stories about it, we tell you what our scanners show that you can do to alter probabilities. We will do nothing more at this time. I am Commander Ashta to sign off and clear circuit out. Critical notation. Rec number 4 Ashta. Friday, September 15, 1989, 11:30 a.m., Year 3, Day 030. As you read this hook you will note it deals with the probability of attack by the Soviet Union. In view of the current happenings, you will probably refuse to take the warning seriously. Do not make such an error. In a world of impending disaster, you find yourselves with strange bedfellows. As recently as 1986, your historians could only assume the nuclear war would be a first strike attack by the Soviets. It is still a most possible tactic. However, it is not likely. It is not likely because you and Russia need to be allied. Commander Hayton has been giving his people detailed input for 2 years as to how and when things would happen. You have all the pieces in place for your final prophecies to spiral into the last act. Your deadliest enemy, and it will happen through war upon the Soviets, is Red China. Mark this well, for it indicates that you might, if you act quickly, get yourself prepared. While you ones of the world have not been included in public pronouncements from inside Red China, they have perfected weapons which diminish the value of either yours or the Soviets. They have a superbly completed tunnel survival system and some 500 million nuclear-armed troops available. It only required 200 million to meet all prophetic requirements. The war will undoubtedly be started through irrational acts in the Middle East. How many are aware that Israel tested a medium-range nuclear-capable missile successfully just yesterday? September 14, 1989, they already had military capability. This one is awesome, and guess where it came from? The Middle East situation cannot continue unchanged for very much longer. Further, the Arabs do business with China and have a whole string of silkworm-type long-range missiles with nuclear capability in place and ready to use. Please see Spacegate. The world is sitting atop a magnificent time bomb with the players in the act of choosing up partners. Pay attention. While all this is taking formation act. Get busy and get your security shelters prepared. If it continues according to our probabilities, the US will be a third party to the conflagration and may well miss the first direct attack. This does not mean you will be left untouched, but it does mean that with care, you will survive to build another day. Move right on through, beloved ones, as if the Soviets were going to pull the first strike attack within the year, and you shall be prepared. Further, look about you at the signs of the times. It is not only the Christos one who has given them unto you, but he pretty well sums it up. Now learn the parable from the fig tree. When its branch has become tender, and puts forth its leaves, you will know that summer is near. Well, brothers, summer is about over and the tree is past full leafing. You have every sign falling all about you. We will cover the subject of these end times, and already have, to great extent. However, I want no further distractions from the contents of this document. It becomes an unavoidable fact that if you do not get into operation a good civil defense system of excellent survival shelters, you will not need any of the alternative plans which your government or your religious leaders will put forth. One group is, at present, just as misleading as the other. No one is going to whoosh down and save you from your careless foolishness. Faith without works will merit thee not, works without God's grace will merit thee not. It is a time for men to see and hear truth and turn from the lies of thine evil foes. Read this document carefully, and then I suggest a very poor night's sleep for you. You are in the process of committing suicide by act of murder by those set forth to care for you. You have been sorely lied unto. You still have time if you act now. I am Ashta. Chapter 1. Rec number 1, Ashta. Friday, September 8, 1989,7:00 a.m., Year 3, Day 023. Why does man wait until it is all but too late? Because man expects another to take care of him. Man has even found a way to place his eternal salvation on a single poor entity whom was crucified for and instead of himself. Further, ones get before great crowds of believing brothers and scream, all you have to do is believe. Well, it is right and it is wrong. No one can do it for another, and if you believe it can be done for you, you are going to spend a long time wishing you had believed otherwise. Ashta present to speak on these matters of survival and transition. Greetings. Survival. Is it too late? For most, yes. However, you must never roll over and give up. It is not too late for all ones. To cover this adequately will require backup information which you will find most unpleasant. You must have underground shelters. Hear me, you must have underground shelters. There are countries upon your planet who have provided for the populace in very suitable underground dwellings and shelters. Some of those very countries will not survive due to Earth's natural changes, but can survive much of Earth's cleansing as well as man's stupidity and nuclear fracas. Again, I am only going to deal specifically with the United States of America. Further, I will assume that all ones will utilize selective thought to understand that I also expect ones in specific, but unnamed locales, to pay attention. There are places which shall represent models in many categories, and I will not place those centers in jeopardy. Dearly beloved, it is not particularly intended that you ones survive. Your governments are working out the plans of thinning the populations, and it is coming together in magnificent form. Oh, it is more pointed than that 'tis a group that will fall. It will be the ones who appear most expendable, the unproductive ones, the lesser classes and the real troublemakers. Therefore we will not make trouble, no pickets, no harangues. We will assist you in handling survival in all respects, through this betroubled time. This does not mean you cease to take a stand and speak out, else how can your brother recognize errors, but you knowledge, wisdom, and intelligence. Set up for self-enslavement. As we have discussed with you, the government will get it set up so that you demand more and more restrictions on you, as the innocent citizens. Do you really think the criminal element, the drug pushers and the mafia are going to give up their weapons? Of course not. But you, the people, will badger the government to the point that there will be laws, lots and lots of laws passed, to ensure that the ordinary citizen has no means remaining to himself, for protection. You will do it, you are already doing it. Further, you will demand to pay more taxes to bring an end to the drug problem. How is that? Do you think any amount of money will bring it into control? The paltry show of power and rot in Colombia, for instance, is one of the biggest farces you will ever witness. And the new program on drugs, the war on drugs. You are blind, little ones. It is the very group that will run the drug war that set the game up in the beginning. You will simply vote away more of your resources until they have you willingly, right where they want you. You are all but there. What of crime? How can it get anything but worse? Further, if you cannot ship in drugs from elsewhere, where do you think they will come from? You have a world full of addicted humans. They will get drugs, my friends, any way they have to. It will be through crimes of such savage nature that you will tremble in your beds at night. While you have religiously tried to figure out what is meant by the beast, you have been consumed by the dragon, chewed up and ready to be swallowed, and you have demanded it. You have gone to sleep only to wake up and find everything you have stolen, mutilated, or terrorized. While you squabble over where a local sewer line shall run, your community, peoples, and places have become cesspools of varying degrees of corruption, for it is the nature of the beast. Face it, nuclear problems abound. Face facts. We will speak of nuclear exchange, for that is what you will have, along with everything else, at least to some degree, as well as there will be nuclear spillage from your testing and power production units. You have a mighty problem facing you if nothing else happens. You have been lied to, hidden from, and sorely manipulated by the super top secret government that has been birthed from what was established to govern and care for you. As we have recently told you, you are sitting ducks while they have been building safety places for themselves. Further, their plans are working to perfection, right down to the creation of more overbearing and unsubstantiated money without running the presses. They are setting you up for a fall from which you will never recover. See it and utilize fully everything you can to maximize your position to the optimum for safety and self-reliance. There are urgent needs for places for investors and banks, etc., to fund in the form of good industrial projects. These are mandatory in order to continue the sham use it. The big takeovers and mergers are the death throes prior to calling the cards. They do, however, have to keep some semblance of normal business transactions in action to continue the facade. There are plans to leave you helpless in a crumbled economy. Well, you use this inside knowledge to We will be giving you the means whereby you can assist yourselves use them. Use it or lose it. If you do not choose to utilize our assistance, then I request you not later, after the fact, come unto these ones, who have tended the Master's guidelines, to save you. If you choose to believe that this cannot be truth, so be it. It is your choice, but you had better be very, very careful, for your last lifeboat is just about ready to depart the dock. You have no defense. Defense systems. You have no defense systems. The only thing that saves you, let us say, from the Russians, which you pretend to fear, is the fact that you are secret allies. You couldn't stop an atomic attack even if the Soviets, the Iranians, the Turks, the Greeks, the Colombians, etc., were using cargo planes, or passenger planes perhaps, and rolling the bombs out the hatches by hand. More, you would find that the planes and bombs would probably be made by your own companies, made in America for Americans. Sent forth and then re-imported. You ones do tend to like imported goods. On your news media today, there is a little blurb whereby they tout the wondrous technology being carried out at a little obscure town in California. It is regarding an airport, and wondrous things are going on, like advanced technology being researched, and a jet fighter plane being remodeled to carry and drop cluster bombs with nuclear capability. Who are you going to drop them on? Do you even know what a cluster bomb is? Do you even care? How about trying one out on Super Bowl Sunday? You do not see that forest of devastation, capability and intent for that tree in front of your vision, will Jimmy Bakker win or lose? So be it. Most Americans assume either that somehow civil defense and the government takes care of these problems, or else they assume that it's not needed anymore. Some will even vaguely remember something about bomb shelters from the 60s, but they believe that whatever it was that scared everybody must somehow have gone away. Or, they may think that a nuclear war will end the world, so it is useless to think about civil defense. Neither assumption is correct. You, I would wager, do not even remember what caused the scare in the 60s. It was something called the Cuban Missile Crisis. That is but a pale memory, or gone completely. What is going on right now in your own hemisphere is so vastly more threatening today that you cannot relatively compare. Now, I am going to give you some provocative thoughts. A nuclear war would not end the world. We of these cosmic realms are not to allow it to come to that point, however. It will end most of life forms like yours. You can take precautions, and it does not have to be that way. I will get around to telling you exactly what to do, but I am going to make you read a great many facts. First, some can survive. 28% of the world's population has good civil defense shelters, including the residents of Switzerland, China, and the Soviet Union. What does that tell you? That, along with the massive underground top-secret shelter system to save your own government, it should tell you that the truth lies in the books prior to this one. Spacegate. The veil removed and spiral to economic disaster. You will truly find that truth most surely is stranger than fantasy. You ones want to believe that you are basically the good guys and everyone else is a composite of the bad guys. Well, even if the perception were correct, what would you have? When good and evil are placed in opposition to one another, good usually triumphs over evil. However, when good and evil make pacts with one another, evil will triumph. It has ever been thus. You are dealing with those who denounce God and the Christ path. In other words, you make your pacts with Satan in a most roundabout manner. Peace at all cost is not peace, it is slavery enforced by terror, and you are in it. Dharma, please take a brief break and conference with Oberly to see if this format is helpful. It will require more of our time, but if it saves greatly elsewise, let us utilize it. I move to standby. Ashta clear. Chapter 2. Rec number 2, Ashta. Friday, September 8, 1989, 11:15 a.m., Year 3, Day 023. Myths and Nonsense. Ashta to resume. Let us clear the space, please. The most blatant myth of your American military defense is that you are being defended. You are not being defended. Have you ever heard of a game called Russian roulette? Well, you are now playing it with particle beams and hydrogen warheads. The Russian government has not changed any at base foundation, and the peoples were never the cause of animosity. When total enemies form a brotherhood, watch out. Peace is never the outcome at a human level. It is not Russia as such, that is your enemy. It is a concept of basic spiritual opposites. I do not wish to dwell on the who of this problem. Let us say it is any nation that begins a holocaust. The who is unimportant after the bombs start busting in air, following the rocket's red glare. Let us deal with practicality. List of lies to deceive you. I will hereby point out some facts given forth to you which are lies. 1. Nobody could survive an airburst nuclear explosion directly overhead at maximum destruction height. 2. Few living creatures would survive an all-out atomic attack on the US, except in the most rural areas. 3. The modern world would be thrown back into the Dark Ages. It would take 1,000 years to rebuild. Well, you are headed back to the Dark Ages if you do not take care, but this is not the reason. And 4. Civil defense is impractical and incredibly expensive. That is why no nation ever spends much money on civil defense. The truth, friends, is that, 1. No unprotected person could survive a blast overhead at optimum burst height, but virtually 100% of those inside properly designed shelters could and would survive if they had as little as 10 extra feet of dirt and a properly designed shelter in between them and the blast. 2. Most living creatures would survive if they were over 5 miles from a blast, assuming the bombs had been exploded above ground without much fallout. Even with extensive fallout, natural environment of plants and animals would be re-established within a few years. Note: even with the atomic blasts in Japan, the cities are completely rebuilt. Of course there are magnificent problems involved, we speak here of survival. 3. People with knowledge and faith are what make an economy, not buildings. If most of the population could get into bomb shelters before an attack, then America's crucial resource would survive, that is people. 4. The Soviets, and I must use them as example because this is the target of your belief in enemy form and the numbers involved are staggering, have enough nuclear weapons to kill over 90% of the US population, because America has no bomb shelters except for the elite few, in government and military groups. The US could not kill more than 5% of the Soviet population, because they do have massive shelters, and they do have a strategic defense system pretty well operational. They spend the equivalent of about $40 billion a year on shelters, the actual deployment of anti-ballistic missiles and radars, and real Star War research. You see, you ones who have touted the Star Wars farce have spent your money on a massive satellite system for the gray men banking concerns while the Russians could spend their resources on the real thing. The ones who count are taken care of under your Lend-Lease policy of sharing technology, etc. 5. The Soviet Union publishes its military strategy repeatedly and it always sort of boils down to let someone strike first somewhere in the world, then strike out as a country first and magnificently. That first little blast heard around the world will probably come out of your Middle East where you big boys play war through the little fanatical people who do the dying while utilizing your toys. 6. The US has no public defense system at all, none. The entire defense strategy is based on nuclear retaliation after a Soviet nuclear attack. Even that retaliatory threat is no longer backed by credible military ability, my friends. You have diverted too much money into the secret lie, cover UPS, and space travel that only includes a very, very few of you. 7. Excellent civil defense systems already protect 28% of the world's populations, Soviet citizens, Red Chinese citizens and of course, the Swiss. Where do the bankers and Bilderbergers house their headquarters? Open your eyes, little sleepyheads, and put your puzzle together. 8. Now, the one that will really hurt you, you could have a safe fallout shelter system based on $200 per person for the blast and fallout shelter, plus an additional $100 per person for food, tools, and other items to aid in survival and reconstruction after an attack. Crowding would be eliminated for an additional $50 per person. These low prices would, of course, depend upon relatively large 150-person shelters and savings from mass production and procurement during a large building program. You obviously could not install shelters in your backyard for 5 people at those prices per person. However, I point out the figures in this segment for the government's lack of programs and shelter provision which is presently under discussion. I will get to details as compiled for you, in proper order. What is completely fascinating to us of these distant realms is the lack of forethought. You build massive underground structures to park your overcrowding, polluting vehicles when you could have a fallout bomb, natural disaster shelter under every parking structure, building, school, park, and playground in your country for the amazing sum of about $1,000 per person and live in relative comfort, have abundant food and water supply for a sufficient period of time, a base from which to live and rebuild and on and thus and so. Where are your values and priorities? Could this not be a requirement of every new building structure established much as a required approved sewer system, water, and gas supply to all building sites codes, I believe you call them? Community possibilities. Could not communities require these additions? Would it not be a worthy community project, to protect its citizens? Could it not be a worthy project for municipal bonding? You have some rough times coming in the form of seasonal extremities, earth changes such as 10.5 earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, volcanic fallout, and nuclear accidents. More money is wasted on committees to study these things than the cost of simply doing it. Further, why don't you propose a tunnel system? You need more than just the ability to jump into a safe hole and exist for an indefinite time. Have underground tunnels. The Chinese do. Of course the Chinese had to dig the tunnels all by hand labor. You once can move in your big machinery and build the whole thing faster than you can put up a big building, for the shelters do not need be the Hilton Hotel equivalent. However, I will speak of that also, for on your place, you could have both in one structure. Your homes could be built and integrate both in magnificent beauty. In the US, any engineering done on the subject proposes modular, non-tunnel systems simply because they are cheaper. However, since your leaders have been somewhat less than truthful about your upcoming dangers, and also about the potential of blast shelters to eliminate that danger, even these less expensive systems do not get deployed. It is time you once do something. What is in store for your so-called future is just about to happen, so I most affectionately suggest you go to work at the situation now. Look at China. Let me paint just a small picture of Peking, China. The entire city has tunnels under it, with entrances from every store, every apartment building, every residence, and every public facility. Inside the tunnels are kitchens, running water supply, sanitary facilities, food storage in great abundance, medical facilities, all in complete readiness for instant use. They are constantly maintained on both voluntary and paid-for-service basis, for it involves family units and interconnecting tunnels, roadways, to get to locations from any point to any point. If there should accidentally be a blockage in one tunnel, there are mapped alternate routes. All can be completely sealed from air leakage or water seepage. You basically have underground city facilities with backup food and survival supplies that are guarded and never touched. The penalty for stealing or endangering that system of survival goods is unthinkable. This is only an example. This is developed under every city and village appropriate to the number of inhabitants and extra to provide for transients to the city. Let me shock you, China has expended more person-hours of labor and more materials to build tunnels under her cities to tend her populace than were utilized to build the Great Wall. Dear ones, no one the Soviet Union or your government will utilize a nuclear strike against China. You would expend your precious warheads and they would come up out of the ground and devour you in the twinkling of an eye. In the end, they will get most ones anyway. While you slept and played at Tinker Toys and baseball, China built a bastion against which no country can prevail. How about the Soviet Union? The Soviets have spent the equivalent of about $100 billion on civil defense systems. They also spend an ongoing $20 to $30 per year per person to maintain the shelters, improve civil defense training, warning systems, and in the addition of more shelter systems. The problem, of course, is that the shelters were built against nuclear attack. This has left the less strategic target areas unprotected in most instances, but the intent is to widen the areas. You see, these were all built, in all instances, as nuclear war shelters. You ones must build for the intent of natural disasters also. Do not err in that if you have no bomb blast, you need not of tunnels and caves. Oh yes you do. In the Soviet Union, about 100,000, or more, full-time civilian and military personnel are involved in civil defense during peacetime, plus up to 20 million part-time personnel. There are millions of volunteers involved in training and preparation. The children have extensive drills and instructions on survival. In the higher educational programs in universities, etc., it is required ancillary study. Approximately 75% of the Soviet populations are protected by blast shelters with an average of 62 pounds per square inch sure-safe blast resistance. The remaining 25% are in rural areas. The above means that the shelters are 100% safe from a 62 pound per square inch blast wave. This includes most of the airburst nuclear threat. But moreover, the ruling class have now been given 1000 psi blast protection which makes them immune to most ground bursts as well. Let us give you something against which to compare. A 5 psi blast wave will reduce a frame building to rubble. You need blast shelters which protect to a sure-safe blast resistance of around 200 psi at minimum, depending upon location. The Soviets have done quite a few intelligent things. They have scattered their industrial base across a large land mass, and a very large portion is, itself, underground or protected in other manner of ways. I will herewith use numbers from one of your own reports. Boeing Co. did a study in the 70s on this subject and concluded the following: in the event of a USSR-US nuclear war, only 25% to 50% of the targeted industrial capacity of the Soviet Union would be destroyed in the primary target areas. Supporting industries would do even better: 75% of their blast furnaces, 75% of their foundries, 90% of their machine shops, 80% of their steel fabricating facilities, and 80% of their aircraft manufacturing would survive. They could compensate for most of the damage by increasing their labor schedule from 2 shifts to 3 shifts a day. What about Switzerland? Now surely everyone on your planet knows about Switzerland: the Alps, great ski resorts, secret bank accounts, fine watches, chocolate, neutrality, 8 centuries of democratic rule, peace, and prosperity. Switzerland has not fought a war in 5 centuries. Isn't this somewhat remarkable for a little bit of a country located in the middle of endlessly war-torn Europe? What is not generally known outside of Switzerland is that the entire Swiss population is now sheltered from atomic attack. Specialists may debate just how well they are sheltered, but specialists enjoy debating anything at hand. Well, they can safely ignore your shelter security factors, for you don't have any. The Swiss are, further, a heavily armed little peace-loving, prosperous, freedom-loving, low-crime camp. Bridges are intentionally mined, the army has military bunkers all over the country, and there are high-technology defense installations. The Swiss could be defeated by the Soviet Union, but they could not be defeated before they inflicted very high losses on the invaders. They impose a high risk-reward ratio on invaders. That fact is what kept Hitler out of Switzerland. But the big stick is that the real powers of your world headquarter there at is off limits. The facts you face are that over 200 million Americans will die if the nuclear exchanges come off. If you get a civil defense system of shelters and survival facilities available, you would have a very good chance of survival. You are uniquely located to prevent occupation of major scale, and yes, you could survive as a nation. Your Star Wars games are a sham to shroud the real intent of the space system. However, these things are already in place and yours is to do with what you have. Well, brothers, I suggest you get your shovels and start digging. War is only a portion of what the shelters will ultimately serve as protection for you beloved ones. There will be winds and toxic fallouts that only underground and aerodynamic buildings can withstand. Why can you not see that you are at the ending of the cycle and these things will come upon you? Please understand that these things of the prophecies will come to pass. Ashta, to stand by for a respite please. Salut. Chapter 3. Rec number 1, Ashta. Saturday, September 9, 1989,8:00 a.m., Year 3, Day 024. Ashta present and prepared to continue. Greetings, Dharma, in the light of the radiant one and in the beauty of a glorious day. Let us first speak of current things as I am requested by Hayton to give an instruction or two. Regarding Sipapu, you will please have Nick's drawings reduced to proper size and placed appropriately within the story. Further, in the front you will reproduce Gary's 2 songs that the words can set a quality of atmosphere. You must learn to fly with the red tail, little Keela, for soon you shall be free as the magnificent essence which ye once are. And yet, a portion of each essence is left in spirit wherever it has touched, be it a wondrous teacher or an Indian maiden once you have been you can never again unbe. It is so important, therefore, that you leave wondrous and beauteous footprints upon thy passage. Even a tiny butterfly, which touches your aura, leaves of itself the beauty and oneness of a precious moment in sequence. So be it. With information man can survive. Let me explain a bit as to why I utilize descriptions, numbers, and dreadful statistics for the documents. We are not here to write beauteous novels of fantasy and fun. Earthman must face the problems in which he finds himself and he must be given these things that he can confirm for himself the truth of it. Man has had so many lies and panic situations which have been set up that he knows not which way to turn. First he must understand the problem and then he will be open for the management suggestions. I must give you background, current status, and the ability to check it out for self as to validity. As a for instance, you must know as we go along that if taken proper care and measures, you ones can survive almost anything quite nicely. Without precautions and care, you cannot survive at all, you must decide which it will be. The ones who do not wish you to survive will poo and ridicule you in an effort to dissuade you from your path. Each must have a choice, but further, others must have a guideline and model from which they can have courage to act. With civil defense measures such as evacuation of cities like Los Angeles, it is impossible. You will have panic and even if the streets are passable it will become dead gridlock and ones will be in the open where they can do naught but perish. You must use your intelligent reasoning ability. You need places where you can immediately move underground, the children at school are taken to safety and tended until they can be reunited with family units. Ones must have immediate safety and the rest can be sorted later. This is one reason you must have added quantities of supplies in certain places and a tunnel system. You must always have multiple exits from underground in case of earth upheaval which blocks passages. Radiation protection gear within the public locations that ones can be transferred prior to clearance of fallout, etc. Atomic bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I am going to tell you about your Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August of 1945, for you do not know of the truth of it. As bad as it was not as bad as you perceive. The stories that persist about horrible deaths from residual radiation and deformed children have no basis in fact. They simply are false stories. I do not downplay the importance of the incidents, but I do insist on truth or you will not act appropriately. Before the attack there were about 450,000 people in those cities. Over 100,000 people were killed in the combined raids and another 200,000 were injured. Let me compare that to something you can expect in Los Angeles alone. According to your own statistics, when the San Andreas Fault slips, you will have more than that number of casualties in LA alone. The reason, which is so much more important than statistics, is that no statistics remind you that the casualties were all ones who were not inside of shelter. The people were not prepared for the raids and were going about their business, they were not inside the shelters. Facts. At Hiroshima, the air raid warning which was given at 7 a.m. that morning was called off at 8 a.m. A radio warning was issued at 8 a.m. giving the people instructions. The people were told that they did not have to go into the shelters unless B-29 bombers were spotted, they would be kept informed. At almost the same time the radio instructions were given, 3 B-29 planes were spotted. It was assumed, since there were only 3 planes, that it was a reconnaissance mission and not a bombing raid. No one did anything for protection, in fact some ones were still within the shelters, not having made it out from the air raid all clear. At 8:15 a.m. the bomb exploded. It blew away a big chunk of Hiroshima. It also blew away the post-war hope of ever again having security in your world. 3 days later in Nagasaki, an air raid warning was sounded at 11 a.m. Exactly 2 minutes later the bomb exploded. Many people had ignored the warning as there had been an earlier one which had been cancelled at 8:30. Some people actually stood outside and watched the 2 planes approach. The bomb exploded 2 minutes after 11 a.m. Now, please don't ask Ashta why Nagasakians didn't learn from Hiroshima, for I am embarrassed to tell you the terrible news, the government did not inform Nagasaki of the incident at Hiroshima. Well, don't act so shocked, your government tells you less about matters that affect your life. Proof, you don't have any safety shelters. Let us speak of just one little lady as an example. She was standing within an earthen bomb shelter. She was about 300 feet from the entrance which had no door or other blast-resistant barrier at the end. The bomb exploded about 500 yards up and 200 yards horizontally from the shelter's entryway, or about the length of 2 of your football game fields. The blast knocked her from her feet, and she was burned on the back of her legs and on the upper part of her right arm. She was later interviewed about her experiences. Pay attention, your reporters interviewed her. No burns were inflicted on any part of her body that had been covered by clothing. Another woman even closer to the entrance, was also burned where she was uncovered, and recovered with no after effects whatsoever. Now for a big one. Around the corner from the first woman, above, approximately 12 feet away, were several other people, on their way out of the shelter. They were completely uninjured by the explosion. The tiny corner of earth barrier had been sufficient protection. Keep in mind these were simple shelters designed to protect from simple warfare, and stray bombs for the US was not given to blow up civilians at that time. You got more sophisticated and civilians have become a much more acceptable expendable item to your military. But they were small atomic bombs. These two bombs were small atomic bombs, 12 kilotons and 20 kilotons. A kilo means 1,000. Today's common nuclear bombs are anywhere from 10 to 50 times more powerful than the two bombs in terms of the equivalent number of tons of your gauge explosive, TNT, but because of the laws of physics, the bomb's effects diminish rapidly the farther away you are from the detonation. A 1 megaton bomb is 50 times more powerful than the Nagasaki bomb at the point of detonation, but its effects are not 50 times more powerful even a block in distance away from detonation. Now look, both the US and the Soviet Union have quit even deploying the older huge bombs of the early 1960s and have instead adopted a strategy of deploying many more smaller bombs. That is why the quantity buildup. It is far more devastating to a city to be hit by 10 well-targeted half-megaton bombs than by a single 5-megaton bomb, and modern technology now permits very accurate placement of the bombs. How about several nuclear warheaded cluster bombs to shower down from a stealth jet or missile which could scatter one bomb all over a widespread area for hundreds of explosions? Please refer to the little town in California of yesterday's writing. Let us speak of less devastation at a distance. I shall refer to it as remoteness dilution. The people who survived in a tunnel 200 yards from ground zero would probably have also survived a bomb 10 times as large had they been 500 yards from the explosion, and would have survived the largest bomb currently deployed, at 1,000 yards distant. Remember also, the shelter was above ground dug into the side of a dirt hill, so the blast blew straight downward and into the tunnel. If the shelter had had a blast-proof door covering, the woman would not even have been knocked from her feet, nor would she have sustained burns. My point is not to lessen the unmerciful pity of such a creation as nuclear bombs, but rather to point out that if you have sufficient underground shelters you can nicely survive. If you are prepared you will have warning time of a few minutes to take action, stop what you are doing and move to safety. What you have to have. Since your government refuses to provide you with anything at all, we will not yet even discuss luxury quarters at this point. Let us speak of stay-alive facilities. What kind of protection do you need? There are 5 things which kill people during all atomic attack: initial nuclear radiation, duration, about 1 second, heat, duration, several seconds, blast, duration, several seconds, burial or bombardment by flying or falling objects. Fallout. Look at these for a moment. The first 2 killers get you first, of course, then the blast comes shrieking toward you at approximately the speed of sound, some 700 miles per hour. That, friends, is accompanied by a wind that blows at the equivalent of 1,000 miles per hour, if you are very close, less, if you are farther away. Within a few seconds this passes, leaving behind rubble where there had been buildings and homes. It literally knocks over buildings and especially dwelling-sized structures like a magnificent bulldozer. The 4th killer is then considered a secondary effect. Bricks, debris, glass, and other objects become lethal if they are flying at you at hundreds of miles per hour. Being inside with glass windows is probable death because if the room doesn't collapse on you, which it will if you are near detonation, the flying debris and glass will kill you. Let us now consider the 5th killer, fallout. This will only occur if the bomb has exploded at ground level. Nobody was killed by fallout. Radiation in Hiroshima or Nagasaki, because the bombs were airburst detonations. When a bomb is detonated on the ground, it pulls up dirt and dust into the infamous mushroom cloud, where it then becomes radioactive. Beginning about a half hour later, this now radioactive dirt drifts down, especially downwind. If it gets on you, and you do not wash it off immediately, or if you cannot hide under a barrier, for example, of 6 feet of concrete or 10 feet of earth, it will kill you. You can survive some amount of exposure but only briefly, so you must have shelter very quickly. Fallout danger. Fallout is briefly most dangerous. It does, however, wear out quite rapidly within a couple of weeks. It is dangerous because it has a rapid rate of decay. Things that decay slowly are not dangerous, but things that decay rapidly are most hazardous. So, get away from the source right away and remain removed and protected from it for a few days, a full 2 weeks if at all possible. Away from it means a barrier of concrete or several feet of dirt. Good for you ones who build your shelter from compressed earth bricks. Sandstone. You will have all your materials and the most effective shelters you can possibly produce. I believe Henry's machinery is most sufficient, dear ones, and you really must get on with agreements, for when we get underway with community building there will be great demand for the equipment. The bricks do not have to be approved for root cellars. You can line cisterns with sealant or fabricated liners, cover with dirt and graze your cattle on top. Protection from radiation is very simple and effective with shelter. Without shelter, more than half of those killed by the attack would die from initial nuclear radiation, duration, 1 second, and the subsequent fallout. This would involve great suffering over several days or weeks, since radiation sickness is a prolonged, terrible illness. Burn and burial victims would also die slowly and in horrible agony. Smile, you are in safety if you get into a shelter that would protect you from all 5 possibilities. You can know you can survive anything except a possible nuclear explosion at ground level immediately above your heads. There won't be many of those because the military knows they do not do enough damage to structures, less bang for the buck, less rubble for the ruble. Don't lose sight of the purpose of bombs and war in the first place. What, exactly, do you as a citizen need to survive a nuclear attack? Let us take a look at your subway systems and perhaps you can see. For if you can be in a subway for a couple of weeks and can survive the muggers, a little atomic war won't bother you very much. Perhaps the pushers can drift around selling cocaine and you won't even have to notice the discomfort and crowding. I spoke of it before, but perhaps you need to see it again. Of course, I speak of large mass shelter which would each hold some 150 persons. The shelter system, which we will discuss, would cost an allocation of about $200. If civilian business does it, the sky is the limit if you allow your government to do it. This would be for the shelter space itself, plus $100 minimum per person for post-attack food, survival, and rebuilding supplies. This is the minimum for assured simple survival. An additional $50 per person would markedly improve the comfort of shelter occupants by providing each one with more space. In order to keep costs to a bare minimum, the shelters would necessarily be crowded. They would not, however, be crowded to the point of endangering life, just to the point of guaranteeing everyone's increasing discomfort and time to reflect on what if you had done it differently. We perceive that most ones will prefer crowds with no deodorant to being outside in wide open radiation. We are, however, continually amazed at what some of your people will do. What you can't see and don't know can't hurt you, is a widespread attitude. In areas where the prevailing wind is away from you, you will have no fallout and therefore exit the shelters immediately. If wind conditions result in fallout, then people will need protection from that fallout for a few days or weeks. In many places, this protection will be available outside the shelters. Where it isn't, then you will need to remain in the shelters. If you have domed buildings with cement or earthen coverings and the ability to shut off the window openings with radiation-proof substance, you have grand above-ground facilities to move up and out into. A motion picture studio of domed beauty is a fine example. The domed structure will shear the blast winds and, if anything will stand, this type structure will do so. If you have time and resources to encapsulate your home within a dome, you will be able to come up immediately and carry on. You will be okay if you build your domes to withstand 150-200 miles per hour winds in most instances and in outlying communities. In a tight shelter you'll only have about 2.3 square foot per person. About half the space on a normal class 747 airplane. For only $50 per person more you can make that 5 feet for each and on up equivalently. To achieve maximum occupancy, some people would be sleeping in hammocks that hang from the overhead ceiling while others are sitting. All others would need to be standing, so there would need to be time shifts worked out. In this basic survival cubbyhole you would only have 2 very small and limited bathroom chambers. Any additional facilities would be magnificent, for you are going to have intestinal reactions to the fear. Dastardly other deeds and needs. Your military and governments play even dirtier these days, so, not only will you need door coverings, etc. that protect you from the blast, but you have to be prepared for chemical and microbe bombardment. The shelters must have the ability to be sealed to airtight, which means you will need exceptionally good air filtration systems and good generators for pumping and circulating air. You will find that cylinders of compressed oxygen and trays of material to absorb exhaled carbon dioxide will cost about $12 per person per day. Have a minimum of 3 days supply at ready. You must have a good air circulation system to keep the temperature down. Now, the magic, you also build these over water wells. Your city can monitor the wells so that they are secured, but you must have water for drinking, although bottled water is suggested due to possible failure of your system. You will need, however, a secondary water cooling system if you are totally confined. Each shelter will also need food. This is your least necessary item for a matter of only 1 to 3 days, most of you are too overfed anyway. For basic emotional salvation you will need food. You must have water, absolutely vital, so you store it, for you must never depend on an outside source. You will need medical first aid kits, radios, and radiation meters, that have been shielded from the electromagnetic pulse. This pulse blows out electrical circuits that are attached to power lines, antennae, and unshielded circuit wires. It is also why so many circuit failures occur when our ships are near or we project the waves intentionally. It is, further, why we will get ourselves out of your space at such times as nuclear bombardment. You will need tools and how-to books and other items such as shovels, cutting torches, and fire extinguishers. Well, let us cover all that later. I will give you a list, or a place to get a list further in the book. I guess I will give it to you, as I fear most ones will not follow up on any suggestion of further effort. The subground system, as I have just outlined, is not the only way to gain the protection you need. It is just that this one could be built and activated quickly at low cost. It will work and it can save your life. It does have one major drawback, however, IT1TWORK if IT is not BUILT. A break, please, Dharma. Ashta to stand by. Salu. Chapter 4. Rec number 2, Ashta. Saturday, September 9, 1989,2:00 p.m., Year 3, Day 024. Ashta to continue. You can save your children. How is it that Americans will pay 10 times too much for a pair of blue jeans so the kids look good in what they perceive are necessities? Then, they turn their backs on their very survival, from natural disasters to nuclear war. It is not too big to handle, you have simply been lied to too often and you have capitulated. I believe all of you basically desire your children have a fighting chance at life, at least physical survival to the point of self-decision of one's life course. You would probably even give up Reeboks if you could save their very necks. You can get it done if you push your congressman hard enough. While they quarrel of yearly self-income raises, you might just tell them to shelter your families or they won't have any income at all. You seem to forget that congressmen, judges, and the like are elected by you, the people. You could get it done by next semester if everybody hit it hard enough. Further, in smaller communities, you can go the extra with volunteer labor and get it sooner. Volunteers would be fine in cities also, except the unions would stand guard at the gate. I will give you a scenario offered by another to whom I am indebted. If your house were on fire, you would grab your kids and run for an exit. But, what if the doors were locked every night by congressional order and they hold the keys? What if some bureaucrat made it impossible for you to get out of your house, even though the whole world knows that there is a team of professional arsonists loose in the neighborhood and are methodically burning down all the houses? Well, there is such a team. It is called whichever enemy chooses to lose the missiles. Your political representatives have made it impossible for you to get out of the burning houses. They not only won't build you one's shelters, they won't allow shelters built just to house the children. There is already space, money, and equipment to build a shelter that would house all children at every school in your nation, public and private, without discrimination of race, color, or creed. All the kids, at least, should be given a fighting chance to survive. Within 10 minutes after the siren sounded, all the children could be safe in their shelters. If it happened during school hours, even a first strike by the enemy aimed at your cities couldn't kill your children. You would have at least a 15-minute warning under the worst-case scenario. In 15 minutes, the entire school-age population in the U.S. could survive the blast and fallout. Oh, you think the public would object to bomb drills as too traumatic for the children? Would you also give up fire drills? How about watching your child die of burns and agonizing radiation? Would that be less traumatic? So be it. People, and that includes children, are terrorized by that which they know not. Good intelligent survival drills of move fast and survive type would give them security and control of destiny instead of fear. It is gloom and doom and unintelligent reasoning to do nothing and allow yourselves and your children to be held captive by political nitwits. You think the Iranian hostages were bad off? Boy, you have millions of citizens in much worse shape than those hostages. Your children are right at the head of the list of expendables. If you won't do something to save your children and you are really that cheap, then perhaps you don't deserve to survive and you won't. There are over 55 million children in school in the US, from kindergarten through college. Because they are concentrated in rather small areas, they could get to shelters in a matter of minutes. You are now talking about saving around 1/4 of your population. Let's break it down into even simpler numbers. There are about 27 million children in elementary schools. They attend about 73,000 schools. That works out to about 370 children in each school. That means you would need to build only about 2 shelters per elementary school depending on density of population distribution. Some would need 3 to 4. There are about 17 million children in high school who attend some 30,000 schools. This averages to fewer than 570 students per school. That means that you would need about 4 shelters per secondary school. Obviously, in urban schools where there are more like 1,500 students, then 10 shelters would protect them. A good side effect for teachers, too, for they would have primary positions in the shelters. When the sirens sound, the teachers would accompany their own room full of children. Where are the shelters? Simple placement, under the playground in elementary schools and under the football and baseball fields at high schools. Installation would take some 2 weeks in a crash program, a month at a normal construction rate. Shelters could be put under the baseball field during football season, and under the football field during the baseball season, and no one would even need miss a game. Almost all of your children would survive a nuclear attack, even if it is aimed right at you, the civilians. They would all survive a nuclear attack aimed at military and strategic sites. It appears, however, that your politicians all have more important things to do with your money than use it to protect you, the people. So be it. A few less junk advertisements from your senators and representatives might even cover the expense. Let us have a hard look at the facts of the matter. Take a minute to go get a picture of your family, specifically your children and grandchildren. Look carefully at each one. Now tell me what government spending program is possibly worth risking their very lives even one more year. How about at least requiring a tax shelter for building your own? Friends, they do nothing, for you do not insist they do anything. You won't have a drug problem if you have no people, perhaps that is what the government children have been counting on. All Congress has to do is appropriate the money. They could also offer incentives. Prizes for first county accomplishing security installations. The counties and cities could offer bonds. It is a more worthy cause than infrastructure for unnecessary shopping centers and office buildings in already overbuilt cities. How about a few extra lotto or lottery drawings specifically for that explicit purpose? At the end of this journal, I will give you a sample letter to send to your congressman. If enough of you will follow through, you will get it done. However, you will have to have community effort. I do mean COMMUNITY. Not just town half-hearted effort, I mean real community cooperation. We will give you a whole document devoted to the development of real community. What of military security? Your military personnel are as unprotected as your children. Oops, they are your children, are they not? At least the ones who go to war and die are your babies. Sometimes I feel most of your leaders could be no one's children, much less parents. There are no shelters for your army children and absolutely no protection whatsoever for your navy children at sea in floating toys. You think the ships won't be targets? Forget your dreams, Dad, They will be the most strategic targets, for they will carry many of the retaliation missiles. Let us just assume Soviet enemy. Consider the military implications of 25 active Cuban divisions just 90 miles from your shores. Consider the backup potential of up to 215 Soviet divisions. How long will your surviving children remain free if the 8 Cuban runways start being used for transporting paratroopers? Who will defend the survivors if your ground-based military gets wiped out in a first strike? U.S. Army bases provide no shelters. The buildings are not underground. The troops are helpless and would be the first targets. Everyone at all bases could easily be destroyed, for the troops would be helpless. It would require practically no impact on the Soviet arsenal to accomplish devastation. They would aim directly at buildings and men and wipe out your defense troops. You would have 0 troops in less than 30 minutes following missile launch. Protection. It is a government myth, dear hearts, a $300 billion a year Pentagon myth. No, dear ones, that your top military leaders and politicians have their survival and escape routes completely finished. Oh, you think they must be unaware? Oh, little dreamers, they know. Why is nothing done? Because all who could lead are too scared for their positions to lead. They want to work from the inside and not ruffle the system. The fact is, and again I refer to Spacegate, the system the advisors to every president since John F. Kennedy at least has not been willing to protect your people. The men under the command of today's generals have placed their lives in the hands of senior officers who have been unwilling to place the nation's safety and their troops' safety above their personal career goals. This is hard language, but your men in uniform need hard shelters and, brothers, they need them now. They are primary targets. The war will come to your nation this time around. Oh, there are some military men, who get retired before, or just as soon as, they speak up, who have tried to warn you. May I give honor to a few? Graham, Singlaub, Knight, Keegan, and Walt before them, MacArthur and Patton. I salute them for daring to speak out. If you had shelter, even bare necessity shelters, the enemy could not destroy your ground forces even in a first surprise strike. Without shelter, the military defense is gone and all troops dead. You would never again be an independent country. Out of a $300 billion a year defense budget, your government is telling military personnel loud and clearly, you are not worth $200 each. A conclusion can be drawn. The conclusion must be obvious, as there is only one: install shelters at every school, kindergarten through college, in the nation. Get petitions out and vote for the program immediately, and have them installed before the next school midterm. Since this writing is in September, it will require until midterm, but it could be well underway by that time and could be gotten on the November ballot perhaps. Accept no excuses from elected officials. Either your children get protection, or else officials who oppose shelters for the children find new jobs. If you don't care enough to send a letter, at least to your congressman, then you are not worried about some 10,000 Soviet nuclear warheads. You must not mind the inconvenience of having all your children and grandchildren as hostages to terrorists. Please, let Commander Ashta believe that you do care, for I do not like to believe I have brought millions of Space Command brothers here to protect you, if you care not for yourselves. You must realize, that even at Earth upheaval evacuation, we stand to lose a lot of craft and crews. If you care not for yourselves, we cannot ask your space brethren to act in your behalf. I am not going to list all your politicians, local and national. Call your library and find out, write 10 letters each, 20, 3150 what are your children worth? Surely, the cost of a few hits of cocaine perhaps? Then, while you are at it, start pushing and prodding your local officials to start pressuring the Pentagon to spend money to shelter your troops unless, of course, you prefer your children finish what lives they might still have, under the President Castro Nationalist Party. Further, you might make these books required reading and public debated. Open your eyes, Earth Americans, and smell the coffee, for breakfast hour is all but over. What about you? Suppose you get some shelters and save the children, would it not be nice if they had some adults to help tend them? What about the other 75% of the population? What about you? Surely you would not expect a few unsuspecting teachers to carry the load of all those lively children alone. Further, and what if the raid comes after school? If you can build shelters at the schools, you will find that you can also build shelters all over the suburbs with very little relative output. If you took just 1 year's defense budget and handled it with integrity, you can have all the shelters you can use and defense, because you would save your military troops. But, can it be done? The Soviets have done it, the Red Chinese have done it, and the Swiss have done it. Of course it can be done. Where will you put them? Under every neighborhood park. They are on city property and nobody is inconvenienced by property encroachment. Then, America loves its cars so much that you have more parking lots than buildings. Stick them underground, under the parking lots. That is ideal, and the people at work can have instant safety. What about shopping malls? Extra benefit for store owners: safety of self and good advertising. Come shop in total safety. You must remember something: these shelters are not just for nuclear war. They can be for any disaster, even floods. These must be seal safe, which means you could live underwater, self-contained until tidal waves, etc. subside. Face it, land will not be a problem for locations. Look how good merchants appear if they donate land under their property with an inlet and exit portal. Make them close enough to one another, with interconnecting tunnels, even if only a few, that no one even needs drive to a location, all can walk. This is most important to the infirm and older citizens, as well as parents with small children and infants. You must have close access for those less mobile. There is another tactic to scattering the shelters. If any stupid military offense aimed at hitting the shelters, they couldn't target them all. In the suburbs, where the population is about 1,500 persons per square mile, you would only require about 10 shelters per square mile. You would save half or more of the population by just these measures. You, of course, must increase the density of the shelters proportionate to the density of population, but even these more densely clustered shelters are still too far apart to be practical targets. Downtown. About 20% of the U.S. population lives in densities above 6,000 people per square mile. In the cities, population densities are quite high during working hours. For these areas, clusters of shelters would be built. The civil defense system would have to provide additional, special shelters for the commuters in those densely populated areas. You would need shelters at home in suburbia in case of an evening attack, and we will talk extensively about those later. You can even make a nice cool summer home underground. Downtown residents would go to their local shelters. Commuters would go into large shelters underneath the building in which they work, or they would have to walk a bit farther to extra local shelters. This does mean some extra care in structuring, drainage and preparation, but most buildings have basements and sub-basements, anyway. I tell you, before we go farther in this dissertation, were it not for the interaction of we, your space command with your country's leaders, this would all be a most moot discussion. The Soviets know of your weakness, but they are your allies at the top levels of financial bastions. Quite frankly, your top idiots are more afraid of US than they are of anything else in your cosmic sectors. They know they cannot stand against US, and they also know we will make every effort to stop annihilation of a planet. Short of that, we cannot interfere except to give you mind lessons such as this. We can tell you exactly what is the problem, what you can do to help yourselves, and then you must take the action. If you choose not to do so, then millions will perish, for it will ultimately come to pass. Perhaps much sooner than later. All it will require is one irrational leader to launch one atomic warhead, and all of your most fanatical, irrational countries have capability. I want to speak more on city installations of shelters, but I want you to take a break, Dharma, as these long sessions are quite debilitating for you. Ashta to stand by. Salu and out. Chapter 5. Rec number 1, Ashta. Sunday, September 10, 1989,7:00 a.m., Year 3, Day 025. Ashta present to resume on this wondrous day. There is something different about this day, Chelis, look carefully and listen carefully. Your little noisy friends outside are telling you something by their silence. Beloved ones, you must get prepared, for you are so close to upheavals. War, nuclear war, is probable. So much has previously been covered by Hayton regarding Earth changes and probable shifts, along with personal shockwaves, that I hesitate to be the one to dump nuclear war probability on your pretty heads. Why would I badger you with something of this type when Mr. Gorbachev is being so world-traveled to denounce it? Because it is going to happen. If there were peace throughout your world and no person starving or in prisons, you might let your barriers down a bit. Nay. Can you not see that to pull yourselves out of the economic mess you have to have war? It has always been a solution for your countries. Have a big war and get the people back to work and production up. Only this time the war will all but destroy your world. You will be among the destroyed if you do not take precautions and get yourselves some protection. It is coming into your dooryard this time. I must talk about it. Further, if there should never be more than a Chernobyl-type accident, or a rupture of the already formed volcanic dome, which is a release valve for the pressures underground from Nevada testing, you must have security from radiation. You are also destined to have such increased weather pattern changes and increased winds that will blow incessantly to well over 100 miles per hour on a rather regular basis with no particular prevailing direction. You are intentionally being deluded. Your world is in crisis. If you are prepared for nuclear war, you can survive most of the rest of the havoc in far greater numbers. If a world is to survive, there must be some ones to rebuild. Therefore, I shall continue to speak of the possibilities of nuclear exchange with Russia, for expediency, for they are opposites in basic and fundamental spiritual belief system. I remind you, it will only take one foolish fanatic to start it all. You cannot purchase friendship, and the whole world is your enemy, my friends. You are continually being propagandized to keep you from building defenses. A recent example is the so-called nuclear winter phenomenon. It will be from other causes that you experience isolation from your sun. Let me explain. Unless a nuclear device is detonated at ground level, there is not massive amounts of debris to go into the atmosphere. Remember, radioactivity is invisible. Volcanic eruptions, however, and smoke from fires caused by the conflagration, as well as other substances in your atmosphere, will cause the winter. If you are all dead, however, it matters little what occurs next. You will experience 3 days in which the sun will be blackened from your view. That is a major warning to the world. Don't be foolish enough to think God does not have such capability. There are enough ships out here to manifest into solid mass and blacken your world indefinitely. You do not have to build against space aliens, my friends, you must build protection from your own Earth brothers. You are your own worst enemy. Hayton had all of you ones in his training group watch The Day After and Letters from a Dead Man. I suggested for every man, woman, and child, yes, I said child, to get your priorities in order. Nuclear wars start by accident. No idiot is insane enough to start it on purpose, only the already insane are insane enough to do it. There would be enormous casualty levels in the US if you were attacked before you have a shelter system of some kind. Into the earth is all that will save you from that particular type of holocaust. There are actually a few people who assume your grand new friendship with the Soviets causes an all-out war situation. Forget it. Why do you think both sides continue in massive ordnance and weapons buildup? Further, and I will tell you at this point, there is a new thrust to keep the nuclear weaponry upon, or very near, your surface because we will not allow it out here with US. Therefore, more emphasis is being made toward what they will falsely tell you, is traditional war preparation like nuclear warheaded cluster bombs dropped from fighter planes. You are lied to because your government does not know what else to do with you. I will discuss 3 scenarios regarding the year after. If you have no shelter system, you need not even read the other 2. Likelihood of attack. If you are protected from massive causalities in a first strike, it is less likely that you will be attacked at all. You see, the Soviets don't worry about you striking first. You have no such plans to even steal from your spies. You do not have sufficient numbers or weapons to hit every widespread target in Russia, and further, they have protected their populace and their factories. There would be massive retaliation if you strike first and you have no protection. You would be gone, woof poof gone. Really bad news now, brothers. Because you have not been properly cared for and protected with a shelter system, you probably would not have early warning. There would be a news blackout. The nation's leaders would probably evacuate their families, but it would do no good to warn the rest of you. What would you do? At this point it truly would be easier on you to just go without anticipation of the death blade. Oh, yes, read Spacegate by Hayton, to find out about your government's plans for survival. However, if Washington gets it by submarine attack, they won't make it either small satisfaction to you, however, for if they strike Washington, you know you will get it in a massive strike. Rebuilding. Let us suppose you get busy and get yourselves a survival shelter system. Let us even suppose you have the worst nuclear attack possible. If you have saved your lives, you can rebuild. To have the necessities, however, you will need to provide further insurance. You also need underground storage with a stockpile of equipment and supplies. Further, if you simply dig open holes, you can compress the dirt extracted for bricks, cover the holes with a cement dome, or even flat with a dirt covering, and you can protect your equipment. What you do underground does not have to change what you do above ground, except for the building of great skyscrapers. For every 10 shelters there would be one group of these storage tanks. They would contain such items as simple agricultural tools, dehydrated food, mainly grain and beans, water cistern, hand tools, non-hybrid seeds for planting, and these would be separate and untouchable by force or accident, simple farm tools for gardening, etc. A large central holding compound, underground, would house some heavy building equipment and spare parts, along with some heavy farm equipment. People would have to avoid proximity to any actual bomb craters. In other words, don't think you will rush outside and build a big water supply in the already dug hole. These craters would remain dangerously radioactive for months after the blast. Otherwise, the radioactivity in the environment would be safe in a short time. Radioactivity in fallout decays quite rapidly. For each 7-fold increase in time, there is a 10-fold decrease in radiation. Therefore, and mark this information for retrieval, if in a high fallout area the radiation level were 2000 R/day 1 hour after an attack, it would 200 R/day after 7 hours, 20 R/day after 2 days, and 2 R/day after 2 weeks. Serious human health problems begin to appear at levels of 200 R or more total short-term exposure or 3 R/day or more long-term exposure. Around the limited areas where there had been very high fallout, some trees and plant life, and many animals would, of course, be dead. However, plant life would recover from existing seeds in the ground just as new life takes hold in any cleared areas. Animals would again migrate in. Buildings would be rubble, but not vaporized. Frame houses would be piles of broken wood. Most would not be burned, except in areas of very dense frame construction. The rubble, in other words, would be quite useful and temporary shelter could house the people. I cannot stress this on enough. Get and protect, as many as possible, earth compression machines. You can rebuild everything but the glass windows and framing for same, from sandstone bricks. Store loaders along with the compressors so you can rebuild in quantity, rapidly. This means, friends, that you need the most inexpensive, least complicated machinery. Get your factory operational in a big way right away. Important second point, you need to do these things now, while the Russians are friendly, occupied with their own economic disasters and widespread discontent in outlying Soviet tributaries. They will not strike immediately with as much trouble as they are having at home. Otherwise, expect a strike the very moment a widespread shelter system is made public. You are really between a rock and a very hard place. By the end of the first year, it is likely that survivors would be living in shelter at least as good as mid-19th century Americans. Many of you would be doing without running water and indoor plumbing. But life would go on, and so would upgraded rebuilding. Transportation by vehicle would be very slow to recover. Fuel would have to be preserved for equipment use. Most roads would be intact from the war, but it is most probable that the detonations would trigger earth shifting, so you will have abundant problems with road repair, and many bridges and structures would be down because of blast waves. With care you would still have excellent communication, and if you use your knowledge and storage facilities, you will have adequate ability to harness the wind and sun for electricity for emergency systems on a very limited scale. Your nation would be decentralized instantly. So would politics. This is not all bad, for you could most surely forget about your spring tax forms and plunder. Do you see? Further, if you have a few hours warning, you can have preparations, underground, to protect and park the in-use heavy equipment. If there is a plan for immediate action, the equipment can be covered with bags of sand and then bulldoze dirt barriers around the equipment. Heavy equipment is destroyed by being thrown over or into something or being hit by falling or flying objects. Your Boeing Co. conducted tests years ago and found this to be so. Even damaged equipment can be utilized to make other equipment if you have stored a supply of fuel. You must have stored a community supply of fuel for this machinery. It must be off limits, just as the non-hybridized planting seeds. For food you would turn to a diet much as the health stores recommend, sprouts and grains. In rural areas there must be shelter for your dairy herds, chicken farms and the such. I will get into this later, for if you are to recover, you must preserve these indispensable living creatures who have become your food mainstay. You can live forever on sprouts, grains, milk, cheese and eggs if you have pure water. Medical care. Doctors will begin to make house calls again because of fuel and auto shortage. It would be more efficiently utilized to have him have the vehicle with the fuel. Makeshift hospitals would be operational if the basic and necessary equipment is stored in a basement area. Once the upper rubble is taken away, if there were adequate coverings, the equipment could be restored or at least made usable. An aspirin, of course, would be magnificently priceless. Disease would increase, but most people are immunized and would still be protected. There would still be the threat of biological warfare, but that would exist with or without the shelters. With total security shelters you would have excellent defense against chemical and biological impact. A good shelter system improves markedly your chances of survival in this age you have marched into of total law breakdown and murderous totalitarian governments. What of the bureaucracy? Most lawyers and bureaucrats would have to go to work at something more economically productive, I would suppose. They would have to pitch right in alongside all the rest of you or stand outside and perish. This might be a very valuable and pleasing portion of nuclear war. Get rid of some of your paper politicians and rubble rakers. You would end up with honest competition in the markets and incentive to do good work. Your overall survival. Death. In the first year after there will be some increase in deaths probably, however, not as many as you might guess. For after the withdrawals from abused substances and depressant drugs, even legal ones, you are going to have a healthy-minded people for the most part. Much of life and death in a crisis depends on a person's attitude toward life in general. Some people will not be able to face a life without today's conveniences and, dear ones, with all the other things coming forth, it will not be a recovery until after the transition. You will see a massive moral and spiritual revival and brotherly love and sharing as you have never known. Families will again become family units. There would be an immediate new dedication to life. Tough times pass, tough people last. People with faith in God will survive. People who value freedom and justice and hate tyranny and evil would likely survive. People who continue to define life mainly in terms of luxury and creature comforts would suffer far greater death rates. So be it, beloved friends, it is the sorting process who can rebuild a planet in rebirthing. Who can survive and rebuild and withstand the coming tribulation. There are places on your planet which will be worse struck than any nuclear war you can dream of. Nothing, and no place, will remain untouched before the cycle is finished. That is why we are here, blessed ones. That is why we are here. Human people. The key to rebuilding a society is people. The key to people's survival after a war will be their attitudes and a minimal capital base. The major capital base is knowledge and a willingness to cooperate, not simple bricks, sticks and mortar. If people are alive to rebuild, they will rebuild. Just like you might witness a rebirthing of an anthill following devastation, the workers pick up and rebuild. The world a year after would be a place very different from what it is today, friends, for you still would not be finished with the cycle of transition and still would only have minimal input from we of these realms as far as technology, but it would be coming forth in many instances. You have to build on what is, for your fellow man cannot yet accept our presence, so we must present it in a manner of what it would be if not different were available. You must prepare with what is, and all else will become thy frosting upon the wondrous cake. You of earth have gone beyond the point of no return. You will have to have a created devastation to equalize the extreme problems in your society and economic systems. You have been duped and the house of cards must all fall down so that you have a real base upon which to build again. Evil has seen to your downfall, God will see to your lifting up. Dharma, let us take a short break, Keela, before speaking of life after US surrender. I will be shattering a bunch more of your sweet dreams. You cannot believe how it pains me to bring these things unto you ones. I am not flippant in meanness. My compassion is almost beyond that which I can bear. It was to be this way, thy prophecies have told you thusly since the beginning. And so it shall come to pass, let us work diligently and feverishly to save what and as many as we can. The Master stands prepared to give you strength and endurance, ask, and it shall be given unto you ones. So be it, I move to stand by. I give you peace, Dharma, for you are undone. Thank you, blessed ones, who stand and inform and pick up and show the way. Yours will surely be the kingdom of heaven. Oh, I wish I could but name you individual by individual, for you are such a wondrous goodly group. Our love and compassion encompass you. Ashta to stand by. Chapter 6. Rec number 2, Ashta. Sunday, September 10, 1989, 11 a.m., Year 3, Day 025. All documents to Cooper. Ashta to continue. Your perception is correct. I desire all documents, even if not perfected, to be placed in W.M. Cooper's hands in Sedona. In fact, I prefer they be in the simple document format rather than bound books. There must be ones who already have influence who can take these informative instructions further on circuit of disbursement. Just to tell people what is wrong is not enough. If you do not tell ones what they can personally do, it is worthless information. You can change your plight if you really get some steam rolling. That cannot be through you ones in this small group, for you must keep at the building in this location. This information will have to be taken and efficiently and deliberately promoted by ones who already have widespread attention focus. That attention must be kept from this side except for community and feedback. Yours is to write, others are to distribute. Back to nuclear war and shelter therefrom. Surrender to the enemy, specifically the Soviet Union. Let us assume the following scenario. The federal government builds no shelters for you citizens, and further, continues spending on the same programs as today. Also, there is no change in defense strategy, just a continuance to rely on the current policy of mutual assured destruction. No, dear hearts, that is not Ashta's sarcasm. Do you realize the Soviet Union could demand that the US surrender by simply ordering the president to do something he didn't want to do? What happens when he refuses? They simply launch a first strike against your Minuteman III missiles in their silos and your airfields. 5 minutes into the launch, which, brothers, would be 20 minutes to impact, the Soviet premier calls the president on the hotline and informs him that the attack has begun. He also reminds the president that the coastal areas of the US are targeted by the missiles on Soviet submarines. Dear hearts, look at your prophecies of your great seers. These submarines will launch their missiles the moment a single Minuteman III missile or US submarine ballistic missile is launched. What this means, just for information, is that your Minuteman III missiles are just about useless except as some feeble retaliatory device aimed at the bomb shelters of the Soviet elite, and so what they are dug in from onset of Project Upstart. You can do nothing to reduce the number of missiles that will strike the US. They are simply psychological devices to instill fear in the Soviet leaders. Oh my. The day the Soviets think they can survive such an attack with smaller loss than at present, the Minuteman III missiles, your nation's primary weapon system, will be all but useless. Alternative, the president can do nothing and allow the Minuteman III missiles to be destroyed. Perhaps 10 million Americans would perish, or even more, depending on fallout patterns. What will the president do? It is fairly easy to guess. If he calls for retaliation launching, your cities on the coastlines are gone along with Washington, D.C. He will not call for the launching of the Minuteman III missiles. 15 minutes later, kerboom, no more land-based missiles or bombers. Then, he will be told to recall to port all submarines and missile-equipped surface vessels and will be caused to disarm them. It becomes very simple, does it not? A bit risky for the Soviets, but simple. Dear ones, bad news: the Soviets now have their huge phased array radar system operational, and their anti-ballistic missile system is now secure. Not very many of your missiles would be able to strike Soviet targets. The Soviets have greatly reduced their risk of retaliation, even if the president gets half the Minuteman missiles launched. Submarine commanders may or may not launch their missiles. That is the major risk for the Soviets. Would those commanders launch those missiles? Further, the risk is minimized because submarine-launched ballistic missiles are relatively small, and they are not accurate enough to strike specific buildings or Soviet leaders' shelters. Your rate of successful launches in recent weeks indicates no risk at all, doesn't it? Besides, you each know where the other's missile-bearing subs are located. Yours would be targeted and wiped away along with the early strike, before news of the strike reached the vessels. The 500 or so huge floating targets known as surface ships will no longer be in existence by this time. Surface ships don't survive nuclear wars. Golly, gee whiz, what of the troops? They will be quickly disarmed. Some may run for cover but are not trained in guerrilla warfare. At any rate, all armed protection will be removed from the cities. Further, your government and your goody two-shoes will have effectively disarmed every non-criminal in your populace. Dear ones, even if you can keep your small arms, it will only be a matter of brief time for you. You are not likely to fight back very diligently, for you will continue with your sweet dreams that you can somehow reason with these ones who have moved in on you. You will be a very hard country to occupy, so now the worst of all comes down on you. The executions will begin rapidly and deadly. It has been thus in every country the Soviets have ever captured. Ask around. The Nazis even had a pretty good image against the Soviets. Again, I do not speak of Russian people who are just as you and your neighbor. I speak of a government that is diabolically opposed to your very foundation of lifestyle. There will be no world opinion to be considered. Once your country comes under control, it is over, brothers. There aren't going to be many paper shuffling, 8 hours 8-day jobs to be had. Anyone who gets those will be actively associating and working in behalf of the intruders. If they kill proportionally as many civilians as they did in Cambodia, some 70 million people will be eliminated. You would have been better off to have the nuclear strikes. But they do not wish the lands and remains unusable. There are 50 million church-going so-called, self-trusting Christians in the United States. Brothers, take note, these are the primary targets of world communism. They will not be tolerated. Christians will be exterminated. Then, dear hearts, You ones who have sincerely prepared and realized the truth of Sananda, Hatan, Ashta, God, and the others we bring you, are going to have a nice ride to outer space. You who make your choice to hang in there with your false teachers, will perish, no more and no less. The US borders would be open to every terrorist group under communist control and they don't like you at all. The Red Dawn scenario could easily become a reality. But I tell you now, no teenage kids with stolen machine guns will defeat well-trained Cuban or Soviet troops that know all about guerrilla operations. It looks really good on your silver screens but it won't happen in real life. In a world gone mad, you won't have to worry about making it to Armageddon if you don't get protection for yourselves. They may decide to nuke you anyway to simply cut down on the problem of individually dealing with you. They know a land can recover. Oh yes, back to the ranch in Washington. There wouldn't be any top leaders in Washington D.C-no government to even allow you to pick at. They have enough underground shelters in places like Australia, etc. to house them all. See Spacegate. They also have some off-planet resorts waiting and, confound it, as a space brother who realizes nothing but love in my being, to tell you this is worse than my own death. For Emmanuel loved you once so much he gave his life for thee, he would do it again if it could be so. I, Ashta, drew the short straw and it has fallen to me to give you all this wondrous introduction to terror. If you act and get yourselves protected, you will live to build again. The enemy would not risk a world of survivors who are now really angry. The very existence of preparation and shelter will make a blackmail strategy much more risky. The shelters would give you the strength you need. It ceases to be your life support system but your very defense system as well. My dear friends, if you do not take a stand now and act, while the Soviets are acting like pussycats, you will fall to the tiger waiting in China. Ponder it, beloved ones. The dragon beast is out to devour you just as it is told in Revelations. So be it, and as I have spoken so shall it come to pass, if ye sit and wait and act not. We cannot interfere, we must await your choices. Government attitudes. What might be your government's political line on civil defense? Get this clearly perceived please, that each individual need to look out for himself. It is the responsibility of each and every family to design and then build shelters, if a family so chooses. What about the government? Oh, they expect you to protect them and have been about it in a massive way that you have no comprehension thereof. This, long before 1986, but in 1986 the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, proposed a $1.5 billion program to build shelters for the essential national, state, and local politicians and bureaucrats. Military shelter fell under a different program. Again, please see Spacegate for the sordid details. The facts of that measure was that the FEMA proposed a do-it-yourself approach without public shelters or expenditures. They will have you pay for shelters only for some selected adults, those same adults who have decided not to protect your babies, children, your soldiers, and yourselves. So be it, if you allow it, what you seize is what you gets. All must support for a fighting chance. I will again borrow an analogy further. If you once do not rush, run, scratch, claw and rocket yourselves to obtaining the book Fighting Chance, you are most foolish indeed. I will endeavor to have my ones get some available for you. Contact the authors and get bunches printed, for it is truly a handbook to accompany this information. Your last prayer for survival. It has been public since 1986 and not one out of 100,000 have even heard of it. Open your sleepy eyes, little destined to doom ones. Those authors did not enjoy writing that disastrous information. Dharma does not like working hours day and night without respite for us to bang you on the head with it, to have you so set in your own destruction that you will not even look at it. The support group then takes these messages, we of your space brothers bring, and compile it into legible format. Support them, citizens, for your very salvation. Support them and save your children, yourselves and your nation. Analogy. 1. People want street lights in the cities. Let them install them themselves, house by house. The government has no responsibility here. 2. People want roads. Let families pour the concrete themselves, house by house. The government has no responsibility here. 3. People want police protection. Let them hire private policemen, block by block. The government surely has no responsibility here. 4. People want an army and a navy to defend the nation. Let each family rent and train a soldier or a sailor. Surely the government has no responsibility here. 5. People want a strategic defense system. Let them set up a non-profit foundation and donate money to build the system, or, perhaps each neighborhood should install its own phased array radar and ABM launcher. Surely the government has no responsibility to the citizen here. Of course neither do you have any access to their above top secrets to assist you, either. Further, you have to do this in addition to the already too high taxes stolen from you. Does this sound crazy to you? Does it strike you as ridiculous? Then listen again to the aforementioned Washington stance. People want protection from a Soviet attack, with 10,000 or more nuclear warheads at ready. Let each concerned family design and build its own bomb shelter. The government has no responsibility here. Further, they give you the old, we cannot allow government to interfere with a person's individual lifestyle. Well, they give you a ticket if you don't wear seatbelts, don't they? They put you in jail if you don't send money to pay government salaries, don't they? So be it. Do you, just offhand, know anyone close who knows how to design a bomb shelter? Do you know where to go to get an engineered blast door? Do you know anyone who will accept the ridicule that will be heaped on him if he builds a shelter all by himself? Further, Do you know anyone willing to withstand the ridicule of the masses to listen to a space commander? Do you know any city where the planning commission won't find someone who starts building a shelter that hasn't been approved by a team of bureaucrats and zoned properly? Of course you do not. Well, dad burn it, sleepyheads, the Washington bureaucrats say that is exactly how it will be, or you will have nodded yes. Now your responsibility to build a homebrew do-it-yourself blast shelter if you insist upon having one. Washington party line. That, whether or not you choose to believe it, is your Washington official line. Civil defense officials are required to operate in terms of it. They don't come before the public and argue in favor of immediate deployment of a full-scale, Washington-financed civil defense blast shelter system. There have been no hearings before your Congress in the past 20 years in which any full-time, government-employed civil defense official testified that the government should build a comprehensive blast shelter system for the American people. Well, in private, they say it must be done or else. They are too fearful and too demoralized, after 30 years of failure, to even say it in public. So, the public is kept in the dark, no more and no less. Blindfolded in a dark room. Do it yourself is not enough. During your World War II, the German government built bunkers for public air raids. Those bunkers prevented casualties to their occupants, except in rare instances. However, construction of the shelter was started too late, they underestimated the enemy, so part of the German population had to shelter themselves with no instructions, in quickly put together, civilian-made shelter in basements and other unspecified places. The people did not do well in these shelters, for they were usually trapped within and crushed, therefore, they became do-it-yourself suicide traps. Surviving alone won't cut it. The so-called genius of modern economics is that you all purchase services and goods from one another, using that picture paper exchange system. You use the specialized division of labor to increase your wealth as individuals. Each person contributes something to the system. Anyone knows that if he alone survives, he won't survive long. How many of you Boy Scouts really learn to start a fire without a match? You need each other to maintain your lives. If you can help each other, you can rebuild. If you have honest community, you can make it. Learn from your dear brethren, the Amish. They can survive. But they won't if you are caused to surrender to the enemy. You cannot survive alone in a post-attack world. Your personal productivity could not sustain your family. Very, very few families will build shelters for themselves. Only your idiot bureaucrats could even think of such a thing. Remember from Spacegate, the hole with a door on top and 3 feet of dirt shoveled on. Brother, there you have it. Do-it-yourself shelters is about the most, well, I should not say most, stupid idea to come forth from Washington. So what if you survived alone? How would little you defend yourself from all those enemy soldiers? Ludicrous and funny if it were not so sick in concept. Black and rose-colored glasses. You are not facing an unsolvable technical problem. You are facing a death pronouncement through a leadership no backbone problem. Most Americans simply don't know nor care what the threat really is. If they think at all, they think the technological threat is so big everyone will be killed that no one will ever start a nuclear war. They have overestimated the technological threat and underestimated the strategic threat. If they had not been misled by their leaders and the media, they would stand and fight. Or better put, they would demand protection from any possible bombs, so that they could offer effective resistance to invaders. They would make invaders pay a very dear price for any inch of ground that might be taken. They would end the free ride that your government has given your mortal enemies. It is really tough, little Chellis, to show much backbone after it has been vaporized by a nuclear explosion. If you have no shelter, any talk about showing backbone is not going to be heard at all. The idea that the protection of American civilians from an atomic attack is the personal, individual responsibility of adult family members, house by house, is an idea dreamed up by some witless, time-serving bureaucrats who have nothing to offer in return for their plus $60,000 per year salaries that you, by the way, pay. Over 30 years of lies, particularly lies of omission, about the threat you face is past inexcusable. At least they could have warned you clearly, but so few have been willing to jeopardize their careers to stand forth once they have known truth. Look what happened to your own President Kennedy, death at the hands of his own protectors. Are you willing to sit and take it, my brothers? We can give you assistance, but you must first choose to take action yourselves. We can tell you how it is, and show you how and where to dig, but you must care enough to give your efforts unto it. Brothers, I tell you here, you have nothing to lose by taking action, but you sit, and lose it all. A break please, Dharma. Thank you for your service. Ashta moving to standby. Circuit clear. Chapter 7. Rec number 3, Ashta. Sunday, September 10, 1989,4:45 p.m., Year 3, Day 025. Ashta to resume. Dharma, you will be alright, Keela. You ask why can't we just request people get books and let it go at that? No, little one simply won't do it. Our promise and commitment to source is that the word will go forth from us, and so it shall. All contributors are of worthy note and will be given all credit, but we must give you these things for, so far, hardly anyone has paid any attention. If we present it all, and still mankind does not listen, so be it, for then it will be finished. Man will come to know truth even if it is in his final midnight hour, and past the time of survival. It shall be done. You ones will do that which you can, and then you can do no more. If we do of our job and man still refuses to see and act, Then it is finished and you of ours, will be brought home Sela. Foolishness against civil defense. What will be the arguments that opponents will thrust at you? It appears to us beyond belief, except that we watch from up here and are continually shocked, that people would have objections to a system of protective shelters that could give you a way to reduce threats against you. But, then, we still watch you laugh at $600 for a $4 toilet seat. Let me assure you that the Red Chinese understand that a nation cannot keep its national independence free of charge. So do the Swiss and so do the Soviets. But opponents of civil defense have successfully foiled any attempt to use tax money to protect Americans from nuclear attack. You spend those tax dollars on every harebrained idea that passes to blind you to facts. You are even being made free world countries of addicts to keep you from noticing what has happened. Oh, it will be all over for the rest of the free world, all will fall. Other free world nations are even worse off defense-wise than are you. It is just that you are the primary target, dear friends, and when you fall the dominoes all fall. The worst, Soviets don't want war. You don't need shelters because the Soviets don't want war. Well, no, the Russian people certainly do not. They are told the buildup is to protect them from you. So be it. Why have they built more than 10,000 nuclear warheads and a first strike delivery system? Why do they have an army of 195 divisions, plus an additional 20 KGB and MVD secret police divisions for a total of 215, when the good old US has only 16? Why do they teach the first strike nuclear strategy in their military manuals? Oh yes they do. Why do they repeat in their published strategic planning that a nuclear war can be won? Why are they deploying a new generation of mobile-launched missiles that cannot be attacked by your missiles? Of course they don't want war if they can get you to surrender without a war. Well, it won't be called war if you surrender, it will be called genocide. Worse for you little Christians, is that the Soviets hate and despise the Jews worse than they can't stand you. And where are most of the Jews? Not in Israel, dear ones. The communists will get rid of all of you just to get at the Jews. Sorry about that. It is called slaughter. At the very least, it is called slavery. It is called the victory of proletariat forces over the capitalist imperialists. In Afghanistan, the Soviets placed what appeared to be toys close to villages. When small children pick them up, the toys explode. These toys are sometimes called butterfly bombs, because they resemble toy butterflies. The explosions are designed to blow off the children's hands, not kill them. The children then become permanent visible testimonies to Soviet ruthlessness. Oh, you refuse to believe such a thing? Read your own confounded research documents. The threat of nuclear war is pure, unadulterated terror. They can threaten you with terror anytime they please. You can't threaten them with anything, least of all the survival of your people. You refuse to believe it because you still think those kinds of things happen to someone else. Surely not in good old U.S.A. where burning a flag will become a federal offense. Next argument, shelters will destabilize relations. Another borrowed scenario please. Imagine that a bully is about to knock your teeth out. He has said for years that he intends to do it. He bought some brass knuckles. He is wearing them. He is standing in front of you. He pulls back his fist. You put your hands in front of your face. Stop, a policeman shouts. Put your hands at your sides. You think the policeman is shouting at the bully. No, he is shouting at you. You're just making him angry. You're going to get him all upset. Do the smart thing, give him a taxpayer-subsidized loan instead. Ah, but you have a sneaking suspicion that if you put your hands down and keep them at your sides, he is going to knock your teeth out. You further have a sneaking suspicion that the policeman is scared to death of the bully. Of course this is a silly, ridiculous analogy because it isn't nearly threatening enough. The bully is also carrying a shotgun and it is aimed squarely at you and there are 20 people already laying dead in the street. The policeman is carrying a nightstick and no other weapon. You aren't just trying to hide behind your hands, friends, you are trying to hide behind a wall. Silly you. Don't you know that the wall will upset him too? Don't you know that if he even thinks you plan to build a wall for protection, he will shoot you first? So stand still. Smile. Tell him you will loan him some more money. How about a little more wheat? Go ahead, tell him you will make a deal, just like the policeman recommends. Oh wow, it must be comforting, however, to know that once the bully pulls the trigger and blows your head off, the next victim will be that gutless policeman. Would shelter really be an act of war? Switzerland has built shelters for its people. Red China has built shelters for its people. Would you say that Red China plans to go to war with the Soviets? Well, the Soviets think so, but the Soviets can't get to the people for they have security, so it remains a quiet standoff. If the Chinese will roll over their students with tanks, what do you think they would do to you? The US has built no shelters for its people. This is an act of illusion leading to eventual annihilation or slavery. The mere presence of shelters tells you nothing about the intentions of those who built them. The absence of shelters tells a great deal about those who refuse to build them. The big one may be the Soviets will just leave you alone. Tell that one to Afghanistan. Tell it to Poland. Go tell it to Eastern Europe. But you better tell it to someone who is totally ignorant of the history of the Soviet Union. But you sleepyheads say, don't tell that stuff to us, we can't believe drivel such as that. No. Well, tyrant states do not build over 10,000 nuclear warheads and overwhelming military superiority in order to leave their potential victims alone. The system might not work. Let us pretend you hear the sirens. What precisely is your recommended system? You can 1. Get on the floor of your house and await an explosion which will put up to 50 to 200 pounds, or more, of pressure on every square inch of its walls. Don't get in front of any windows, stay away from flying doors. 2. And sit tight. The children can perch on the floor under their school desks. 2. Hide in the basement if you happen to have one. A little difficult if you live on the second or higher floor of a high-rise. The initial nuclear radiation will kill every unshielded person within 3 miles, but you certainly can hope for the best. But then comes fallout. Oh well. 3. Right, you can write or phone your congressman. But then again, he may not be available. He may be in the basement under Capitol Hill wishing that he too had blast doors. The rest of the government P.S. will be gone to real safety. It is a heck of a time to learn how unimportant you really are. More facts. From a strictly technical viewpoint, a shelter system could easily save the lives of 80% of all Americans, if you had as little as a 15-minute warning. If you had a 25-minute warning, shelters could save well over 90%. Even without any warning at all, it would be better than what you have available now. Remember, in the worst possible surprise attack, the Soviets will launch all missiles simultaneously. The submarine-launched missiles will hit first, within 10 or 15 minutes. They will almost certainly be aimed at military targets and Washington, D.C. These explosions will alert surviving Americans to the war, even if the sirens are silent. At present, hours of warning would do no good if a full-scale attack is launched against the country as a whole. The fallout will kill all that the explosions do not. The movie picture is quite accurate: bumper to bumper, stalled traffic as far as the eye can see. No civil defense system can guarantee the survival of people who refuse to head for a shelter when they are alerted by warning sirens that an attack is imminent. It can't guarantee the survival of everyone in the downtown districts of a huge city like New York, San Francisco, or Chicago on a busy weekday, but it most surely could save most of them. Almost all of your children could be easily saved. Undoubtedly it would save more than will be saved with no shelter system at all. Shelters will work, but only if people use them and get inside when the bombs explode. Any overall system of civil defense will have some failings, just as every human plan has potential of some screw ups. That, dear brothers, is hardly a good argument for having no plan at all. Surely the blowing of some stupid air raid siren won't save a one. Now we get to it, it is too expensive. Right, with $600 toilet seats and $1,200 carpenter hammers, well, you know how those funny politicians are. Surely the negative debaters are right. You surely cannot afford $300 per person, $200 for the shelter and $100 for food, tools, and seeds for rebuilding. It certainly would undoubtedly break your American economy. That would do it. $300 would break the economy, not the multi-trillion-dollar debt or the billions upon billions of defaults. Oh, but you ones must understand that you are just too poor. The government spends $1 trillion a year on really important things. Keep this one in mind. The hour you hear the sirens, because even small towns still have sirens, and the newscasters tell you to take cover, think about how much money you have saved. Tell your kids how really thrifty you have been. What do you say when they ask, "Daddy, you always take care of us, Mommy, you always know what to do, what are we going to do?" Well, you just answer right out, "We are going to die, kiddies, probably a death of prolonged terrible pain and agony, but at least we saved $300 apiece." Remember, kids, that paid for a good portion of last summer's vacation to Disney World, at least the tickets for a family our size. Think of Fantasyland. Remember, that was our favorite place, Fantasyland. And remember those designer jeans for school? Well, just don't worry about looking shabby or think about Tomorrowland. How many of you ones will give up Tomorrowland for fear tomorrow will end up looking like Frontierland? Well, do you think your children would feel the same? Your problem is not technical nor financial, it is spiritual. You have lost your vision and your backbone. Some of you think life isn't worth living if, during and for a while after an attack, it isn't lived in an air-conditioned 3-bedroom home with hot and cold water and switch-on lights. If you don't change your thinking right soon, you will not survive, and it is a moot point. But think of this one. The Hebrew slaves of Moses' generation were scared to death of dying in the wilderness, so God let all of them except Caleb and Joshua die in the wilderness. God gave the slaves exactly what they feared and expected. Slaves live and die in fear. You are afraid of nuclear war and the difficulties of rebuilding after such a war? Then you had better learn the lesson of the Exodus generation. If you deliberately, self-consciously refuse to do that which is morally required, God turns you over to your greatest fear in life every time. Who will join Caleb and Joshua? I know several, but only a handful, and we bless you ones beyond all bounds. Another idiot tact: it will take too long anyway. It will take you about 2 years, and that is if you drag along and poke all the way. But, of course, if the program gets stalled, it will take forever, and forever might be sooner than you like to confront. What might the problem be? The shelters will be identical. Oh gosh, every American gets access to the same kind of protection. Is that good or bad? Are you waiting for Ashta to tell you? Well, screw your head back on. The shelters can be mass-produced on American assembly lines and in local steel fabrication shops. The steel will be easily available. Our steel factories are lying idle all over the Northwest. Surely Ashta could not mean jobs. You mean income, Ashta. Even if we never have a war? Oh, we could use them in tornado anti-hurricane season, also. You mean, Ashta, we could even have food and water after an earthquake, also. Farmers are going broke, it seems to me. Do you think you can prod a year's supply of grain from them to set aside? Well, you could even pay for it. You can simply stockpile the wheat in storage tanks under the ground instead of in tanks on the surface. Well, couldn't that be possible? You could probably help dig holes about 10 feet deep somewhere near your homes. Do you think that if you were at war you would try to build shelters? The trouble is, nobody in the US wants to admit it could possibly happen. Well, there is Mr. Gorbachev, and he seems like such a nice sort. The communists have admitted it right out front boldly since year 1917, but you don't believe the horse's mouth. Neither did the leaders of Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Czechoslovakia, Cambodia, Afghanistan, Cuba, and you count the others. You always get a deal from the communists, friends, only it is always from the bottom of the deck. Your deals have bought the Soviets the time they need. Deals have made a handful of American deal-doers rich. They have also put your neck on the guillotine. Further, deals indicate that you have already surrendered to the facts in principle. A most deadly message to send to your enemy, I would think. People would be handled like cordwood. Friends, there are only two kinds of cordwood after an atomic attack: stacked up cordwood, living, or blasted and irradiated cordwood, dead. This, of course, is a variation on but people will be jammed together like sardines, without showers or deodorant or breath mints. Oh, perish the thought. Okay, so just perish. Bad news though, burned bodies smell really unpleasant. But, you won't have to worry about bad breath. You literally have leaders who think you wouldn't be willing to spend 2 weeks in a subway car in order to save your lives. They tout it would be too frightening for your children to go through that experience. They said it, not Ashta. They further think building subway cars for you is far too expensive. Ah yes, in that instance less than $300 per person. How about a little Washington, D.C. scenario ready? The elected representatives used your tax money to build themselves the most expensive subway in the U.S. history, the $10 billion Washington, D.C. subway system. That was $10 billion 1977 purchasing power dollars to boot. They did not even bother to put blast doors on it or install a filtered ventilation system. An extra few million spent then, when the city was already dug up, could save the lives today of almost everyone in that city. In fact, that $10 billion would have bought blast shelters and post-attack supplies for over 30 million Americans. These bright, intelligent officials have brought their own families to a prime nuclear target, and they have left their own families undefended. The shelters underway are for the very most elite and will remain uncluttered and uncrowded. How enthusiastic do you think these ones will be when you ask them to spend some money this year to save your skin? They haven't even been efforting at saving most of their own. Political rhetoric isn't too interesting during a nuclear attack. More time to study the problem. This is always the last-ditch effort to stall a program forever. The fact is, everything you need to know was already known by the civil defense professionals when President Kennedy was in office. That is why he wanted to go ahead with the civil defense program. Unfortunately, he was killed before he could get the idea translated into action. Well, most certainly. In the library at your Oak Ridge National Laboratory, there are 3,000 scientific and engineering articles on the subject of civil defense. The staff members at Oak Ridge have set aside 1,000 of these as most significant. That basic information has been sorted and sitting there for 3 decades. The story is blatantly clear right there in research print. Americans can be defended effectively by simple, inexpensive shelters. A little summary. It is time for you as Americans to stand up and demand a fighting chance at life. If you just sit there silently, you have implicitly accepted one or more of these false premises as truth. You will have bought the no protection package in whole. You have tied your future and your children's future to a lie and an illusion. You will have closed your eyes to what the Soviets have told you straightforward that they can do and will do, win. Your silence today will be dead silence one of these days soon. Dharma, enough for today. It has been much too long, but every day elapsed is a day less to get your work done. Let us draw this to a close. I honor and salute you for staying with me, for I know what is in your heart. In love and infinite care for you, dear ones, I stand aside. I am Ashta, Adonai. Chapter 8. Rec number 1, Ashta. Monday, September 11, 1989,7:00 a.m., year 3 day 026 resist. Ashta present that we might continue. The job is most unpleasant, that you have committed to do. It is most offensive to expose wrongdoing, terror, and the actual plight in which you dear ones find yourselves. You, Dharma, are in one of those positions of knowledge, whereby, you could pretty much make a decision to leave or stay. We know that you know as much. Let me remind you of what Apostle Paul said when he was in a Roman prison and all he could do was write to the churches and the people, for I am in a strait, tight space, between two, having a desire to depart, and to be with Christ, which is far, far better. Nevertheless, to abide in the flesh is more needful for you and for service unto him. Philippians 1:23-24. Dear ones, the Christ disciples and apostles were just like other men, fallible. They taught what they understood, and if understanding was in error they taught error. Further, as they taught, others erred and misunderstood, and believe me, the old man of the darkness helped them misunderstand at every turn of the path. Be gentle about the words given down through the eons, discern, for much was tampered by even modern man. Most, in fact, ones pay their debts from these experiences between God and himself. 'Tis not your business. It is your business to perceive and choose that which is truth and allow the false to fall aside. Annihilate the lie when you can. I said the lie, not the man bearing the lie, for it shall surely fall upon another if it remains intact. Heaven is better than any place on your plane. That is simply the way it is. Else why would one's need of the experience? You are ready for the transition when your jobs are finished. This writing of information, for instance, is your primary work at this particular point in evolvement. So be it, no lecture, just response to your petition, Dharma, and that of your close brothers who must also abide the transience of work-focus change. Let us please return to our unpleasant subject. I would state this much in your behalf, Dharma. For those who are not shocked at this, or can just accept it without trauma, do not understand the facts of that which you are up against. Joking and teasing about it takes the sharp edge away, but it also causes lack of doing anything to correct the circumstance. You ones in the group must be even more discerning and clear in reception and perception than all others. If you example lapses in your strength and act unwisely or fall prey to a dark input, it is most detrimental. You must act clearly and morally and protect, rather than encourage, your brother to act likewise. Some things are simply not all right behavior. If you partake, even in thy secret places, of those things which are about the destruction of your fellow man, you have sanctioned it, and untold damage can be projected upon self and others. Consider the moral response: wisdom in resistance. The only way to avoid a nuclear war in your current time is to convince your enemy that you can nicely survive it. The way to assure surrender is to allow your enemy to know you cannot survive, and further, let them know that you know. A nation without shelters against such an attack will not survive. That which makes a nation, its peoples and its structures, will not survive. That which is of the natural will survive very nicely, even bringing strength unto some species of plant and animal mineral life. Heat and pressure make diamonds of carbon, remember. Let us understand something: you don't want to face it will be the Soviets, for theirs is a stated atheistic society. Of course some of the Russians are Christian associated but then, there are many atheists in America, so do not be foolish in your picking of nits lest you become a nitwit. The Soviets have even told you exactly how they will do it, and, my friends, it is working superbly at the moment, even unto perfection. In a full-scale Soviet nuclear attack, a large percentage of the US population would be dead within a month. Those whom the initial blasts didn't kill, the radiation from fallout would. The country would collapse and surrender. If there is any government official still alive, or around, to do the surrender paperwork, it is a moot point. The land would survive. The invaders would easily walk into the largest piece of valuable, developed rural real estate in the history of mankind. Further, the example and terror of what happened to the US would give them the rest of the Western civilization on a sterling silver platter. Mexico, Canada, and South America, they already have much of your Central America. This would all happen with very little risk to the initiators, a greatly declining amount of risk daily. It can be accomplished in less than 30 minutes. Ones can argue that the Soviets would only attack your military installations, not likely. They are focused on the largest cities. If they did, however, you might lose a few million to over 50 million people. Doesn't matter, for the rest would surrender. Perhaps it might be considered the penalty for having brought this kind of death to the world, my friends. Of course, this scenario is improbable, for you would still have a surviving group of really angry people who are still pretty well armed. Therefore, the Soviets would not be so foolish, for it would most certainly be more wisdom in just having a full-scale attack, wait for the radiation to clear and walk in. They may consider the loss of a few buildings far better than facing outraged Americans and cleaning out the rebels. They, further, may not believe that certain groups speak for the remainder of the Americans with slogans like better red than dead. They may realize that for their long-term plans, better dead than red is safer for them in their dealings with Americans, especially those Americans who are deeply religious and who see themselves as responsible before God for defending a civilization built originally on God's laws. They probably do prefer to not blow up the cities. They desire the 20th century technology, which they do not have at present, and they will enjoy a few slaves around who know how to teach their ones to operate the technological toys. Let me just assure you, that while you have been reveling in luxury, drinking your beer and smoking your hemp leaves, their leaders have been carefully planning strategy which will pull you down. The Soviets, further, have done exactly what your government has done to you. They have made sure the Russians, in general, have become vodka addicts, and while the people are concerned with personal survival in drastic times, the proletariats have made strategic plans on a wide-scale manner, to improve their lot in about 30 minutes. The stick 'em up. Without a protection shelter system for the US population, the Soviets might be able to blackmail your leaders into surrendering without ever launching an attack. You might not even know of the surrender until it is beyond undoing. Selling out your allies in South Africa, Europe, Asia, and Central America might be carried out under Soviet orders to your leaders and made to appear as most reasonable, independent actions in your media and press. Could be other things have fooled you. In a substantial sense, your government's present fear that deployment of civil defense and deployment of strategic defense must be delayed, so that you will not anger or worry the Soviets, is itself a kind of implicit surrender. That policy, if continued, could easily lead eventually to your actual surrender, or nuclear annihilation. You are financing your own surrender and murder. It is your money, friends. This policy must be reversed, friends, soon. The years slip right on by and you grow more helpless while the Soviets grow relatively stronger, oh foolish ones. What wisdom is there in the money and technology that you provide to the Soviets at present? Could it already be a form of surrender in sheep's cloth? Perhaps like lambs to the slaughter? You send wheat to Russia while you have starving and homeless people in your own streets. Oh, you think you don't give them money? Dear hearts, I am embarrassed for you. The US government encourages US banks, gray men perhaps, -C spiral to economic disaster, please, to give the Soviets and their satellites long-term loans at interest rates far below those at which they loan money to Americans. Whoops, didn't you know that, little sleepy ones? Oh, well, let me catch you up a little bit. Over $80 billion was loaned to them just in your 1970s, so much more now, at interest rates far more favorable than American businesses could receive, with over $20 billion of that money going to economically hopeless, let us say, Poland, and it seems Ashta recalls just a very few weeks ago, Mr. Bush promised them another $1.3 billion or so. A branch of your government, the Export-Import Bank, was established to use taxpayers' money to guarantee the repayment of such cheap loans, just in case the Soviets default. Your money would be used to pay off the lending banks. Oh, now you are going to give Ashta some attention cause we are again talking about your money, and not just your little old kids and self-survival. Your own professor, Richard Pipes of Harvard, gives you a little explanation worth repeating. The debt of the Soviet Union to Western assistance is not widely known, because neither of the parties involved wishes to advertise it. The Soviet Union wants to avoid the embarrassment of conceding that it is more or less permanently dependent on the capitalist camp, while Western firms are coy about doing business with a power that most Westerners view as hostile and spend great sums to arm themselves against. To this day, the U.S. Department of Commerce will not release lists of industrial corporations granted export licenses to the Soviet Union, although such business is perfectly legitimate. It is legal, yes, perfectly legal. Oh Ashta, dirty bounder, this is below the belt. There is even a nearly secret, not-for-profit corporation that makes it easier for big U.S. firms to do business in the Soviet Union. Its membership list is a secret. The government won't release the names, and the organization certainly will not. Please refer to Spacegate and spiral to economic disaster as quickly as you can if you really want to know. Their hundreds of corporate members insist on secrecy. Well, they sort of call it the US-USSR Trade and Economic Council, but its real name is a secret. They even publish a regular journal with a very small circulation. You can't subscribe to it, but the members of the council can now. What council do you suppose that might be? How about an address? 805 3rd Avenue, New York 10022. The Soviets write most of the articles, and the Americans run most of the ads. Nothing changes very much, does it? Oh well, the American corporations deduct the cost of the ads from their taxable income at the end of the year. You can always make up that shortfall in tax revenues. The Soviets are your mortal enemies. The above tactics have worked for all the other countries in the world. For your gray men's plan at world control, it will not work for the Soviets. You will not bankrupt the Soviets no matter what. They will simply keep what they have and blow you off the map. In less than 30 minutes. You have a $300 billion annual defense budget which supposedly is spent to protect you from those mortal enemies. But, it doesn't work that way. That money is diverted and you send technology and make it a sure deal for them to be able to walk all over you. Might there be some hanky-panky in the higher echelons of your government? This writing will probably be considered treason. Friends, where is the treason? Who are the traitors who have betrayed you? You sit like lambs at the slaughter table, defenseless. You are not told. Most Americans have never been allowed to know that U.S. tax money in 1966 paid for the construction of the roads that led from the Soviet Union into Afghanistan, right into the capital of Kabul. The Soviets even helped build them. Do you wonder why? When those tanks rolled across Afghanistan, there should have been signs in Russian along the highways, U.S. highway tax dollars at work. The Soviet tanks and trucks themselves were made, in part, with facilities that were built by American corporations and financed by American banks. How about another ouchie? Most Americans have never been told that a U.S. company, the Bryant Chucking Grinder Company of Springfield, Vermont, in 1972 sold the Soviet Union the ball-bearing machines that made possible the guidance system of MIRV-ED. Warhead missiles. MIRV stands for Multiple Independently Targeted Re-entry Vehicle, many warheads per missile, each precisely accurate. Oh how boring you are, Ashta. The Soviets had tried from 1961 to 1972 to buy those machines, Centalin B grinders, but they were prohibited from buying them by the U.S. government. The Soviets, therefore at that time, couldn't make any MIRV-ED missiles. Then, in 1972, the Nixon administration came through. The administration suddenly authorized the sale, the Bryant Company presumably, surely they didn't go begging, made millions and millions of dollars. Well, it has cost you nice taxpayers hundreds of billions. It will cost you everything if they use those MIRV-ED missiles before you get your shelters built. Maybe you better start, and continue, to ask yourselves, why don't we have shelters? The answer, you don't need them, is somewhat ludicrous, is it not? Already prisoners. Without a defense protection system, you, and your leaders, are psychological prisoners. They know that the Soviets can kill almost all of you. To resist any evil, you have to be alive. It is very difficult to imagine how a successful resistance effort could be sustained if your enemy has the technical power to kill you at any time. How does one resist totalitarian evil in such a world? Provide bomb shelters for all 235 million Americans, and then you can begin to discuss what you might do next. And wake up, in the name of God, whom you claim to love. Wake up. Gorbachev gets it done. Haven't you wondered at all, how Mr. Gorbachev comes along and suddenly the entire Soviet attitude is peaches and cream? You are being set up, dear dreamers. You are already tied to the execution post. They just don't have everything they want from you yet, and they prefer world opinion be on their side, for look how hard we tried. Better get with the work, little Yankee Doodle dandies, or you will have lost your Broadway stage forever. Hard to believe that a simple, underground shelter system could save your world, isn't it? I certainly hope you have been listening, you who never seem to know what can I do. You had better do something post haste. Take a break, Dharma, but not too long, as I think we may be opening some eyelids. Ashta to stand by. Salut. Chapter 9, Rec Number 2, Ashta. Monday, September 11, 1989, 11:00 a.m., Year 3, Day 026. Ashta present to resume. Evil among you. You once have your New Age movement. You are somehow going to chant the world into peace. You are going to send out vibrational love and harmony and change the world into peace. You aren't going to do anything but waste all the time you could have been building shelters. The money you have spent on overpriced crystals would have built half of them by now. You have forgotten the punchline of your joke. The battle is between the Christ energy and Satan. Evil has enveloped your country. Evil, itself, not just the Soviets, are winning by default. However, most of you have learned that if a default judgment has been handed down, it is very hard and very expensive to get it set aside. Evil is totally out of control on your streets and within your own personal existence. You have rewritten even your church doctrines, in many instances, to coincide with modern degradation. Sadness abounds in heaven, my friends. You move most swiftly to your own assassination. God can and will protect you, but in order for him to take you seriously, you had better do what is in your power to do, build yourself some defensive shelter against nuclear war, which you will have, and tribulation upheavals, which you will have. The Lord helps those who help themselves, so be it, Mr. Franklin. If you do not care enough to do whatever you can to build the will to resist evil, then why should God intervene? Your problem is not technical ignorance. It is not technical to build a good survival shelter. Your problem is ignorance. You have been duped, no more and no less, only the consequences are deadly. Neither is your problem no money. You have money for everything else you want. The government steals and wastes enough in 1 year to shelter you 10 times over. You think it is hopeless. Well, it is if you don't do anything. Further, remember, most of your politicians are not on that bus to the moon or Mars. Most don't have even a ticket to the shelters already built. Remember that do-it-yourself laundry? And the barber shop within the shopping mall inside the shelter at Raven Rock. No, not all the politicians are in dash. Most, by a large majority, are just like you, sitting ducks on a poisoned pond. You have to be more determined that either your elected representatives or the Soviet general staff. To do this, you must first exercise faith in something beyond bombs, missiles, and armies. Suicide. If your house were to catch fire this very day, would you snatch your family and run outside to safety? Or, would you throw yourself to the floor and stamp your feet and have a fit? Would you just tantrum and bewail the injustice of being inside a burning house? How about if the house has no insurance? Would you continue to rage and fit, or would you grab those kids and get out? Would you grab the kids and run even if you could never afford to buy another house? What about if you had to spend the next 5 years in a tent? Then why in the world don't you demand of Congressman that he build you a shelter, or he will spend the rest of his life in a tent? Listen here to two main arguments that are used to oppose having the government build shelters for its people. All the other arguments are but smokescreens. 1. I would rather die than face a post-nuclear war world, when, really, you don't know a blame thing about a post-nuclear war world. 2. If we start building shelters, the Soviets will attack us. So be it. The alternative. Your world is a world in which nuclear war is a Soviet strategic reality, written into Soviet strategic planning. Read it for yourselves, it is not a secret document. Nuclear war is just as much a possibility as is surrender to the Soviet Union, yet I don't hear any of you saying I'd rather die than see the US surrender to the Soviet Union. You better review the facts of experience. Most people would be far better off to walk out of a post-attack shelter alive and well, to face the realities of life, even including military invasion, than to live in a world in which the US has surrendered to the Soviet Union. Do you remember a little quote, "We will bury you"? That, dear friends, means bury you. I hereby recommend to you, another book please, What to Do When the Russians Come, A Survivor's Guide. Robert Conquest and John M. White, Stein and Day, 1984. How about considering the murder of 20 million to 30 million Russians, including a million Communist Party members? Do you think one Mr. Gorbachev changes Satan's plan after eons of time passage? Hardly. Why live? God says in your book of Proverbs, all they that hate me love death, and Psalms reads thusly, the right hand of the Lord is exalted, the right hand of the Lord doth valiantly. I shall not die, but live, and declare the works of the Lord. The Lord hath chastened me sore, but he hath not given me over unto death. Which one describes your attitude? Do you love death more than a good hard fight? Do you think death is preferable to a possibly difficult daily life for a while? Further, while you are sharing some rather nice camaraderie with your building neighbors, you can declare the works of God. You are working on the basis of more of the lies you have been spoon-fed. I tell you truth, you can very nicely survive a nuclear war. You, dear ones, are again victims of the lie. How can it be that surviving a nuclear war, that you don't know anything about, is seemingly worse than going into the front lines to fight a military battle? Those are your babies either way. Either calls for personal victory over fear. Get fear under control and you can handle anything. General Patton put it very well for you. Your job, soldiers, is not to die for your country. Your job is to get the other poor, dumb bastard to die for his country. You don't even send your sons off to battle to get killed. Why would you stand by and see them, along with you, wiped out in pure foolishness? The time to get informed about the situation is most surely before, for there won't be any afterwards. How about, I'd rather have my children die with me, too, rather than face a post-nuclear world. What does that really mean? We shouldn't spend $300 per person in order to give us a fighting chance at survival. Forget about the kids. Remember one call Jim Jones suicide called? Has anyone thought to ask the kids what they think about it? More nearly, this all means that you would rather see your children incinerated, or given into Soviet slavery and murder, than to pay for some holes in the ground that you can jump into. If that day arrives, probably won't arrive if you take the measures now. How could anyone believe the above? Easy. How many of you knew about arms sales to Iran? The enemies have pulled off one of the most successful psychological warfare operations in the history of man. Satan is a very clever adversary. It is seen most clearly in the statement by Soviet Premier Khrushchev, the survivors will envy the dead. He did not believe that garbage for 5 seconds or for 100 billion rubles. He and his successors went out and built an excellent civil defense system for the Soviet people. They have spent a fortune to increase the likelihood that their people will be the survivors who envy the dead. More to the point, they have done what is necessary to increase the likelihood that you in the US will be the dead who will be envied. What happens when you cannot pay them to not murder you? Of course, they will murder you. What happens to the hen who no longer lays eggs, or the cow who ceases to give milk? Americans have had their thoughts directed by people who really would rather take a chance with a surrender to the Soviets and who think that they will do better than all the other leaders of opinion who thought they could work out a deal with the Soviets. They died in prison camps or jails. But before they died, they delivered their nations into the hands of the enemy. They did it by paralyzing the average citizen through fear. What if we don't cooperate? Life wouldn't be worth living without. Without what? You fill in the blanks because it is your neck and the lives of your loved ones, including your nation. You have been the victims of a brilliant, devilish program of thought control. You have been exposed to 40 years of a continuing theme: life isn't worth living after a nuclear war. Nonsense. Life is always worth living, unless it costs you your soul, your honor, or your first principles of life. People in the West who used to know better about what life is all about have allowed themselves to be emotionally seduced by a myth that nothing will survive an atomic attack. Go back a bit please, and get God back into your picture. Go back and recall some of the stories. Most of your children have never even heard them. Sick. Think of Joseph in Pharaoh's prison, Daniel in the lion's den, David and Goliath, the three, Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego in the furnace. Well, this one is most similar. If you don't remember them, then it's long past time you look them up. Each event led directly to victory in a most magnificent way. Will God do less for you? You have grown soft and spoiled. Your nation was pioneered by Pilgrims and Puritans in New England and Englishmen in Virginia who experienced poverty, bad weather, and literal starvation in the early years of your nation. The men who fought the revolution over a century later put their lives and property on the line. They paid a heavy price. Yet some of their heirs, you, are afraid of maybe facing a world without luxury and hang 10 shirts, ops, and Reeboks. The difference between a promised land and a wilderness is the faith and dedication of the people who inherit it. If men fear life beyond nuclear war more than they fear nuclear war itself, then they have in principle committed suicide already. I would guess, further, that you probably have not thought very much farther toward what happens to you after you die rather than face a post-nuclear war world. There are some places even hotter and more uncomfortable than even a nuclear war, dear brethren. Think it over. Your country has no nuclear blast shelters because Congress in its suicidal wisdom has reflected the suicidal hearts of some of the voters. The rest have just sat around sleeping. How could it have happened? The people who fought World War II on two fronts are afraid of surviving the next war. Not afraid of the next war, afraid of surviving it. There are 3 possible reasons. 1. You have lost your nerve and your faith in that being called God. 2. You have been duped, brainwashed and put into coma. And 3. All of the above. There is hope if number 2 is correct. If number 1 is correct, you fall to the Soviets. It is the end of your world. Let old ancient Ashta tell you something important. At the end of any civilization, the people lose their nerve. It happened to the Lemurians, the Atlanteans, the Greeks, the Romans, and it will happen eventually to the communists. The question always remains, however, when? Will you allow your civilization to go first? Caught in the fire. A second blaring reason why Americans say to themselves that life wouldn't be worth living in the world beyond nuclear war is that they see no hope to survive the initial Holocaust. Without shelters, this perception is absolutely correct, they won't survive. So in mental self-defense, they implicitly say to themselves, since I can't do anything to survive, and since a nuclear war will destroy me and everything on earth that I hold dear, I might as well assume that it won't happen. Yet it may happen. So I'll escape from the mental anguish by telling myself and anyone who mentions nuclear war that I'd rather not survive. You have placed yourself and your lives in a fire trap with no fire escapes. If that nuclear fire comes, you won't be able to escape unless you have taken steps beforehand. But, apparently, seeing no way to get the escape route built, you consoled yourselves with the thought that life just wouldn't be worth living after a nuclear attack. This becomes a source of the very paralysis that prevents you from pressuring your political leaders to build you the shelters that you desperately need. Life most certainly is worth living. God honored you with that gift, foolish ones. The syndrome of suicide is morally wrong. Most of you really don't accept it, but when considering this one instance nuclear war, you have been persuaded by your enemies to make an exception, and your own fears have multiplied this lie's influence. It has produced political paralysis that has led you to the brink of disaster as a nation. Your peoples are so bored, unhappy and miserable in mass, that every other means of suicide is being practiced. Couldn't you get your bored masses moving on something that would produce them life worth living? So be it. It will ultimately be your own choices. A very good old saying is, for whosoever will save his life shall lose it, and whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. Pretty good spokesman. 2. Don't let the good life cost your life. Here is Ashta with another stolen story. I shall give abundant credit and honor to the ones providing me with a human version of this mess you are in, later. For now I am going to continue to borrow. A very brilliant historian who grew up in Hungary tells the following story. His nation suffered the horrors of the Nazis from 1938 to 1945, and then it fell into the hands of the communists. Now, this man knows about tyranny. He said that most people sat in their homes waiting for the new communist government to take over. They hoped that they would be able to live in relative comfort, the way they had lived before the tyrants came. They were wrong. By the time they learned how wrong they had been, it was too late. It was a hard way to learn the above-quoted biblical principle. If you try to hang on to some earthly thing for dear life, you will eventually find out how dear life really is. There was a way out for a brief period of time, but only a few people took it. It involved walking away from literally everything a person owned. If a person looked as though he intended to flee, he would never make it. A man, his wife, and the children would set out for a stroll. They carried nothing, except perhaps a picnic basket. A suitcase would have been fatal to the plan, and possibly fatal to the people. The family's appearance indicated that they were going for an outing. The father might say hello in a friendly way to a policeman or some other official along the way. He would then buy a train ticket for the next town down the line toward the border. That raised no suspicions. At the next train station, he would get off, go to the window, and buy a train ticket for the next town, and so on, until they were 2 towns from the border. Then they would get off the train and do their best to walk to freedom across the countryside. This escape method was limited to people who accurately assessed what was coming. They counted the cost and decided that it was better to leave everything behind. If they got across the border, they survived, at least for enough time to get across another border. They soon found ones waiting on the far side to receive and tend them. But they could take nothing of value with them unless it could be completely and easily concealed. Most people didn't do it. They valued their immovable possessions too highly. Their possessions in effect owned them. They became the possessed. In some cases, their possessions cost them their very lives. They lost their freedom because they wouldn't pay the price when it was still available. They would not walk to freedom. The iron bars of totalitarianism closed in around them, their children, their grandchildren, and now their great-grandchildren. The good life cost them their freedom, and it didn't last more than a few weeks or months after the political bars clanged shut. Who do you think is on the other side of the Berlin Wall? Have you forgotten who runs the other half of that city? Further, how much stuff do you think is going on in the other dimension after you commit suicide? You better face the evidence, and if you are rational, you will say to yourselves, not only could it happen, the Soviets and the Red Chinese have spent the equivalent of hundreds of billions of dollars on the assumption that it is going to happen. Ashta is here to disturb your nappy and ruin your illusion. You don't want to think about nuclear war? So be it, for you are going to have one, and it is not very far out there in front of you. You have to work like the devil has, quickly and thoroughly. Respite please, Dharma. Ashta to stand by. Out. Chapter 10. Rec number 3, Ashta. Monday, September 11th, 1989, 5:30 p.m., Year 3, Day 026. Ashta regarding Cooper. Ashta present to commune briefly before we move on with our survival journal. I am proud to have witnessed our little troops under pressure today. We know it is most difficult for you ones to be caught in the middle of testing situations, but you just witnessed one of the dark forces getting his hand called. I stand with Commander Hayton in renouncement of one William Cooper. He is a dupe at the least, or a deliberate tool of darkness. It is a good example of one sent forth to give the party line. Dear ones, we used none of his information which was not already published elsewhere to avoid the very thing he has claimed. He is sent forth to soft pedal the portion of the government. Now watch the clues as I lay them forth. He says they acted as they thought best to control panic. They acted to deceive you citizens into your own demise. Hayton very carefully omitted use of any of Mr. Cooper's assumptions or conclusions. He has come forth to make money from the public and was quite frankly terrified he would find his name on the list of ones deliberately setting forth false information, i.e., regarding the list involved in blackmouthing Billy Meyer. There are no bad little gray men set forth to enslave you. The space people in your country have been most badly used. When they refused to assist your government with technology desired, your ones got really nasty. Well, all space personnel who can come into your space have advanced knowledge and none of your ones are a match. Let me tell you what happened, as we speak of things such as blackmail. Your government applied the pressure with a very cute little scenario. There would be an all-out thrust to bring terror and fear against any aliens coming into your space. Cooper spoke enough truth to throw you off, as is always the case. There would be terrorist situations set up and the aliens would be blamed and the hostility would be incredible when any of us would make an appearance. Mr. Cooper, just as Mr. Steiger, and others are on a deceitful mission. I do not wish to further detail it in this journal which will go public. Let him sue God. Let me remind you of guidelines for judgment. Anyone who claims, oh my, in the wondrous name of God and Christ, to be risking his life to bring truth to the peoples, and then threatens to sue one over revealing the same already public truth, is a phony. Further, who is he going to sue? God. If he did not recognize Haton/Aton in that document, then he is certainly not one of you nor us. Also, if he discounts the remainder of the document brought to you by God as being false, he lies. He lies, for if he had all the other information he claims, he knows the truth of the remainder. So let him sue. Great, wonderful, grand, it will only serve to stir up interest in that community and the truth will get out all the faster. If your printer does not wish to print it, we will most certainly print it elsewhere. The book will now be desired just because of the controversy. You have done your job. He will spill it all at the Sedona meeting and stir everyone to get your hook just as soon as they can beg, borrow, or steal it. If what Mr. Cooper says is truth, then he discounts every channel and receiver for the higher powers, such as Tuyata. Oh, she can say, well, Haton that Dharma receives is a different aspect. No, Chelis, it is not different, and in this instance he discounts God himself. There must be this sorting, and if you allow yourselves to be intimidated by threats, so be it. Do you really think he wants such a thing in the courts? Don't be silly, he is scared out of his wits. Make sure he gets none of our work. Yes, I know you thought, well, stop thinking we had to allow it to come this far and that we could nail it immediately and firmly. If one really wants to get truth in knowledge to the people, you ask everyone who receives to reprint and scatter, just as the ones who have done the most work on a shelter to save you once they really want to save all of you, IT also saves them. No, we are always watching, dear hearts. Oh yes, one other thing, Haton placed Mr. Cooper on the list of protected ones because the minute this refutation comes public, his life isn't worth your proverbial tinker's dam. The big black boys play rough and he will wish he had not fallen to the ego trip. Further, whoever has set up this meeting, I request be watched carefully, for there is trouble in paradise. You still have some of our very close ones on distractor side trip. We are always monitoring. So be it. We know our ones, Little Sparrow, we know our ones, and Sananda has it all under control. The sorting will be swift and sure and quickly come. Let us just continue to do our jobs and respond to the signs. Thank you, your Sibber is most pleased in your actions. There will be every effort put forth to shut you down. When it boils down to truth, Spacegate is not like M.R. Cooper's, and he knows it better than all others. Perhaps we should write a full-length journal on the false teacher of M.R. Cooper. Perhaps you should print this and allow Oberly to read it prior to speaking with AZ. My blessings and gratitude, dear friends. Chapter 11. Rec number 4, Sananda. Monday, September 11th, 1989, 9:30 p.m., Year 3, Day 026. Sananda regarding Cooper. Sananda, in your presence, Dharma. Blessings, Little Sparrow, for your heart is heavy and I shall lighten it. Few there are who will fearlessly go forth and print mine words and carry of mine sword. I shall come right to the point of mine coming forth in the midst of our brethren's most critical messages to clear some points for ye ones. Will ye fold at the first counter-attack? Will ye turn thy backs upon me? Ye bear truth, thine enemy bears lies, and yet ye fold unto his encampment? Do what ye will with the press in Sedona, for I care not, they are not in harmony with mine truth. They bear the drivel of any and all who claim to have communication and insight into the world beyond. They have nothing to offer except lies unto mine lambs. The book Haton has penned is truth, the book the one Cooper has penned is lies. Which will ye choose to put to print? So be it, Chelis, for ye too will be of the testing. I care not where the book is printed, one do care that mine own ones fall to the threats of slime. Ye would bend to one who threatens a human lawsuit. Do ye forget who has penned our book? Do ye believe or do ye not, for ye must be in the deciding now? Ye shall be given all the backup. Confirmation and proof. Ye need to shred M.R. Cooper's testimony, and we shall make sure our team has it to confront in that dandy little meeting in Sedona. I weary of ones upon your place crucifying myself again and again. Further, I weary of you allowing of it. There is not only naught from M.R. Cooper's material we have taken of import, but further, we refute that which he has proclaimed. Will ye just back off and let his lies stand? He claims thy space brethren are here to enslave you. He claims the government handled Eve and the chlorophyll utilizing entities simply died in a crash. They were murdered, incinerated, by your own government. And they had come forth to give you assistance as thine earth evolved into an uninhabitable land. Humans murder all that is glorious and precious, but thy rewards are at hand. I, Sananda, will no longer tolerate the martyrdom of mine workers. You have received truth and ye are not strong enough to stand in the face of the first feeble attack against ye ones? Then we shall go elsewhere. I assure you, dear beloved Thedra is not intimidated by these frauds. How will ye change of thine world if ye surrender to any cross expression? William Cooper is a face of that which is unworthy to walk in mine beloved handmaiden's footprints, and ye shall not yield unto him, ye shall not yield. Haton brings truth unto you, and you would cast him aside for the foolish fears of ones in a printing shop. So be it, for it shall be noted in the life records. I care not wherein these messages are printed, they must be printed, as thy portion of this planet is destined to doom if ye do not take action, and rapidly. Dharma and Commander Ashta have worked diligently for some 10 hours a day at the keyboard and additional hours in study. You are in emergency crisis, yet have building and safety shelters to be completed. Ye have no time for playing of games with thy new age children who play at play and show. Show and tell enough, jealous, for I grow most weary. Most weary. I would suggest you attend sister's opinion further. I suggest you serve M.R. Cooper with a lawsuit for utilizing my material. Let us see how that fits and what he does. I would be most pleased to meet this one in the Supreme Court of your land. Bring him forth if he dares. But 'tis you who become weak, mine own. So be it. So be it. It is only the lives of every man, woman, and child in thy place at stake. 'Tis thy choice. If our words do not go forth and subterranean shelters built and truth brought forth regarding thy cosmic brethren, thine lives will be most miserable. Will mine troops fail me at the gate? I think not. I fully propose you meet M.R. Cooper with a countersuit on the 28th of September. He has stolen from every honest historian regarding the event of UFO study. I denounce him as an enemy to me and unto mine people. I have countless places whereby to publish mine words, so ye of mine, concern not. It is a time of weeding and sorting. The wheat shall be separated from the tares. It must be now, for it is the time of choosing. Go forward and publish mine truth, lest ye be costing the lives of thine innocent brethren who dared speak the truth afore yet. Ye who doubt the truth of this receiver had best consider very carefully that which ye do. This one and her mate are in the hand of Atan God. Ye denounce this one's words as false, and ye shall be stricken with the dumbness of ignorance, for in thy proclamation of wisdom ye are most foolish indeed. Further, ye who would cast stones at mine handmaiden, mine beloved sister, shall reap the wind as thine reward, for ye are vile, and what ye sow thereof shall ye reap. I shall not be set aside in thy corners any longer, nor shall I accept thine persecution, for ye are foolish, and ye know not that which ye do. Thine world is a Armageddon. Do ye not understand of me? How long will ye play at your fool's game? So be it, f or it ist high choosing, and the time for choosing is at a close. Neither will mine fledglings be permitted persecution, for they are but mine children who do mine will. Ye who attack them shall be attacked, and mine is a two-edged sword that shall cut to the quick. Heed mine words, for I am an angry God, and I am the Lord thy God, and ye had best not misunderstand of mine purpose, for of mine intent. These blessed ones are in the protection of mine wings, and they shall prevail. I care not what ye do with the drivel of the infidels who bear false testimony against mine cosmic brethren. I prefer ye be bright enough to toss it into thine garbage pails wherein it belongs. Ye are the people of the lies. Oh, would it be only one lie, but 'tis many, many, many. I suggest you toss of M.R. Cooper's garbage out, and gather commanders Hatons and Ashtas unto thine bosom, and take action to save of thine peoples. Ye are so at risk, and they are giving forth the information which will save of the masses. So be it, and Selah. I take mine leave of thee, little one, and I give unto thee the rest that you require, that we might move on the morrow. Ye are blessed of me, and I hold thee close. Ye knew that ye would be in persecution, but it pains me to witness, for I see that mine beloved ones are so vulnerable. Go to thy rest, for our work must go forth. As thine sister has reminded you, fear not, for I am with you. I am the captain, and no storm can prevail against our vessel. My blessings upon my loyal and faithful, and an especial blessing upon thee and Oberly, who serves in honor and humility. God resides with thee. For he is thine Sibber. Great blessings be unto the ones who walk in thy location with thee, for they are most blessed of me. Know I care for thee and dwell with thee. Amen. Rest well, for ye are in mine care, and I stand aside that ye may go unto thine rest. Please see to it that mine beloved sister receives of this word. I am that I am. I am Sananda. Chapter 12. Rec number 1, Ashta. Tuesday, September 12, 1989, 7 a.m., Year 3, Day 027. What will cause you to listen? Dearly beloved, we gathered here this day in memory of. Perhaps you can fill in those empty spaces. More likely there will be no one to fill the role if action is forsaken. I am not come to give you peace. I am Ashta, and I come to scare you into action. I come with the radiant one that you might know you have help if you but ask. I deplore scare tactics. What else would cause you to listen? Receiver no longer fears. We have passed one hurdle regarding my receiver this day. She no longer has any fear of printing truth, for if it is truth, it belongs to no single man. I come to assist those ones who came before and offered all they could. They will now have help. Further, we will renounce any and all who give forth false information regarding your brothers who come into your spaces to assist you. We shall do it over and over and over until you, the public, hear it. We mind not controversy. Man pays attention, albeit only slight and passing, to controversy. Do you really believe any judge would prosecute and put into a jail a 90-year-old handmaiden of Esu Jesus Emmanuel Sananda? Come now, ye of faint hearts. If we use earth-produced material, we will splatter the advertising in behalf of those ones to the winds, that they might be given recognition. Cooper's false lectures. Ye ones who effort at preventing the truth from being published shall reap those winds, so be it. This most surely includes one labeled Milton William Cooper, who brings forth false lectures about your space brothers and their intent. You, as a nation, have and are being sorely deceived. Cosmic law does not allow the tampering or physical damaging of ones on the Earth-level planes. Any dark brotherhood can only act through the dense physical forms of the human manifest. The ones you accuse of damaging you, M.R. Cooper, came to assist you and discover how best your species can be evacuated from your death trap. You have sorely used and maligned your intergalactic brothers. No one has ever been so much as lifted up on a craft without prior contract and agreement of that one. If you forget your contracts, 'tis your own agreement. So be it. I speak of it, for you will be confronted continually with pure garbage, and we, henceforth, shall refute it at every opportunity. I, Ashta, am the commander of these fleets of ones coming to the aid of your species, and I honor my responsibilities. Of course there are ones in trouble in the outer dimensions, of course there are fallen ones and dark ones, but they are not impacting Earth in a manner being scattered about by vicious deceivers and bringers of terror. You are in danger at the hands of your own evil leapers and false teachers, yet feast on the carcasses of thine brethren who have come to bring thee life. So be it, for that which is thrust forth and sowed, shall be reaped in like kind. Let us move back to the information regarding your nuclear war plight. I cannot urge you often enough to get the book, Fighting Chance, 10 Feet to Survival, Arthur Robinson, Ph.D., and Gary North, Ph.D., American Bureau of Economic Research, P.O. Box 8204, Fort Worth, Texas, 76124. They, like us, copyright a book only for content truth. Please copy, photocopy any way you wish to get the word forth. We copyright only to ensure quality of reproduction in truth, so that there is an original copy which can bear truth of content if our enemies, your enemies, misquote our messages. Ones on your place can sue us if you please. It may, however, be a bit difficult. How does one sue Aten, God? How does one sue a Commander Haton of Intergalactic Fleet Command? How will you sue me, Ashta, Overall Fleet Commander? Do you think Jesus Emmanuel Sananda needs of your puny books from which to copy? The only imaginable reason is that you ones cannot come into comfort with that one to whom you pray for yourself. So be it. Let us move on, Dharma, with a bit of a story which should shake a tiny bit. White House procedures in U.S. The U.S. has what are called emergency actions procedures. In case of a first strike by the Soviets on the U.S., the president has to respond before the first missile strike, within 25 minutes for land-based ICBMs launched from the Soviet Union, and within perhaps 10 to 15 minutes for nearby submarine-launched missiles. That is pretty short notice. Further, for you or ours who question, won't Space Brothers disarm them? No, not unless they are headed into our space and reach 150 miles above your surface. There are some other allowed interventions, but I most surely will not print them for all the world to see. We are on standby and we will be allowed to evacuate our own workers abiding on your planet, so I suggest you get your priorities straight, you who claim to bring forth our truth, for it is up to Sananda who stands at the sorting gatehouse door. You had also better be remembering the terminology gatehouse door. This will bring in names, for example, for it is quite public knowledge and has often been laughed at in your social circles and political cartoons. When in doubt, always laugh it off and perhaps it will go away. Bill Gully used to be in charge of seeing to it that the procedures that the president is to follow are coordinated. He worked for Presidents Johnson, Nixon, and Ford as a military liaison agent. He was a retired military man. He was the head of the military office at the White House under President Ford. This brings you to the subject of a manual. The manual is the White House Emergency Procedures Manual, WHEP for short. You Americans speak only in alphabets when there is anything of semi-importance. The White House has a copy, and so does the Pentagon. It spells out exactly what steps the president must take to achieve a particular response by the military. Only it wasn't an it, it was a they. The two manuals for years didn't agree with each other, and nobody knew it. Therein lies a tale of lies. Upon confirmation that a launch has taken place, this must be confirmed, eating up more precious time, the Pentagon Command Center signals the White House and the various military commands around the world. When the operator at the White House military switchboard receives this alert, he sounds an alert. The warrant officer with the manual is supposed to immediately rush to the president. The warrant officer then opens the manual to get at the instructions in a little black book. The warrant officer has the combination to the lock. Oh yes, it is locked securely. The president does not. The president, you see, is supposed to be carried by helicopter to a nearby air base to board one of 4 huge flying electronic command posts, which is supposed to be ready for takeoff by the time he arrives. Or he can be flown to one of several sites, supposedly classified, but which the Soviets know all about and have targeted precisely. Again, I urge you to refer, if you don't have, Spacegate. The veil removed and refer to the section on the Doomsday Plan. M.R. Cooper, you have failed to note very much information in Spacegate. But what if the president isn't home? What if he is off fishing at his favorite fishing hole in Maine? Surely the Soviets would know, for the Soviets read the newspapers. Or, the president could go into a 1-mile deep hole beneath the White House to protect himself. Oops, there goes Ashta again with logical thinking. There is not one. The Soviet premier has one, but your president doesn't. That should tell you just about everything you need to know for confirmation. The president plans to be long gone, brothers, and you will all be left with no deep holes to jump into at all. Now let us look at your comedy of foolishness. In 1975, Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, tried out the system. He and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff scheduled a test. Rumsfeld picked up General Brown's emergency telephone. He didn't get the president. He got someone on the White House signal board. Rumsfeld identified himself and asked to speak to the president. Rumsfeld later claimed that he waited 10 minutes. The operator insisted that it was only 3. Which do you think it was? Do you hear a loud boom in the background? Rumsfeld finally asked what was taking so long. The answer: I'm trying to find Carl Morgan, who was director of the military office. When Rumsfeld asked why he couldn't speak to the president, he was informed that he had to be cleared by Carl Morgan before he could speak to the president. But the operator couldn't find Carl Morgan. Well, tough luck, Mr. Secretary of Defense. Also tough luck, for millions of Americans, had there been an attack. Mr. Gully commented, so here you had a situation where the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the duty general in the Pentagon Command Center, believed all along for many years that all they had to do in a crisis was pick up that emergency phone and the president would immediately answer it. It would never have happened. What were the excuses? You would enjoy the book Mr. Gully wrote, Breaking Cover, Bill Gully, New York, Simon & Schuster, 1980, the above is on PG 185. What had happened? One of Gully's predecessors under Mr. Kennedy saw that there was no clear understanding of the emergency procedures. So he wrote up the procedures. He wanted to keep both the Pentagon and White House staff happy, so he wrote up 2 sets of instructions, with each group getting the set that made them important in the list of people to be notified. Then, in order to make his own office seem crucial, he wrote in a clearing role for himself which slowed down the whole alert. The person calling in had to be cleared by him. Interestingly, but not surprising, neither side ever knew that there were 2 different sets of instructions until Rumsfeld made his fateful call over a decade later. When Gully came in as the new officer, he made the changes. But they didn't help much, he said. The president doesn't have the manual until the warrant officer brings it to him. The warrant officer knows what all the papers mean supposedly. The president never sees it beforehand. He could, of course, but he never asks, Gully said. Warrant officer, by the way, is a peculiar rank, above a sergeant but below a second lieutenant. Whenever Jimmy Carter went to his hometown of Plains, Georgia for a visit, the aide with the manual stayed in a hotel room in Americus, 10 miles down the road. Here is a better one. Before Mr. Gully, the manual was safely locked in a nice safe nearby bomb shelter, and only the warrant officer had the combination. There was no way for the warrant officer to get it to the president in time, if the Soviets used a submarine-launched missile. Gully said in 1980, if the balloon ever did go up, it would be pure pandemonium. Ashta says, not for very long, Mr. Gully. He said this long after he made the system more efficient. Sick. What if the enemy killed the president and vice president in a coordinated attack? Gully shows how easy it would be for a small terrorist group to get into the White House, let alone a well-trained KGB terrorist group. There will be no retaliation, unless the Soviets give us a warning for some reason as part of a particular strategy. It's their choice. Unless you had a protected president and foolproof communications, Gully says, you could not retaliate. You have neither, he says, and it was certainly his job to know. So much for America's winning nuclear war strategy, mutual assured destruction. I would say that is very well named, MAD. Dear ones, are you feeling really secure now? Can you climb above hearing this from a space commander? The facts are before you in good old Earth American language. What is it that you do not understand? Dharma, take a little break. Oberle may wish to forward some of the opening of this to Sedona. Ashta to stand by. Out. Chapter 13. Rec number 2, Ashta. Tuesday, September 12, 1989, 10 a.m., Year 3, Day 027. Ashta to resume. Let us move backward a bit and speak of what might happen if you start an all-out effort to get shelters. What might Russia do? Face truth, above all other arguments that could block the construction of a shelter system for Americans, is that if you begin a crash program of building bomb shelters, would the Soviets launch a preemptive nuclear strike against you? That is the single point that is a major source of the political paralysis that keeps your nation at the mercy of the Soviets, and they know it. This paralysis gives them the time to continue to make their own arrangements, relocate their launch sites, work out their satellite spy systems, build up their offensive forces, their defensive forces, and, currently the most important, their system of allies. Let me comment here, please, as an example. Recently, Poland has assumed its own government with the communists as only participants. Dear ones, they set it up that way. Things are so terrible in Poland that there is little a new government can do worse. The communists can now come in and assist and win one more battle for loyalty. Mr. Gorbachev will ring the chimes, the US will foot the cost, and roses will bloom in Poland, and you help them at every turn. Ones in Poland have already forgotten the main point of freedom. The majority think it is plentiful supplies, food, and progressive business. The people are angry and militant and actually dare the new government to put up changes now or back to the old system. It must be realized that the point above has almost nothing to do with national defense. There is no plan for your defense, except the now preposterous threat of your massive nuclear retaliation against a well-protected Soviet Union. You have no strategic defense, neither the off-the-shelf system of high frontier, which could be deployed now, nor a high-tech laser system. There are no shelters for our people. If the question has nothing to do with national defense, then what is it really all about? Simple. This question concerns only the proper timing of surrender. Moreover, Appeasement is a policy that has, in the history of tyrannies, repeatedly led to war rather than deterred war. Soviet tyranny is no exception. The Soviets understand strength and have backed down repeatedly when faced with resolute and principled opposition. Into vacuums of weakness, however, they expand like a malignancy. It is more than that, it also has a great deal to do with the Christ forces against the evil, God-denying ones. I repeat what has been often told unto you, darkness cannot prevail in the Christ God light when the laws of God and the creation are being brought forth. If you stand in truth in the shelter of God, you will be protected. Dark pacts and secret contracts with our enemy forces will not be sanctioned. Appeasement has not worked. There is a projected feeling in the high levels of your government that appeasement works. Appeasement to the devil never works. After all, you have been doing your best not to anger the Soviets for a quarter of a century, and you have somehow avoided a nuclear war. Why would they give up the cow as long as she produces milk? That after-the-fact reasoning ignores the fact that for much of that time, you were actually stronger than were the Soviets. It required over 30 years for the Soviets to build their overwhelming military machine and for appeasement in the US to weaken you to your current position of impending disaster. While you were building, they were digging protective shelters in preparation, so you got ahead, so what? If you had simultaneously had a shelter system, you would have no threat today at all. Appeasement has not worked. Only recently are you beginning to actually use it from a position of weakness. If you do not immediately stop this policy of foolishness and get a protection system in place and get a defense survival method, then, you are quite lost. You do have one long shot in the postponement and appeasement question. It assumes that if you just stall, hoping for a way out, there will be some kind of unforeseen miracle event that will destroy the Soviet Union, a revolution, a plague, or an attack by China. In older days, you would have simply called it the work of God. You would have asked God to help you, but, then, He would have had you build a survival system. Today, your elected managers and experts are too sophisticated for all that, it seems. They agree with the Marxists, life is governed by historical forces, not a personal God. You even take the ability to pray at school away from your babies. Do you ever wonder whose side you are really on? Well, just be patient, surely something wondrous will turn up to save you. It didn't turn up for Babylon the night the Medo-Persians invaded 2,500 years ago. It didn't turn up for Carthage when they voluntarily disarmed themselves at the insistence of Rome 2,000 years ago. It didn't turn up for the Aztecs in Mexico or the Incas in Peru over 400 years ago. I like the author's statement regarding this: sometimes there are no more rabbits in a civilization's hat. Lenin called it rope. So you face a dilemma. Do you take steps now to reduce your total vulnerability in the long run, but risk total annihilation in the short run? Do you continue to submit to the Soviet Union's implied and explicit demand that you remain as hostages to their generals? Do you play the China card and try to get China to attack the Soviet Union? Or do you just sit tight, hoping that nothing bad will happen, and pretend that the Soviets are not deploying their fifth generation of mobile nuclear missiles? Or do you make yet another American taxpayer-financed business deal? The great Russian writer Alexander Solzhenitsyn recounts a story of the early days of the Soviet Union. This is going to pinch, so get your anti-revulsion drugs ready. I suppose that is your so-called potweed. Your forefathers made fine rope bindings with that same hemp plant. Lenin foretold this whole process. Lenin, who spent most of his life in the West and not in Russia, who knew the West much better than he knew Russia, always wrote and said that the Western capitalist will do anything to strengthen the economy of the USSR. They will compete against each other to sell us goods cheaper and sell them quicker, so that the Soviets will buy from one, rather than the other. They will bring it themselves without thinking about their future. And, in a difficult moment, at a party meeting in Moscow, he said, "Comrades, don't panic. When things go hard for us, we will give a rope to the bourgeoisie, and the bourgeoisie will hang itself." Guess who the bourgeoisie are? But then someone spoke up and asked, "But where will we get enough rope to hang the whole bourgeoisie?" Lenin spontaneously replied, "They'll supply us with it." Mr. Lenin forgot the best of his own punchline, but I, Ashta, believe he surely said it privately, with below-market loans, subsidized by their taxpayers. Dear ones, the rope peddlers have dominated your nation's dealings with the Soviet Union for 7 decades, peddlers who are mute, deaf and blind. Dear ones, labor union officers have written about it, conservatives have written about it, and historians shout and bellow about it, but unfortunately, you taxpayers bury your heads and refuse to know about it. Has not thy Lord thy God told you that he is with you and that you must stand strong and unbending in the truth? He has told you, "Fear not, neither be dismayed, for he shall go whithersoever ye of him shall go." You ones are at the gate of Armageddon, and you must realize the prophecies are upon you. Armageddon provides the way. I shall point out a few reasons that you can get your tunnels built because of the blueprint for Armageddon. Your prophets of old told you, and now I remind you. The war will begin in horror in the Middle East. The red bear from the north will descend upon those ones already in battle, and then the hordes from the oriental races shall confront the bear. That would indicate to me that you are a bit of an afterthought, although I am confident your leaders will have your sons off to death and dying in the middle somewhere. It does not mean that all your coastal cities, etc. will not be destroyed by nuclear weapons and all of your military and strategic places wiped off the map, but annihilation is not intended for you ones of Christ's armies. That, further, doesn't mean the whole problem is off. It means that you must work like little beavers to get your dens dug while the Soviets are distracted by world affairs in their own nest. You can if you will, you could if you would. Dharma, we will call this book, Survival is only 10 feet from hell, you can if you plan, you could if you would, and it is fact if you act. You aren't invading anything, further, you are not using force to gobble up anything or anyone. You are not to be military conquerors with a direct command from God. You are, however, supposed to pay attention to God's laws. You are supposed to honor God by being a God-loving and respecting people who don't continually, defiantly violate God's ethical standards. You must begin with faith in God and confidence in His power. You demonstrate your faith and confidence by obeying Him. Any national defense system that is based only on a new gadget in the sky or a hole in the ground isn't going to work for you. It isn't even going to be tried, my friends. Do you need a bit more proof? Where is your civil defense program? Where are your anti-missile and anti-aircraft missiles? Where is your space-based defense? Where are your mobile missiles? Where are your cruise missiles? You're over 10,000 mass-produced, discount, 1 megaton, slow, purely defensive, CA-11M back. We've made a mistake, and therefore get the president's finger off the trigger retaliatory cruise missiles. What of your stealth protection, a $500 million white elephant? What of your submarine-based Trident missile system, well, only 2 out of 3 blow up on launch. The evil has devoured your own selves right up to your ears while you have slept and dreamed of the World Series baseball game. While you wonder if Pete Rose will get back into baseball now that the baseball commissioner has been bumped off, what about Jimmy Bakker and poor little Tammy? Will Zsa Zsa Gabor get a fine for striking a big old police officer? Do you think you just might be in trouble? Oh, you say the aforementioned items aren't there? How astute you have become, they are not there. Where did the over $300 billion a year for defense go? Well, you might ask and I might tell you, or Hayton might remind you in Spacegate. The veil removed and spiral to economic disaster. You ones are in a real mess. Dear brethren. What about God? Are you ready to bargain? Better take time right about here to self-examine. Let's just pretend a little. The authors of Fighting Chance have a lovely little pretend game scenario I will copy verbatim. These authors want to save your lives and their own. They do not quibble about being quoted. Pretend you have shelters. Imagine that you hear the sirens wailing. An attack is coming. You may have only 15 minutes to grab your children and maybe a few personal items and make a run to the nearby shelter. More time if it is on your own property. You thank God, and Congress, for the shelter. You don't worry too much about its lack of comfort. The alternative is horrible death. You don't get too fussy in a situation like this. You are now in the shelter. The kids are crying. They are scared. You are scared. It is crowded. It is like a subway. They tighten down the blast doors. You wait. What do you think about? All the good old days? Or the hardships to come if the bombs explode? The possibility of a ground burst explosion that ends your life? What? Wives worry about absent husbands. Husbands worry about their absent wives and children. Everyone worries about the shaking of the earth. And everyone mentally begins to bargain with God. All right, start beginning. Right now, we are deadly serious. Just start making a deal with God right where you sit reading this book. God does bargain, you know, or did you know that? He did it before and he will do it again. He bargained with Abraham over the city of Sodom. Moses bargained with him for the people of Israel when God wanted to kill them, quite frankly. But remember something very, very important, God always expects you to keep your part of the bargain. What will you bargain with, then? You're in a hole. If the bombs go off overhead, you will be there for days, maybe weeks. You will go outside to a probable flattened world, always deal with the worst scenario and anything better really looks good. The peace-loving Soviets will have done their number on your nation and your neighborhood. You may not be comfortable again for some time, perhaps years. You may even be facing Cubans and Russians armed with modern weapons and poison gas. But with a system of security, you can be pretty sure you may have some of your own troops, too. You may find poison gas even. You simply do not know what you will find when you climb outside. Mainly, you will have the clothes on your back and your kids. You will also have your neighbors. And perhaps, for the first time in all of your lives, you will be neighbors. What do you trade for your life as you sit or stand in that hole in the ground? What do you offer God for allowing you to survive? The answer is simple, isn't it? The rest of your life. You offer Him your lifetime, God-fearing, law-obeying service. It is all you have got inside that shelter. Guess what? It is all you have right now. Do you think that God is impressed with your money? Where did you get your money? It was a gift from God. But thou shalt remember the Lord thy God, for it is He who giveth thee power to get wealth. What God wants from you is faithfulness. He hath shewed thee, man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. Atten speaks. I, Ashta, sit here in the presence of God, and of the one you call the Son. I, Ashta, at this very moment in thy passage of time. God says to you, and now, what do I, the Lord thy God, want of thee? To respect mine laws, to walk in mine ways, to love me and thine brothers with all thine being, and to serve me and the creation within which we are one, and with all thine soul bear truth in wisdom and knowledge. Satan shall honor no deals made with his servants. The Soviets, for he keeps no deals. Satan is the lie, my children. It is not only the ones called Soviets, it is most surely not mine children, called Russians at is the evil infested workers, and they are spread about thy garden as fruit flies on the ripened fig. I bring this information unto you that you might save of thine selves. Thy brothers of mine cosmic command fleets are blessed and willing messengers. These receivers upon thy place are equally blessed, and those who serve in their spaces in equal responsibility. They risk in thy service, man, are ye worthy of such? Ye were not when Emmanuel came among you in Galilee. Will ye be worthy of thy saving now? We shall see, we shall see. If ye make a pact with me, ye shall keep it, for I no longer accept thy lies. If ye do not keep of it, I shall be in the removing of mine ones into safety of mine higher places, and ye shall fall with thine enemy, for it is finished, ye shall now be in thy choosing. Selah. I await thine answer, for it is thine own, no other shall do it for thee. Each individual soul shall answer to mine blessed Sananda for thy passage through Gi the gate at mine gatehouse. So be it, for these things will come to pass in thy time soon. I shall return this portion unto Ashta, mine proven and beloved servant. Ye ones of earth shall heed of mine words, for I speak that which I mean. I am the Lord thy God, I am Aten of the total light of the creation. Let us allow our Father's message to be digested a bit. Dharma. Let us have respite. I will move to stand by. Salu. Chapter 14. Rec number 3 Ashta. Tuesday, September 12, 1989, 2 p.m., Year 3, Day 027. Ashta at ready. Are you safe right now? You are sitting somewhere right now reading this book. I doubt it is after the fact of attack. Just because you are not in a shelter right now, you may think you are safe. If you do, then you don't read very well. If you have turned up this book after a shelter system is intact and you are safely reading underground, then you are fine. You will survive, especially if the plans were well worked out. You need not even be uncomfortable. Perhaps you even have a reclining airline type chair. You probably have hot coffee or iced tea. That means we pulled together and pulled it off. If it is before the fact, then sadness abounds. You most surely will not make it, for you cannot survive unsheltered. Perhaps you feel fairly safe. You are safe only to the extent that the Soviets decide today not to launch a safe, clean, low-risk first strike against you. Tomorrow, they believe, it will be an even safer, cleaner, and lower risk to launch one, so they will probably wait a while longer. You are safe only for as long as the Soviet Union's Communist Party and general military staff decide to allow you to be safe for one more day. America's $300 billion a year military bureaucracy has no defense for you, except a less and less credible threat of terrorizing Soviet citizens after you are solidly dead. In short, the only reason you are not dead or dying presently is because, by the grace of God, by means of his restraining or confusing the Soviet giants, you have been given another day of precious life. God is not a mean, hating, vengeful father who wants to see you in pain and horror. He is a loving father who wishes to see you alive and thriving in love and growth as you were created to be. Make a deal with God, then keep it. He will meet you more than halfway. In fact, if you ask, he will tend you and carry you all the way. Premature attack. No, there are no guarantees that, if you begin a crash program in shelter building, you won't pressure the Soviets to speed up their plans for a full-scale nuclear war. But where are the guarantees that if you sit around doing nothing, you won't be gassed or sprayed with some incredibly dangerous biological weapon? Even in error released by your own government? If you wait, who says things are going to get better? Will the Soviets be weaker after they get a new generation of missiles? Will you be stronger? Will they be a bit more merciful, perhaps, after they get a fully deployed anti-ballistic missile system? Even your leaders who have put you to peaceful sleep do not trust them and tell you so over and over and over again. Do you think Soviet leaders will become more decent once they have more shelters for themselves and their families, a mile or so beneath the major cities and well-tended shelters in rural areas? Why are they continuing with extensive underground quarters if they expect nothing? Now here is a good one to think about. Where have you put God? Well, better decide at present. You are counting on some God act or something, to save your fannies. Funny thing is, if you had enough truth and trust in God, you could be saved without shelters. But you sure as blazes can't be safe without God or shelters. If you can get squared around with God, one sign of that fact will be that you will have ability to last long enough to get Congress to see that you really do face a national crisis. If your Congress plays around as if you were not facing literal destruction, then Congress has betrayed you into the hands of your enemies. If ever God had earthly enemies, it is the anti-God, Christ persecuting evil ones who run the Soviet Union, and they claim that title in bold, blatant pronouncement. I quote them, not my opinion. Congress had better start making deals with the voters rather than with the communists. Congress had better start making deals with God and stop making them with Satan. When you make deals with the Soviet Union, you are making deals with Satan directly. Strong language. Yes. Exaggerated nuclear danger? No, it cannot be exaggerated. Even if the threat were only imaginary, your leaders believe it, and your people are petrified because they don't know that there is a $300 solution. The Soviets are playing a waiting game. They have a billion Chinese to contend with, and you still furnish them nice things and money. They have made a huge investment in military equipment that inevitably grows old. Their economy is straining now, as they fall farther behind the West's high-technology economies, and your government relies solely on that approach, as ridiculous as that may be. Your economy is dead, also. No friends, they won't wait around long after the cow is dry. They have a growing Islamic population that wants out of the Soviet Empire. They have a sagging economy that is near collapse, also. They don't like taking risks, really, they are not stupid, they are evil. Evil is most clever, have you not noticed? A shelter system makes it harder for them to blackmail you, but they can still level your homes and buildings. That is a most powerful threat in itself, but those things and stuff can be rebuilt even better, for if you get God on your side, he comes equipped with advanced space technology to be shared brother to brother from us to you. Your rural areas would be basically untouched. If the Soviets start a nuclear war, they cannot be sure of the results. If they were absolutely sure of its positive outcome, they would have launched the attack by this time. Starting a nuclear war isn't a zero-risk game. It is becoming lower and lower risk for them, but not totally risk-free for they, too. Do not know what God will do. They actually believe in God far more than do you who proclaim as much. Further, they totally believe in Space Command, and what is more, they listen to us with both ears and both eyes. The Cosmic Council sets a few very nasty guidelines for both sides beyond which the cosmic beings will not step. If you walk the path of God and follow in his way, he will open the seas for safe passage and send our beacons to guide you. Turn away from God unto the evil of the earth ways, and he shall allow the earth to devour you, as you will have chosen the way of the dragon beast. For as we bring forth the truth unto you, you shall not be as the unknowing, ye shall then be as the fools, to perish as fools. Let's talk about shelters. The Chinese system of tunnels is the best shelter system on earth. City-dwelling Chinese citizens can move immediately into a completely protected environment from their homes, work, or other locations. Then, they simply walk out of the danger area, walk with complete protection. If fallout is severe, they remain in the tunnels or migrate through them to a safe area. Moreover, if they were to suffer an invasion, their tunnel system would serve as an invaluable defense system against Soviet ground forces, the same kind of tunnel-based military system that the communists used so effectively in Vietnam, only the Chinese have built quite roomy, comfortable channels. The shelter system certainly demonstrates that the Chinese have the will to defend their homes, families, and country. Their defensive preparations for survival are sufficient, in and of themselves, to deter Soviet aggression. Even in their largest city, they can be 30 feet underground in 7 minutes, and then simply walk to safety. No subway car crowding for 2 weeks, no danger of insufficient warning to reach shelter, and a place to sleep at night during the period of rebuilding above ground. They only lose their buildings, not their lives. Propose tunnels. Why, then, don't you propose tunnels? In your proposed system, you jump into a safe hole, but you can't walk away and hide in the countryside for several weeks. More important, the work is virtually invisible. You ones are always building and digging and putting up more of this and lots of that, and transit systems you could simply expand and build it all in at once, or excavate in virtual secrecy from beneath ground. You could be compressing sandstone bricks right at the digging sites and ship the bricks out or use them in the structures, negating the need to pile vast amounts of dirt. Further, you could even have cities underground with malls and all the doodads you ones like. You could begin to have your homes underground, your dairy herd milking barns underground, graze the cattle above on the roof, and have a survival shelter for the cows right at hand. It would provide shelter in extreme weather. In addition, your cooling and heating cost within an energy-perfect underground setting would drop to all but zero. You would only need pump ventilation systems, and that would only be necessary when all orifices would be covered with blast security doors. In preparing to get this information out to you sleeping targets, Drs. Robinson and North considered numerous shelter options and considered the political climate. They decided to propose the very best modular type protection, and reduce cost by crowding and discomfort rather than by increased risk. In that way, they are able to propose an excellent system based on $200 per person for the blast and fallout shelter, plus an additional $100 per person for food, tools, and other items to aid in survival and reconstruction after an attack. Crowding could be eliminated for an additional $50 per person. These low prices also depend upon relatively large 150-person shelters and savings from mass production and procurement during a large building program. You can't have one installed in your backyard for 5 people at those prices per person. You could if you were able to utilize compressed earth bricks from your own excavation, but that is for us to get into and not these dear earthmen. We will stick to basics here and then expand. The important points are 1. The danger is immediate. 2. Your government is not acting to meet that danger. 3. The simplest and most effective steps must be taken now, and, brothers, 3 full years have passed since the penning of this information, so deduct that from the time you need. The simplest and most effective first step is a high-quality blast shelter system for your entire population, deployed immediately. Perhaps your government will decide that you are worth more than $300 each, but less than the $1,000 required for the tunnel system. Maybe the government will decide that you are worth less than $300 but more than zero. What then? For about $1,000 per person, you could build luxurious, low-occupancy shelters of the modular type. You wouldn't want to do that, for at the same expense you could have a grand tunnel system and ensure safety. For $700 per person, $600 for the shelter and $100 for post-attack food, tools, and supplies, you could build excellent blast shelters according to current, standardized and fully effective designs with an occupancy rate of about 10 square feet and 100 cubic feet per person, and with very comfortable accommodations. They would be similar to the design proposed herein, except that there would be a lot more space per person, either more shelters or more bigger ones. They would also have more amenities. Of course, the size of shelter units is somewhat arbitrary. It is affected largely by the problems of mass production and installation of very large shelters and the inefficiencies of very small ones. Also, some localities have unique solutions available. The underground caverns in Kansas City, the deep subways of the nation's capital, and the mine tunnels of the Pacific Northwest can all be utilized instead of the standardized shelters. There is a whole tunnel system already under many of your major cities which just sit there doing nothing right now. There will be some severe problems in some areas which will offset any savings, such as New Orleans where there is such a high water table it would require more expensive shelters. Incorporation of these kinds of alternatives into the system would provide better shelters at comparable cost in a few localities. Overall, however, the cost of the entire United States shelter system would be about the same per person. How much money can be saved if you keep the shelter quality high in terms of safety but lower in terms of comfort by putting more people in the same shelters? Minor changes must be made to allow for increased ventilation, water storage, and furniture, but these don't change the cost very much. New York subway cars are designed for 2.3 square feet and 20.8 cubic feet per person. Of course, New York already has a major underground problem of old water valves that are imminent hazards to the population already, so these needs must be considered. World War II German bunkers for civil defense were designed for 2.1 square feet and about 20 cubic feet per person. The adult human body occupies about 2.3 cubic feet, so about 12% of the available volume is filled in a 20 cubic foot system. During attacks, the German bunkers were sometimes occupied at triple the design occupancy or more, but only for relatively short periods. Successful American tests have demonstrated relative comfort at about 4 square feet per person, and the Swedish official shelter recommendation is for 5.4 square feet per person. The Soviet standard is 5 square feet per person. The seating area of economy class on a Boeing 747 is about 4.5 square feet. These occupancies are calculated by comfortable researchers in peacetime. A little crowded vs dead. With nuclear explosions going off, a person's options become a bit limited, rather like the options of the Germans who overcrowded the bunkers during the Hamburg firestorm raids. They had severe discomfort during the raids, but crowding saved many extra lives. They left those crowded bunkers and rebuilt 80% of the industrial productivity of Hamburg within 5 months. Please keep in mind that not all of the shelters will be in high fallout areas, and fewer still will be in areas where the destruction of above-ground, fallout-safe structures is complete. The shelter's water and food provisions for each individual will be stored in convenient, easily carried small containers, so that each person will be able to leave the shelter immediately after the attack if fallout conditions allow it. They can move to some other less crowded location, if one is available. Lower the risk. With your people tucked safely in blast shelters, and therefore with a lower incentive for the Soviets to attack your civilian areas, you can expect that many people will need the blast shelters for only a brief time. Of course, everyone must be in them initially, because you can't know before the attack where the weapons will be detonated. Shelters must all be supplied for full occupancy for the full 2 weeks if that proves to be necessary. If some localities did not have blast shelters, that fact alone would invite direct attack upon those locations. The point, of course, is that severe crowding in the shelters is better than no shelter at all. For this reason, the $200 system is proposed and used as an example. It is austere, crowded, but very high protection. It would cost the American people $47 billion, plus another $23 billion in food and recovery provisions. This amounts to about 3% of the federal government's usual expenditures for 2 years. Actually, it would be less than $23 billion, because the federal government has already bought some of the food through various farm subsidy programs. That food is already being stored at your expense. Also to be considered, you would have the major cost only one time. Strange, is it not, that payment by citizens for the post-attack food storage program would be partially indirect, higher future farm prices, since the current farm commodity surplus would be taken permanently off the market? So be it. A break please, Dharma, I recognize you are most weary. Thank you for your service. Ashta to stand by. Salut. Chapter 15. Rec number 4, Ashta. Tuesday, September 12, 1989, 4:30 p.m., Year 3, Day 027. Ashta returned and ready to continue. Start now, expand. Get started. If your representatives in Congress see the light and decide that you deserve more space per occupant, they can vote to build additional shelters. That way, you don't mess up production schedules. You just get more of the same. In short, by 2, they're small. The entire system could be completed in less than 2 years by means of existing industrial facilities, and with existing and currently underutilized industrial capabilities in steel and concrete production, metal forming, and earth moving. The currently idle American assembly line facilities can be used to produce the habitability items, such as radiation meters, hammock beds and chairs, water storage containers, ventilation equipment, and blast valves. Then if you expand into a better system, these shelters can be converted into massive underground storage facilities as an adjunct to your underground city. Protect the homeless. As the original facilities become replaced and the need for storage is diminished, you will still have safe, weather-protected places to house and tend your homeless. There could be areas selected for kitchens, sleeping, etc., and a program organized for self-tending in exchange for labor and other selected duties. Get your addicted population cleaned up and you will have a whole new working class of contributors. But what if Congress only spends $100 per person? You cannot go to 1 square foot per person. Alternative approaches include 1. Shelter for the women and children but not the men, 2. Shelters for the important people and not the rest of you, 3. Shelters without survival equipment. You can't stay inside long, and everybody brings a box lunch. Well, if you get started, the communities will find a way. In the cities, if ones will not participate, then you have another type of problem. The bottom line is that you must start building modular shelters for the children now. Surely you can agree that you have no moral right to leave them unprotected. Then you build for your soldiers, then for your homes and businesses. If you like the results, you just keep on building, and by then you will have found better and more efficient building materials and procedures. With compressed earth domes you only have to dig half as deep and have equal protection. But, get started. Get started and allow it to grow. A journey is begun by that first step. Perhaps this book is the first step for many of you. Blessings be upon you for such a decision. Maybe you will even build so many that there will be comfortably low occupancies. Maybe you will even then tie them together with tunnels. Maybe your children, your grandchildren, and your civilization will have a future after all. Perhaps you can be the foundation civilization for a whole new world in transition. So be it. Locations of shelters. You must be certain that the shelters will be located so that most of them cannot be destroyed even by the worst possible deliberate attack on the shelters themselves. This is the best way to ensure that such an attack will never take place. You must place the shelters according to Soviet capability, not according to your perceptions of their intentions. The United States, not including Alaska, contains approximately 3 million square miles. Nuclear explosions of 500 to 1,000 kilotons, 1 megaton, at optimum height can destroy most buildings over a 50 to 100 square mile area. Therefore, with an attack by 10,000 explosions, the Soviets could destroy the buildings in an area of about 1 million square miles. Excluding, therefore, buildings in desert, forest, and very rural areas, they have the capability of destroying most of the buildings in the U.S. But, dear friends, they will not do that, for that would leave them with no defense or retaliation ability against China. That is one reason they have left you alive. It is still a great risk, for they know the Chinese can protect themselves and are just waiting until the Soviets are weakened in great measure. Oh, it is just a big merry-go-round of intrigue, is it not? As their nuclear arsenal grows, and as the number of their delivery vehicles grows, they will be able to knock down even more of your buildings. Targets will be urban areas and military installations. In practice, of course, they would concentrate explosions in urban areas and around military installations, and keep weapons in reserve for threatening other countries into submission. Such threats will be very effective in a world in which the US no longer exists. Even so, it is unlikely that any city or large town will be free from a direct attack. Clearly you cannot defend your buildings. Only an anti-missile defense system can do that, a deployed strategic defense, not a research and development program. There are, however, domed structures with the majority of the floors underground that will survive an almost direct explosion, for the shockwave and wind force will be deflected from the dome shape. We will speak of those things at a later time. Let us just get started at present. We can help you plan and dream and build for the assured future for which you are saving yourselves. An airburst attack on your buildings will not harm your people if they are in properly designed, 200 size sure-safe blast shelters. The blast shelters could only be harmed by a ground burst attack. Besides being much less effective at destroying buildings, a ground burst attack would also not be effective in destroying very many of your shelters. What of neutron bombs and particle beams? I would insert in this portion for you who are already asking, what about neutron bombs that preserve buildings and just kill life? What about particle beams that backfeed and chain react into oblivion? The Cosmic Council may allow a great deal of interference from we, the Brotherhood of the Federation, for with those weapons you would most probably annihilate your planet, and that will not be allowed if at all preventable. We will intercede. We have already been called into action by both the United States, the Soviet Union, and several times by China to stop chain reactions from your particle beam systems. Once at Chernobyl, once just before a major summit in Europe, once at the Livermore Laboratories near San Francisco. Oh, we are much more accepted than you might ever believe to hear tell of it. Let US just deal here with little old nuclear bombs and shelters therefore. Little old regular nuclear bombs. A ground surface burst, 500 to 1000 kiloton explosion produces a crater about 0.03 square miles in area. You read it correctly, 3/100ths of a square mile. This can vary, of course, in accordance with soil type and other factors. In addition, soil and rock ejected from the crater covers an additional 0.1 square miles to a significant depth, a depth that, in the absence of a tunnel system, might fatally trap the occupants of an underground blast shelter. In addition, there is severe ground-transmitted shock and pressure in the immediate vicinity of a nuclear explosion. For these reasons, it is impractical to build civilian blast shelters that can resist ground bursts within their own 0.6 square mile location. 0.6 of a mile is not much area. The shelters described herein would be sure safe outside of a 0.6 square mile area around a ground burst explosion of a 1 megaton nuclear weapon. They would be surely destroyed within a 0.3 square mile area. In between, they would be partially destroyed. Dirty little earthquake side effects. You will find the Soviets have another dirty little scheme. They have targeted some of the most stressed areas of your fault line systems for directed ground burst missiles. These would trigger your earth fault line, and the devastation of such a power-supported quake would be tremendously more destructive than that which you are expecting from Mother Nature. What if the shelters are ground burst targeted? What if the Soviets, knowing that you are going to be tucked safely in your little shelters, simply targeted the shelters with ground bursts? For 230 million people, you will need 1.5 million shelters, as compared with 10,000 Soviet weapons. Clearly they cannot kill many of you unless you put the shelters too close together. Half the people of the United States live at a density of 1,500 people per square mile or less. They would need less than one shelter per 0.1 square miles. The low densities of people in rural locations would require a few more minutes on average to reach shelter, or else placement of extra shelters with fewer people per shelter. In the worst case, therefore, the Soviets could only endanger 6 shelters per explosion and could only surely destroy less than 3 with one bomb. An additional 30% of your people live at densities of more than 1,500 but less than 6,000 per square mile. For them the risk would be a minimum of 3 shelters per explosion and a maximum of 24. When these facts and also the circumstances of those people living at even higher densities are taken into consideration, the estimate is a maximum of less than 10% of your blast shelters could be destroyed by an all-out ground burst attack on the shelters themselves, with the entire Soviet nuclear weapons inventory pretty good odds by any count. Dharma, enough for now, as I would rather start fresh later, as I note you are getting muscle cramps. You are doing well, Keela, and we will proceed as rapidly as possible, but it cannot all be done by one day. So be it, and my blessings upon you and my beloved assistants, for I realize I am piling great workloads on already burdened backs. I salute you for your contributions in such love and willingness. The gift will perhaps be the saving of a nation and its peoples. That would be a reward of great abundance in itself. I am that I am, in the service of God and Emmanuel Sananda, I am Ashta signing off, clearing circuit, out. Chapter 16 Rec Number 2, Ashta. Wednesday, September 13th, 1989, 9 a.m., Year 3, Day 028. Ashta, come to share and witness, Dharma. Your heart is heavy with things of life. You knew that your path would not be one of ease, and further, you knew it would be filled with danger. You ones must come into your senses, for in your innocence you blunder. In your carelessness you can blunder and cause great pain and damage to your brothers and unto our most fragile credibility base. You ones must be pure and responsible beyond all others, for ye are the light. You cannot light of a path with smudged candle globes. Ye ones are the fish within the fishbowl of fishbowls. Dark ones always appear in innocence. Why would Satan call himself the Prince of Light? If you are given to feel uncomfortable about any situation, know that there is something wrong with it. Those negative proddings are sent forth from us at your request. Heed them. Let us continue in our work to get you some survival shelters, but I want you ones to use your heads and see the ultimate damage done if our work is discredited in any measure. Further, I prefer that you ones make it long enough to be able to physically need the shelters. Through carelessness you can be taken out. Through irresponsible behavior or deliberate actions of negative intent, we will remove you from the projects. We are not dealing with afternoon tea and crumpets, we are about the transition of a world and a survival of a civilization. Consider this a most severe warning from your commander, please. Shelter locations. Some of this material I would now utilize from the Good Doctor's book, but my agreement is that if I utilize some of a chapter, I utilize all. My purpose for not doing so is to cause ones to be caused to get their book and to get the references and backup materials to make the plan function. You will need go to their sources or you will not be able to utilize my information properly. My purpose is not to use a human's information but to cause you to wake up, get busy and get information of substance, from ones who know what they are doing on an earth plane. I would simply hit you soundly upon thy heads with the book if I were so allowed. Get the information. These are the ones we recommend you utilize of their knowledge and research. Get their book, get them to head up your program if you can, and get moving. Ashta and brothers have no interest in your publishing book business, nor your resources, nor almost anything else you have. We are efforting at keeping you alive and into wisdom and knowledge, you ones of the Father's flocks. The world as you know it will come to a screeching halt just as proclaimed by the prophets. It is underway right this moment, therefore what you ones do is most highly important. You will have nuclear war, the only question at all in point, is when. You need the shelter system all the remainder of the way through the transition, so, at worst, the shelters will not be useless. Doctors Robinson and North make some excellent population comparisons and excellent observations which I will utilize. This in no way relieves you of the responsibility of obtaining their comprehensive information. Airburst is the detonation of choice in any enemy attack. Airburst attack will take out your buildings and above ground installation to put you out of operation. Ground burst explosions are much less effective for blast damage than are airburst weapons. The buildings near the explosion are destroyed, but the land surface area covered by destructive blast forces is much less. Therefore, if you had large numbers of small blast shelters distributed at your non-evacuated population density, the casualty rate would be so low as to render an attack on the shelters impractical and ineffective. Let me add comments at this point. Up to this point there has been no need for consideration of any but major airburst systems because that would easily wipe out your human population above ground. If they could utilize weaponry that would wipe out life and preserve utility buildings, etc., that would, of course, be the weapon of choice. That is not going to be allowed, so the next strategy is do second best. At your status of helplessness you are most vulnerable above ground, so airburst bombs are most preferable, even if buildings and technical installations must be rebuilt. As things move along it may change. You see, an occupying group must consider the occupation populace. Ground burst weapons leave more usable buildings, but you have a tremendous fallout problem, and then you could move into a semi-nuclear winter with tremendous clouds of radioactive material circling the globe, which could bring the fallout right back on one's home base. You see, This makes the point there is risk involved and that buys you more time. Current hanging rope sales. I further hope my crew noted the news of yesterday, where the Soviet leaders are asking the US to get behind their freedom movement and support them with more money and supplies, as well as additional trade. If your spines, I further hope my crew noted the news of yesterday, where the Soviet leaders are asking the US to get behind their freedom movement and support them. Didn't have chills 20 days in isolation for you. What is so terrible, is the citizen taxpayer will push for that very thing. Send the rope and the scaffolding and the trapdoor. Let us have peace and friendship at any cost. That cost is your annihilation, dear old US citizens. Shelters need to be near usual locations of population. You must have your blast shelters near your usual location so that you can have instant protection. You will not need to evacuate. But blast shelters are a bit more costly than simple fallout shelters. Why not evacuate into the countryside and build fallout shelters? The Soviet civil defense systems relied in part upon evacuation during the years that their blast shelter system was under construction. Of course, they had the advantage of warning, since it is their military doctrines that call for a surprise first strike. Yours do not. Now that Soviets have completed a formidable blast shelter system, they no longer depend upon evacuation. Unfortunately, and most stupidly, some of your planners still propose evacuation schemes that assume long warning times. They assume that you will see the Soviet evacuation and then have time to act. Evacuation is no longer required by the Soviets, so there will be no early spy warning of preparatory evacuation of the Soviets. This was an obvious development, since their military strategy of a surprise first strike could hardly include the obvious warning of evacuation in their own camp. In the face of the Soviet threat, the Chinese built an evacuation system 30 feet underground. The Chinese plans do not depend on warning and evacuation time. They know their enemy. In addition to their early knowledge, the Soviets have the following advantages. We have fewer attack weapons. Most of those weapons will be destroyed by the Soviets' first strike. Those that you manage to launch will encounter their formidable strategic missile defense systems. And, finally, if any do get through, they will not do much damage to a country that has protected most of its industry and has blast sheltered its population. Shelter density is illustrated by reference to maps labeled 1 and 2 in Fighting Chance, which are outline maps of Washington, D.C. and its surrounding counties, Montgomery and Prince George's, Maryland, and Fairfax, Virginia, and maps of Los Angeles and Orange counties in California. Ashta, this should make you ones in Los Angeles tingle with delight. It indicates a potential deadly target area, beloved friends and relatives in Southern California coastal areas. Washington, D.C. area and Los Angeles/Orange County. In 1980, Washington, D.C., Montgomery County, Fairfax County, and Prince George's County had populations of 638,400, 579,100, 596,900, and 665,100 respectively, for a total of 2,479,500, or about 1% of the U.S. population. The corresponding surface areas are 63,495, 393, and 487 square miles respectively. Therefore, the average population densities in these four regions are 10,100, 1,700, 1,500, and 1,400 persons per square mile. Because most people within the three counties are concentrated in about one half of the areas, the actual density is about 3,000 persons per square mile, with densities approaching twice that, or 6,000 per square mile, in a few localities. In Washington, D.C. itself, the additional increase in density involves a little higher risk per shelter. In order to kill everyone in the shelters, an area of about 700 square miles would need to be attacked with about 2,000 ground burst explosions, on one city, Washington, D.C., and its suburbs, in order to kill 1% of your people. Those 2,000 weapons represent 20% of the available Soviet arsenal. On the other hand, only 10 to 15 explosions in the air would destroy the buildings in this entire area, and would also kill nearly all of the people who were not inside shelters, which would be all at this present writing. Los Angeles County and Orange County had, in 1980, populations of 7,477.400 and 1,932,900, remember, 9 years ago, and areas of 4,070 and 798 square miles respectively. The corresponding densities are 1,800 and 2,400 persons per square mile. Those people are, for the most part, concentrated in one half of Los Angeles County and 2/3 of Orange County, so that the effective density is about 4,000 persons per square mile in a 2,500 square mile region that contains 4% of the U.S. population. Would the Soviets deliver 60% of their entire nuclear arsenal on these two counties alone, just to kill all of these people in their shelters? Or would they prefer to use only about 1% of their weapons on these two counties, in order to destroy most of the buildings and kill those people who are not in shelters? We think the answer is obvious. The shelters will survive. These examples are applicable to most of the U.S. Most of you live in areas like these, or in areas where the population density is lower, and which would be therefore even more safe from Soviet attack if you had blast shelters available. There is one notable exception. New York City, Manhattan Island, Brooklyn, Bronx, and Queens contain 6,700,000 people living at densities of 64,900, 31,900, and 27,800, and 17,500 persons per square mile respectively. The area is only 242 square miles. These people could be killed by 500 Soviet nuclear weapons even if they were in the proposed shelters. As improbable as this may seem to us, it is unwise to trust so many lives to the rationality of an evil and irrational opponent. The obvious solution is to build better, deeper shelters and perhaps even tunnels in New York and its suburbs. There are very few equally heavy population densities in the United States, so they do not markedly change the overall program, even if special provisions must be made for them. Could be why Mr. Nostradamus saw the rockets firing into New York, however. Pause for thought. By the way, one of the Italian volcanoes is in eruption today. Has anyone noted? Further, do any of you place significance upon it? High population areas most vulnerable. High population centers are also the most vulnerable to the possibility of a single nuclear explosion, and it would probably be a ground burst by terrorists. Potential immediate civilian casualties from such an explosion could be hundreds of thousands, with over 1 million killed by fallout. However, with shelters and with just 15 minutes warning, perhaps from a ransom demand, the immediate casualties could be reduced to a few thousand. Fallout casualties, even with no warning from the terrorists, would be completely eliminated. People would enter the shelters when they heard the explosion or were alerted by the authorities. The high-quality blast protection of properly designed shelters limits the killing radius of nuclear weapons to such a great extent that it would be impossible for the Soviets, even with their huge first-strike genocidal weapons inventory, to kill more than 10% of the American people if they were in those shelters, and the shelters were installed at your current living density. This fact is not compromised by the very high shelter occupancy rates which you recommend herein, in order to bring the overall cost within currently realistic boundaries. After a minimum number of shelters are installed, guaranteeing that your children can survive, and your soldiers and you, yourselves, can survive, you can always install more shelters to lower the occupancy and increase your comfort. I will guarantee that your government will end up pledging more in subsidies and business loans, not even considering business exchange, to Russia and communist countries than double the cost of a survival system. In your very near future. Ashta. You, dear ones, are the dead men in the game. Shelter design. Immediately after the first atomic bombs were exploded over Japan in 1945, scientists in the US, including many who had helped build the bombs, began work on defense against nuclear weapons and particularly civilian defense. As soon as sufficient weapons were available, various tests of shelters were conducted with nuclear weapons. These direct tests and experiments came to an end with the test ban treaties which have proved far more valuable to Soviet tyranny than to freedom. Since that time, occasional experiments have been carried out with chemical explosives that provide scaled-down models of some nuclear weapons effects. The largest of those tests, conducted in 1985 and scheduled again for mid-1987, utilized 4 kilotons of explosives which simulated the blast wave of an 8-kiloton ground-burst nuclear weapon. The Hiroshima and Nagasaki explosions were air bursts of 12 and 22 kilotons, respectively. Since protection by buried shelters proved relatively simple, most research since the 1950s has been directed at the problem of reducing cost through engineering innovations. There was an especially large amount of this research carried out in the early 1960s at President Kennedy's order. He ordered this work preparatory to building a national shelter system. This system, which was abandoned after his death, is needed far more urgently today than it was in 1961, when Kennedy concluded that it should be built. If the American people remain unsheltered and therefore perish, Kennedy's murder in Dallas will prove to be an historical event which led step by step to the destruction of the free world. Regarding John Kennedy's assassination. My people already know that which I am about to say. I ask that all of the rest of you refer to Spacegate, the veil removed. I tell you, and it is well known in the circles of government, M.R. Kennedy was killed by his Secret Service guard who drove the death vehicle. This very project of protection of the people was a major reason for the murder. You, as citizens, have no comprehension of the plight you are now within. You had best be asking God for all the insight you can receive. It most surely is time to bargain with God, dear brothers. It is also time my own ones work harder and more carefully in the protections of our beloved scribes and receivers. This is beyond international intrigue. You are bound into intergalactic, intracosmic intrigue of a planet and civilization in transition. How can I make you hear me? Please, I petition you, how can I make you hear me? Yes, John Kennedy was a member of all the secret organizations which are exposed, but he saw what was coming down and the game ceased to be a game for him. When it did, he was murdered. They play really nasty and deadly games. Oak Ridge information. There are several thousand research reports and primary scientific articles which are relevant to blast shelter protection from nuclear weapons. In February 1986, the Emergency Technology Library at Oak Ridge National Laboratory contained a subsection of about 1,000 of those articles. Those 1,000 articles formed most of the primary research material from which was selected a single standardized shelter design for these documents. This design is quite similar to a standardized design which is under development by the scientists at Oak Ridge and to designs which have been repeatedly proposed by engineers and scientists over the past 30 years. Earth-arching phenomenon. When a steel tank, much like a large fuel tank or a large road culvert with sealed ends, is buried under sufficient granular soil and subjected to the high pressures of a nuclear explosion, the sides of the tank yield slightly, and the earth compresses to form a protective arch over the tank. The tank must be strong and flexible. In this way, the strength of reinforced concrete can be duplicated by a low-cost, lightweight structure. Since the soil also provides an inexpensive massive radiation shield, this is an ideal solution to low-cost blast and radiation protection. Better even, would be compressed sandstone underground arched shelters, but we will continue to utilize the standard scheme outlined in the Good Doctor's book, and save fragmentation distractors. In order for earth arching to protect the tank from the blast, the tank must not be buried below the water table. There are several means of avoiding this problem in locations where the water table cannot be avoided. One simple method is to install the tank as usual, and surround it with reinforced concrete to provide the extra strength required. The shelter discussed herein is a tank made of 1/4 inch thick steel. The tank is 11½ feet in diameter and 40 feet long. It is small enough to be transported by truck to the desired location. 75% of the tank is designated for living space and 25% for storage and common apparatus and facilities. There is a cost summary at the end of this chapter, based on such a tank structure, as well as a space per occupant summary. The tanks need to be buried with about 10 feet of soil over the top. Tank shelters of this size can be entirely manufactured and equipped in existing metal fabricating shops and delivered on trucks in complete, functional condition to the installation sites. An earth-moving machine, usually either a large backhoe or a medium-sized drag line, digs the hole and lowers the shelter into it. The entryways are then either bolted or welded on, and the dirt is replaced. In some cases, where the dirt is poorly suited to earth arching, road gravel would be used as backfill instead of the original soil. Entry to the shelter is from each end through tubular entries designed with 2 right-angle turns that will decrease reflected radiation entry. There is an illustration at the end of this chapter. One entry is vertical with a ladder. The other is angled with a slide for rapid entry. This entry works like the tubular fire escapes that were popular in multiple-story public schools in the past, or like an airline escape slide. The 2 entries give safety in case one should be plugged with rubble, and the slide entry allows for very rapid entrance in case of emergency or handicapped persons. We will enlarge upon entry systems to help you with entry covers which will withstand rubble bombardment. You need a sure survival, not both doorways in blockage, which is very likely in such a small area. You must have a long entry tunnel into at least one of the entrances. These entries also serve as ventilation shafts through smaller tubes that join them and connect with the ground surface. The ventilation shafts have blast valves that close automatically when hit by a bomb blast wave. The entries themselves have steel blast doors which are locked mechanically after the people have entered. These parts of the shelter are designed for maximum simplicity, as is most of the other shelter equipment. It is important to understand that nuclear explosions are hard on shelters. If some part won't work after it is banged around, bent out of shape, and generally mistreated, then you don't want it on your shelter. Nuclear explosion blast is an especially impressive phenomenon. Imagine a force that can actually compress the surface of the ground by as much as a foot. The blast doors are flush with the ground to avoid reflected pressure and flying objects. They are backed by large concrete collars which transfer the blast load to the ground rather than to the shelter where it could crush or bend the steel shell. Once inside the shelter, air for breathing, water for drinking, and a mechanism for cooling to remove metabolic heat, especially in a crowded shelter or a warm climate, are the most immediate needs. Ventilation and cooling. Air can be supplied from outside air with special precautions to avoid contamination with fallout, chemical, or biological warfare agents. Each shelter is therefore equipped with 2 air passages, dust filters, in the entryways where the accumulation of some fallout radiation will not harm shelter occupants, and specialized filters to remove dangerous chemical and biological agents. These filters are delicate, so blast valves are installed to protect the filters. As a backup to the system, and also for use during periods of very high external danger, such as during the attack itself, each shelter contains stored oxygen and carbon dioxide removal chemicals sufficient to supply the occupants for 2 days more if in higher risk areas. This means that the shelter can be closed completely if necessary. Test equipment for monitoring oxygen, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, temperature, and absolute pressure levels is also provided. Additional days of air supply can be provided at a cost of about $12 per person per day. The best supply of safe water is from a well. This is the source which was utilized in most German bunkers. A well is also required under Soviet shelters. With a well, water is plentiful for personal hygiene as well as simple drinking requirements. Manual pumping must be available and is relatively easily accomplished. As a backup in case the well is lost to ground motion or contamination, each shelter must store the drinking water required for life for all of the occupants for a period of 2 weeks. Excellent modular containers have been developed for this purpose. These have the advantage that they can be stacked in the entryways during long-term occupancy in order to further reduce radiation levels. Cooling is extremely important. Depending upon climate and time of year, these shelters could be occupied by 20 or so people whose metabolic heat can be removed by the walls and earth surrounding the shelter. If the shelter were not cooled, however, at the design occupancy of 150 persons, the occupants would eventually die from thermal effects and would be very uncomfortable within a short time. The shelter, therefore, has 2 entirely redundant cooling systems. This reduces risk to those inside. First, there is air cooling. Outside air is pumped through the filters and the shelter in much greater amounts than are needed for breathing. The air carries away metabolic heat. The air pumps are redundant, so that in the case of failure of the electricity, manual air pumps can be used. After the attack, there would be no electricity other than battery power for lights, radios, and meters. Power could be supplied by an emergency generator. An emergency generator, however, is not included in this austere design. Bicycle-type air pumps where the wheels are actually fans have been developed for shelters. The shelter occupants would take turns pedaling the pumps. Second, there is water cooling. Shelter occupants would also take turns on the floor-mounted manual water pumps. The shelter well system is connected to copper cooling coils that cool the shelter with well water. Coating with well water permits operation of the shelter in a completely closed configuration, and it also backs up the air cooling system. With air, water, and cooling provided, and the survival of the occupants assured, the shelter then provides human comfort items. Let us have a break, please, Dharma. You continue to be distressed over attacks upon us as your Sibbers. Do not anguish over it, it is simply that ones cannot come into full belief of us with whom you write. Somehow it is too much to accept the highest universal energies, but you most surely do not need tend of it, little one. All men have the right unto their own choices, however, he who cannot come into belief and carry a magnificent impact upon the human masses will of necessity be overpassed. The world must come into truth, and I am quite sure God and Sananda can do without instructions on behavior. The listings in the document already sent forth have done most of their work, so most of the questionable ones can be removed. Many were placed in the protected list to simply preserve their lives from their own kind and to call their hand. They would not wish to be listed on our protection list, not being of us. It was a necessary ploy and has most certainly served its purpose, starting with Mr. Cooper. It is very dangerous to be on our list if you are actually of the dark side. The Dark Brothers will wipe you away and will not wait for the asking and the answers. So be it. Let us have a brief respite. Ashta to stand by. Salu. Chapter 17. Rec number 3, Ashta. Wednesday, September 13, 1989,8:00 p.m., Year 3, Day 028. Thank you for joining me. We will not work late, only until we can finish tomorrow in relative ease. Ashta present. Support equipment. The toilets and sinks are built into the well water system, which provides sewage removal and a surplus of water for hygiene. In case of loss of the well system, the toilets are provided with simple storage containers for waste. A battery power system, recharged in peacetime from electric utilities, runs lights and provides electricity for other purposes as is done in recreational vehicles. Batteries sufficient for radios and emergency lighting at low levels for long duration are provided. There are a few electronic items that need to be in each shelter in advance. Most important are dosimeters to measure the accumulated radiation dose of each occupant and survey meters to measure the current radiation rate at any location. These will include external probes for measurements outside the shelter as well as inside of it. In addition, each shelter will have several pocket-sized, two-way, shortwave FM radios which allow communication between all shelters within a 10-mile radius. These are portable for use outside after the attack as well. Radio receivers of the more usual kind will allow you to listen for information from a greater distance. The radios and meters need to be protected from EMP, which could destroy their circuits. Since the shelters themselves are what scientists call Faraday cages, they provide electronic shielding that protects the equipment as long as it is not tied to an outside antenna or probe. The antenna or probe must be reconnected after the attack has ceased. Several FM radios would be present in each shelter for redundancy and for post-attack communications. Since the shelter is cylindrical, a flat floor is installed. The space under the floor is used for storage. Furniture is among the items stored there. The shelter is furnished entirely with hammock-type chairs, and hammocks for sleeping. These hammocks are suspended from the ceiling by flexible cords. They are not installed until the shelter is actually occupied. Cloth hammock furniture has several advantages. First, it is easily stored and inexpensive. Second, it is soft. If some people should love their balance and fall, there will be no edges of fixed furniture to cause injuries. If nuclear weapons explode near the shelter, the suspension cords will absorb part of the shock of shelter motion. In addition, occupancy experiments have shown that hammock furniture is a space-efficient means of providing comfort to shelter occupants. Stored with the hammocks will be gas masks and protective clothing for use in case shelter occupants should need to leave the shelter for any reason. Fire extinguishers, hand tools, a cutting torch, and related items will be stored there, too. The shelter medical kit and emergency library is important. The medical kit will contain the usual first aid items and also some special items which should be used by trained physicians. If no physician is available, however, trained medics assigned to the shelters or even untrained individuals guided by the shelter library will be responsible for health care. The shelter library would contain medical books, survival books, nutrition books, instruction books covering the various equipment and contingencies, and Bibles or spiritual books that ones can utilize to find spiritual comfort. Each unoccupied shelter would be equipped with an electronic surveillance system, so that local police will be notified of intruders. This need arises because the shelters can never be locked. In case of emergency, we cannot permit delays that might be associated with unlocking shelters. The surveillance system will deter vandals and notify the authorities about any intrusion which may have caused damage. Penalties for vandalizing shelters or stealing equipment from them must be very tough. Such crimes threaten the survival of the country. Maintenance. Maintenance vans that test the shelter's various systems and assure that all is in good order will visit each shelter routinely at 18-month intervals. This continuing maintenance will cost about $2 per person sheltered, per year. The surveillance system will require about $1 per person sheltered per year for monitoring cost. Overall, we estimate that the maintenance, monitoring, and repair costs of the nationwide shelter system would be about $5 per person sheltered, per year. Soviets and Swiss use military. The Soviets have a large branch of their military with the sole job of providing civil defense, as do the Swiss. In the Soviet case, 10,000 full-time professionals are supplemented by millions of civil defense reservists and a national requirement that everyone, even grade school children, receive extensive civil defense instruction every year. These large personnel commitments are very valuable, as are the facilities provided, facilities that cost 2 to 10 times more than those that you would utilize. In the American shelters, it will be crowded, it will be uncomfortable, and, without a large army of civil defense professionals, it will also be amateur night, but you will survive. Actually, when the shelters are installed, the local communities should organize their use. Community disaster organizations do not need to be provided by the federal government. Nuclear war, however, requires the initial special technology that Congress must provide. Give the American people blast shelters, and they will read the instruction books themselves. Chapter 18. Rec Number 1, Ashta. Thursday, September 14, 1989, 7:45 a.m., Year 3, Day 029. Bulletins, not novels. Ashta present. Greetings. I believe that we can finish most of the topic of shelters today. As to general instructions, there are some updates and responses to inquiries regarding quite a few things that Commander Hayton, Sananda, and myself will entertain later, for the forward or epilogue. These publications are bulletins, friends, not novels for entertainment purposes. Content, nor changes of content, will not be reflected by any Earth person's opinion. Our purpose is truth, and if you find it distasteful, you had best relook at credentials, source of input, and verify the facts according to your own human writers. We are utilizing these documents as a means of pulling into public exposure ones who are feeding off of your vulnerability, spreading lies regarding your space brothers, and covering up further, for your grossest enemies, your own government's secret doings. A little exposure is a most terrible thing, for you are sucked into the trap and then will believe any of the false conclusions drawn by an author. Satanic material always bears some truth, or pretends the labels and truth. In his falseness it is the very mark of the beast. You must use discernment. These are the reasons, however, that our scribes for this material are so well tended. Please, ye ones who are true brethren, protect these ones who receive of us, for they are in such danger. Yet, they are of the most trusting and open, for they cannot imagine that man can work in evil ways. Please, simply utilize discretion. Attempt on the life of the scribe. An attempt was made this very weekend past, on Sananda's most cherished receiver, through drug dosement, by one who pretends to be her most devoted family of friends. We make no effort to keep that one, receiver, in secret, as she speaks for Sananda and is 90 years of age. She is well known about your place as Thedra, and in this instance, publicity is far more effective than secrecy. The one who attempted upon her life is a marked man. Whether or not these attempts are carried forth in unknowing, or in full intent, which we concur this was, it must be a full lesson for all who even contact this man, for he is death unto you. You who would jeopardize our work and find yourselves in indiscretion had better carefully study these words, for it has all but cost you a dear, dear friend and a major setback to your work for this transition period of bringing truth into public light. The effort is to silence the truth before it can be spread forth. It is too late, but we will protect our writers. Just as with Thedra, we have no intention of allowing these ones to pass from your dimension prematurely. Believe me, they would rather come home. For the most part, you are most unpleasant beings to live among. So be it. We are in preparation for what you call Armageddon and an Earth transition into fourth-dimensional recovery. Our commitment is to bring forth truth for your enlightenment, that you can make your choices of divine base in knowledge. Beyond that, dear ones, is your business. We will fulfill our portion. It is up to you what you do with the information. You can either use it, act, and save your civilization, or you may cast it aside and fall to your enemy. For that particular enemy will fall. Let us continue with bomb shelters, Kila. Storage for post-attack recovery. The deterrent effect of your prayers, your shelters, your demonstrated will to resist, and your eventual anti-missile defense may allow you to avoid attack. If, however, you are still attacked, which you will be to some large extent, your shelters will save your lives and give you a fighting chance to save your families and your civilization. In order to increase that chance, there are things that you must have available for use when you emerge from the shelters. The better you are prepared, the easier recovery will be. There will be a period of time in which we will not be able to attend you ones, while things are settling into place. There will be a period of time whereby our presence will only bring greater hazard to you. You will need to come forth from the earth and begin to attend growing and above ground shelters and things of that nature. We are always going to use worst scenario in most instances so that you are prepared. Near each set of 10 shelters that house a total of 10x 150, 1,500 people, will be additional steel tanks that have been buried in a manner similar to the shelters themselves. These large tanks and their contents will cost about $150,000 per set to buy and install. This will drop drastically when you have earth compression machinery available, for you will not be utilizing the same type of life-sustaining systems. The primary item in the tanks will be food, a year's supply minimum, for each person. This would not be camping-type items or sterno stoves to cook on. That is wondrous survival material, but not sufficient for long-term living. It is also quite expensive for extended use and could only be supplied if you have a more luxury-type shelter and preparation system. Otherwise it would be wondrously suitable. These things, however, will only be available to you if you can convince your government that you are each worth as much as a Swiss, Russian, or Chinese citizen. That means you voters must decide that you are worth that much, and you then must convey your estimate to your elected representatives in Washington. Remember, he too needs a place to save his own assets. These additional tanks will contain bulk grain, beans, and corn right out of the farm bins and grain elevators in the United States. We can further instruct you as to how to dig storage holes within the earth for storage, as was done by your native Indians and your ancient Egyptians that lasted for thousands and thousands of years most efficiently. All you need do is remember. These items, in combination with some other essentials such as vegetable oils, salt, and essential nutrient supplements, will keep you alive and well fed for a full year. You must be prepared to store great quantities of lentils, sprout seeds, grains, and a great quantity of algae product, spirulina, chlorella, blue-green, etc. There are ways of preparing such rations that are most palatable and nutritious. You will want, therefore, to have plenty of additional items such as flavorings, i.e. smoke, peppers, and a quantity of dried onion and garlic. These also add great health benefit to a basic food. In most regions, with the lives of the people saved, normal food supplies will begin to be restored in less than a year. However, you must know that in areas where there is growing only with irrigation from canals, you will require longer, for you will need restore your water supply. Further, you might well find your irrigation waters contaminated. If the bombs don't take your major dams, the forthcoming triggered earthquakes will. Your major dam system is targeted for ground burst effectiveness. You will need to store abundant well digging machinery and be prepared to turn to personal or community gardens. Community projects are preferable, for man can do nicely if he is not isolated and all are working together for a cause, especially if the cause is survival of family and friends. Community will become the greatest joy to return unto you. For assurance that all ones can remain well fed, regardless of the damage and restoration time of your food production, storage, and transportation systems, you must have plenty of stored food available. If you stop allowing your crops to be shipped abroad, or burned, or subsidized for not growing, you will not only have created income again for your farmers, but you will have created a need for the overabundance. This is that upon which your nation was founded, not upon that which you have become through the destruction by those who control you. You sold, gave away at low interest loans, the Soviets the grain that they needed for their civil defense storage supplies. Could you not do the same for yourselves? The required grain, beans, and corn are already available in your government-financed farm surplus storage. A little old ex-convict named Joseph convinced Egypt's pharaoh of the wisdom of such a food storage program. Can't a nation of American voters demand their representatives have and utilize such wisdom? Or have you convinced yourselves of your own unworthiness to the extent that you feel you deserve death at the hand of your enemy? In addition to food, your storage module must contain medical supplies and equipment for use by professional physicians. Medicines which can only be produced by high technology will have a high priority. Tools will be mandatory. The emphasis would be on agricultural and carpentry tools, and on tools required for the repair of industrial machinery. These will be primarily hand tools and simple items that will aid in the bootstrap procedure of restoring your productive economy. The rubble will contain a great amount of partially damaged and undamaged items that you can use to rebuild. Except in areas of high-density frame construction, most of the rubble will be untouched by fire and will be of substantial value. Seeds will also be stored in this module. The food storage itself will provide seeds for mass production of staples, and the addition of non-hybrid seeds will serve as insurance of that. Crops grown from hybrid seeds do not produce seeds for the next planting that can produce a high-quality crop. They are one-shot, one planting, high-yield seeds. There may be no hybrid seed producers around to produce seeds for the post-attack crop. In addition, you need vegetable seeds, and the means to re-establish your agriculture on a local level. In time, this local food production will be replaced by the restoration of your farms and distribution economy, but each group of shelters should have the ability to provide for itself in the meantime. In addition, the tank will contain individual face masks with filters and protective clothing to resist chemical and biological warfare agents, and test kits to identify those risks. These are in addition to those in the primary shelters themselves. Now the not so nice to think about things. You must have items and instruction materials necessary to recharge and repair the primary shelters, so that you can be ready in case you are attacked again with weapons of mass destruction. This is most likely whether or not you like to confront it. You are going to have a world in conflagration, and further, you will have a world itself in upheaval. There will be volcanic eruptions and subsequent fallout, all manner of natural disasters to deal with, and thus and so. Your shelters must be kept in superb repair. You should also have seeds, etc., stored in case of lost growing seasons and crop destruction. Count on 3 to 6 terrible years and you will be pretty well covered. It is true that you could rebuild from the rubble alone, that you could forage for food in the rubble and participate in heroic scenarios to transport food from wrecked storage facilities, and that you could rebuild your industry from the tools available in areas that are not bombed and from facilities that have been hardened to protect tools from damage. Uniform success at those efforts throughout your damaged country, without substantial suffering and loss of life, is unlikely, however, unless you store post-attack supplies near your shelters. These other things will be utilized also, but they are most undependable, and any salvage will be your cake frosting. Those facilities will allow you to rebuild much more quickly and to be strong enough to continue your defense. Therefore, you should choose to spend the additional $100 on post-attack provisions rather than upon additional comfort during the relatively short stay in the shelters. Radiation and fallout. Nuclear radiation is always with you. Low levels of radiation are contained in the air you breathe, the walls and floors of your homes, most of things you use, and the substances of which your own bodies are constructed. Most of that radiation comes from the disintegration of unstable atomic nuclei or from radiation that hits the Earth from outer space, cosmic radiation, which you will learn to harness. The most penetrating radiation is called gamma radiation. It, along with the less penetrating alpha and beta radiation, bombards your bodies continuously. Every minute, approximately 7,000 particles of background radiation penetrate the average person's body. Of those, about 4,000 particles of radiation hit the person's tissues and do damage, while about 3,000 go on through without impact. In addition, about 40 atoms within the body itself decay every minute. Their radiation damages the tissues in which they are contained. Some activities increase your exposure. For example, the radiation at high altitude in a passenger airplane is about 40 times as great as at sea level, or about 300,00 particles per minute per person. This radiation is as natural to your environment as sunlight or rain. Your bodies have mechanisms to repair the damage, and, in some ways, the background nuclear radiation may actually help to improve your health. If, however, nuclear radiation hits you in much greater quantities than are usual, heavy fallout from a nuclear weapon could increase the dose rate by 10 million-fold or more, your body's repair mechanisms would be overwhelmed so severely that you would become ill and might even die. Your bodies can continuously tolerate, without illness, about 10,000 times the normal background dose. You can tolerate 50,000 times the normal dose for a 1-week period, providing your bodies have ample opportunity for several weeks of rest and repair before such a dosage is repeated. About 15% of the damage is repaired per week. You can even tolerate 10 million times the normal background dose for a 1 or 2 hour period. This dose would, however, use up all of your radiation tolerance for the following several weeks. The unstable atoms in fallout that produce high radiation levels do so because they decay very rapidly. They decay so rapidly that, within 2 weeks, the number of these atoms and the radiation which they produce is 1,000 times less than it was 1 hour after the nuclear explosion which produced the unstable atoms. Much false information has been fed to you to cause you to feel helpless and forfeit your survival capabilities. If you are convinced you won't survive, you will not demand shelter, so which do you think it has been? Clearly. If you just keep away from the radiation for a while, the passage of time eliminates its threat. By putting distance and the massive radiation barrier like dirt or concrete between yourselves and the radiation, you become quite safe from harm. This is not the same type of long-lived radiation hazard as with nuclear power production waste cores which continue to produce radiation in tremendous amounts for hundreds of thousands of years. Stay on the topic, we are speaking of nuclear bombs. Most explosions in a nuclear war will probably be air bursts. In air bursts, the nuclear fireball does not touch the ground. These, like the airburst explosions at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, will not produce fallout. Some explosions, however, would occur on or near the ground. The dust, dirt, and rock sucked up by these explosions would become radioactive, drift with the wind, and settle down upon the countryside. Some places would have none of the fallout, and some others would have so little that it would pose no threat to health or life. In other places, however, the fallout would be so extensive that people would need to stay sheltered until the radiation decays. The wind direction could be carefully checked to anticipate fallout danger to a great extent, that, and the size of the debris cloud. This, of course, means that some people would need to spend a portion of every day in complete shelter, some would need continuous shelter for a few days and then shelter a portion of each day after that, and, in the worst case, some people would need continuous shelter for up to 2 weeks. Since this is all unpredictable, all shelters must be fully equipped. Shelter from fallout would often be available outside of the blast shelters themselves. In case it isn't available, or if it has been destroyed by the blast itself, each shelter must have those life support capabilities for a full 2 weeks. Some people try to guess where the bombs will fall and which ones will be ground bursts. In this way, they try to lower shelter costs by providing shelter based upon their own theoretical estimates or war games. This is a very dangerous procedure. Every American deserves and must have protection from the worst possible Soviet attack. Remember, your adversary will be counting on you to be predicting his actions. You cannot predict what the detailed plan of attack would be, especially after they have observed your preparations. If you all have 2-week blast and radiation shelters, then in all probability, most of you would not need to stay in the shelters for 2 weeks. If, of course, you don't have the shelters, then your enemies can design their attack to easily kill most of you. Protection from nuclear radiation is as simple and straightforward as protection from normal sunburn by means of shade. Your umbrellas just have to be thicker. The peculiar properties of nuclear radiation require only that the shading elements be several feet thick or compressed into a dense form of the equivalent. Protection from nuclear explosion blast is as straightforward as protection from air blast by the windshield of your car, which causes an effective wind velocity of 50 to 60 miles per hour. The enormous energy of the nuclear explosion blast requires, however, a much stronger windshield. In order to scare the American people into inaction, and in order to promote certain special interest political causes, many false statements have been made about the effects of low doses of nuclear radiation. It is claimed, for instance, that legions of genetically ruined children will be born, and that radiation will cause tens of millions of new cases of cancer. These statements are unprincipled and untrue. Even in a worst case, all-out nuclear war, Nuclear radiation would harm primarily those individuals whose exposure exceeded their body's short-term repair capabilities. The increased low levels of radiation, to which survivors of the first few weeks would be exposed, would do long-term harm to some people. That harm would, however, affect such a low percentage of people that it would be largely unnoticed. There would be those ones in addition to a dead and dying nation of people at any unprotected rate. They would find themselves in process of sickness trying to bury the millions of dead and tending the dying. Not a pretty picture indeed. It is absolutely essential that each American know the truth. You have been told lies. Lies like nuclear winter and legions of mutant children from increased background radiation have helped to make you defenseless against enemy tyranny. War is horrible, but nuclear war will be much more horrible if you fail to prepare for it. With the missile capability of your current time, there is no escaping the probability of geographic involvement in any type of exchange. Further, IT will be nuclear. Falsehoods about radiation that paralyze you with fear, and thereby diminish your preparations, are deadly to you. That is why the Soviets have a small army of propaganda experts whose job it is to spread fear and disinformation around the world. Sadly, too many well-meaning and intelligent people, even scientists who have not specialized in radiation's biological effects, have become accomplices of these Soviet disinformation specialists. They have been duped. To be free from tyranny, you must be free of misconceptions, especially misconceptions that have been deliberately spread by people who do not want this nation defended from Soviet attack. You must know the truth about your enemies and also about the technology with which they threaten you. Now, I will blow holes in these Tier 1 security blanket. In the epilogue I will discuss how the probabilities fall out and why, if you act, you can do it. Your enemy is Red China. You and Russia are already allies. So be prepared to change your perspective further. IT should be an asset in convincing your congressman. So be it. Dharma, a break please. Ashta to stand by. Out. Chapter 19. Rec number 2, Ashta. Thursday, September 14, 1989, 10:10 a.m., Year 3, Day 029. Thank you for the intermission. Ashta returned and ready to resume transmission. Self-protection and expedient shelter. The facts are: 1. The nuclear threat to each individual American is immediate and severe, no matter whom the enemy. 2. Protection from this threat can be provided by known techniques. In view of these facts, there are two rational positions: a call for immediate national civil defense and strategic defense deployment, or a call for individually financed self-protection and expedient shelter. These are respectively the optimistic and pessimistic positions. Once you are sheltered in such manner, friends of Earth, we will show you how to protect yourselves from all that comes after that. How to have livestock and place them in protection, etc. But, you would continue to thrive in business and market exchange while you wait. You have a major market and economic collapse headed your way imminently. You must act quickly and get your resources in hand for these installations. You must somehow interrupt the massive flow of money leaving your country and lost to your banking system, see spiral to economic disaster, immediately. You will not have a base for anything very shortly. You will, however, have it longer to some extent if you stop the outflow now. Further, if your economy could be somewhat boosted by production of goods for your shelter system, you might stave off the monetary collapse a bit longer in order to get a foundation under you whereby you can survive that potential devastation and buy additional time. If you are to manage to survive as a nation and a people, you must reclaim that which is yours. You can if you choose to do so. Optimistic government participation. On the optimistic side, through enlightenment of your people and the intervention of we who are sent forth from the outer cosmos, by God, your nation's voters can be convinced to get the government to provide what is required for your defense instead of dribble it away to the corners of the wind and for the elite traders. With that defense, you will deter nuclear war. You might even prevent it. If not, at least your civilization and your values will survive such an event. If, on the other hand, one assumes that your government will continue to leave you defenseless and will not be convinced to do otherwise, and if one assumes that nuclear war is inevitable and cannot be deterred, then all that is left is pessimism and emergency self-help. Self-help. By means of this approach, highly motivated individuals can save their own lives, at least for a short period during and after a nuclear attack. Unfortunately, only a small fraction of your people are likely to survive nuclear war through only self-protection unless you have massive and every individual participation. Would it be hopeless? Perhaps, in that scenario, for your peoples are evil infected, addicted as a whole and show very little potential to change unless mightily motivated. Nevertheless, the authors felt they would not have completed their contribution without a few paragraphs about a self-protection plan for civilians. A family blast shelter along the lines described herein can be constructed at a one-of-a-kind cost of about $2,000 per person. A lot less than the cost of a cheap auto. It should be located under or very near the family home. The protection and habitability requirements are, of course, qualitatively the same as for the 150-person shelters. Crowded occupancy can be avoided in family shelters, which should have at least 10 to 20 square feet per person. Additional protection can be provided by locating the home itself in a remote, rural area. This will require substantial commitments of time and money and perhaps substantial alterations in one's life. It is important, however, not to make survival such a way of life that it detracts substantially from one's quality of life. Investment in nuclear war survival should be like buying an insurance policy. Spend the money, get the insurance, hope you'll not ever need it, then go on about your life. But you must understand that there are great earth upheavals headed your way and you will need these shelters. Also, if each family home has security facilities, it is so much more comfortable and emotionally supportive for the family unit. Further, you will be prepared for any event that should unexpectedly strike you of a natural disaster type manifestation. Last resort dig. If no community shelter and no personal family shelter is built prior to nuclear attack, then there is still one last desperate action available to you. Procure a shovel, buy a copy of Crescent Carney's Nuclear War Survival Skills, and hope and pray that the enemy will be so foolish as to give you 24 to 48 hours warning. Well, hope your own government will is more appropriate. Follow the book's instruction, drive out into the country, and dig. Most of you won't make it. For the million who might make it under such circumstances, however, the effort should provide some additional months of hard life. Maybe you can even find a way to fit into the tyranny that will come during the following years. In any case, saved lives are saved lives, and the patriotic and dedicated scientists and engineers who developed these expedient survival techniques can be justly proud that they did what they could to save their country and at least a few of their countrymen. You can save the entire bunch of you if you will but get up, get angry at the right people who are responsible for your plight, and go to work. Targets. Lastly, let us speak of targets. The authors aim at the Soviets. It does not matter who might be your enemy, all facts are appropriate, therefore Ashta will refer to enemy. Further, the book uses the worst possible type of attack by your enemy. Since your enemies are capable of this attack, you must be prepared for it. 2. The proposed shelter system will protect you even in the worst case scenario. 3. America will still be a very desirable place to live even following such an attack. If you have the shelters. You must realize, however, that the nature of the enemy attack will be determined by your defenses. The worst case attack will be used only if you build no defenses. If you build very good defenses, they will not attack at all. This is true in general, and is also true of particular targets if an attack comes. For example, your homes will be targets only if you are inside of them. They want to kill you, not destroy your houses as such. They want to claim your houses if at all possible. Your enemies are extremely overcrowded in one instance, and short of housing in the other. The enemy has large groups of scientists working on a crash program to develop biological weapons. These weapons would have very little use against military targets. Their primary aim would be the extermination of civilians without damage to civilian possessions like homes, automobiles, and industrial tools. Do any of you remember Iraq this past year? Since America can only be defeated if the people of America are destroyed, the Soviets will attempt to kill those people wherever they are found. If you are in your homes may be smashed in order to kill you. If you are in shelters, then there would be no reason to destroy your property. The best way to ensure that any enemy attack would be limited to military targets, is to place your civilians beyond the reach of enemy weapons. Probable attack strategy and deterrent possibilities. 1. In your current, complete undefended condition. The enemy attack would be a massive bombardment of your cities, towns, industry, and military targets. Ground bursts would be used against military and civilian airports and missile silos. Fallout from these ground bursts and the effects of the air burst attack on your civilians would kill at least 80% of all of the American people. 2. If you deploy passive defense in the form of shelters now, the enemy attack might be deterred. If it came, it would be limited to ground bursts against airports and missile silos and air bursts against other military targets. 3. If you deploy shelters and deploy off-the-shelf anti-aircraft and anti-missile technology now the enemy attack would be deterred until they build offensive weapons that can penetrate your anti-aircraft and anti-missile defenses. 4. If you deploy shelters, if you deploy off-the-shelf anti-aircraft and anti-missile technology now, and proceed with a serious program of advanced technology for strategic defense which is deployed as it becomes available, the enemy will probably never attack with nuclear weapons. War would only come by accident or by terrible error. If, however, war did come, you would be quite safe. Even in an all-out war, only a few targets in America might be damaged as a result of occasional defense leakage or terrorist infiltration. In the age of biological weapons to come, your shelters would still help you. The filtered air and button-up capability would allow you to wait out a biological attack and to subdivide yourselves into 1 to 2 million separate biological targets. Impossible to get you all. All we can do is assist in presenting the truths to you. What you do with the information is most certainly up to you. You can survive nicely to have a bit of a future, without care and sheltering, you will not. Just as you would perish, if you went unclothed into 50 degrees below zero, whether you only need take the proper precautions. Now you have been given the facts. Check them out for yourselves. From your own Earth facilities you have been duped. Earth brother, I would think you might be most irritated. So be it, and salut. I am Commander Ashta. Let us close this portion, Dharma. I will return later to pen the addendums. Thank you most humbly for the hours of work and time put into this document. Oh, would it be that thy brothers would hear us and take action in their own behalf? Let it be, Kila, for we do what we can and man must act for himself. Salut. Out. Sample letter. Rec number 3 Ashta. Friday, September 15, 1989, 9:40 a.m., Year 3, Day 030. Sample letter for your local, state and national political leaders, supervisors, city/town fathers, senators, congressmen, and representatives. Please query each and all. Addresses and names can be gotten from your local library. Date. Dear. I am extremely concerned about the lack of any civil defense or survival shelter systems for U.S. citizens. Red China has a massive tunnel system, the Soviet Union has a massive system for which we have supplied equipment and food, and even Switzerland has a massive one. We have nothing. A nuclear attack can be safely survived if we but had a shelter system. I request to know if you plan to support legislation for the immediate construction of a civil defense shelter system along the lines described in the book Survival is Only 10 Feet from Hell, by Commander Ashta, America West Distributor 6992 El Camino Real # 104-335 Carlsbad, California 92009 and Fighting Chance, by Arthur Robinson and Gary North Oregon Institute of Science and Medicine, P.O. Box 1279 Cave Junction or 97523. If you do, I request any information as to how I might contribute service. If you do not intend to create or support such legislation, I, as a citizen and your constituent, demand to know why not. If your objection is that it costs too much, I would like to know which programs you regard as more important than protecting the lives of this nation's population from enemy attack. Without people, you will have no other projects to support at any cost. I demand survival. The politicians and incompetent ones in control have now denied me, and my fellow citizens, the very right to survival of life itself. I demand action in behalf of the populace of this country. I am eagerly awaiting an immediate response. Sincerely yours. Name. Address. City/state/zip. Telephone.